It needs to be bloody. Noel sat backward on his chair and his straight back between his splayed legs. In spite of the chair's cheap tan plastic and the rest of the room's less than upscale ambience, Noel managed to look cool and confident. Sam wondered how he pulled that off so easily. Feeling like a nerd that he was, Sam tried to adjust his long legs and fit another in the cheap plastic chairs. He disagreed with Noel. Horror's not in the blood, it's in the creep factor. Creep factor? Noel repeated. It's a technical term. Noel nodded. I must have dozed off when Grimley was talking about that. More likely you were staring at Darla Stewart. You make a point, and we're not getting anywhere. Sam sighed and shifted in his seat again. His legs were cramping. He was only hungry, and he was pretty sure he and Noel were the only pair in the room. He hadn't come up with an idea yet. Although Sam's back was the rest of the space, he could hear the jumble of the eight-shushed conversations going on over gray-walled room. The classroom had a little of a muffle and a tense babble. A few folding tables, some plastic chairs, a portable closet packed with sound equipment, and a viewing screen. Though, on an open door behind Noel, Sam could see a project room, which had open space for filming scenes, a green screen, and several shelves stuffed with full more AV equipment. The conversations between Sam's classmates were mostly incomprehensible because they were taking place in the cautious whispers and mumbles. Less than brilliant idea would get stolen. Occasionally, though, someone would get excited and Sam would make out a word. Serial killer, zombie, vampire, demon. The words he heard were some tension on his shoulders. If those are other teams' ideas, maybe he and Noel still had a chance. They didn't have an idea yet, but at least they had a done-to-death idea. You have to admit he used a fine caboose, Noel said. Sam stretched all 37 inches of his legs and stared at his huge feet. Sam's both legs and his feet defied a normal proportions, and he would have gone to 6'5" body. According to his chart the doctor showed him once, his legs would have been about 34.5 inches long. He would think 2.5 extra inches wouldn't be much, but apparently it would make Sam look like a stork or a heron or a crane. He heard all three from various unkind kids, and those inches were enough to make him prone to grand displays of ungainly clumsiness, which prevented him from turning his height into something useful like, say, on a basketball court. All Sam's legs did, as far as he could tell, was get in his way. If to Sam, huh? Looks like we're lagging here, dude. Noel gestured out into the room behind Sam's shoulders. Sam looked around. 4 teams were leaving the room. 2 were getting ready to leave. Only 2 other teams were still stalking. Great. Actually, it is kind of great, Sam thought. Better than silence. He looked at his watch. Our classroom was open for another half hour. They had 30 minutes to come up with something. Would you like to get off the chair? Nicole flung his foot out and kicked the side of Sam's feet. You're squirming so much, you remind me of my nephew when he needs to take a piss. I can't get comfortable. My heart bleeds. There you go with the blood again. Noel grinned. It's all about the blood. Seriously, we need a thing. Hey, Noel's blasty posture disappeared. He glanced over the remaining teams. Seriously, dude, get off the chair. Come over here. Noel exited his chair with an enviable grace, and he took a couple steps to the wall outside him. Sliding down the wall, he folded his normal length legs, preferably perched to a 6'1" height. To the meditative position, he motioned to Sam again, then Sam hesitated. So Sam gave up on the too small chair and awkwardly put his skinny body on the floor in front of Noel. He had to admit his legs were happier. Noel leaned forward and spoke softly. Do you remember Freddy Fazbear's pizza? Noel's breath smelled like licorice. Sam leaned away. Why? Nicole lowered her voice into a whisper so faint Sam had trouble understanding him. All he had was creepy animate. But that's close enough. Oh, those! Sam felt goosebumps on his arms. He was glad he was wearing long-sleeve t-shirts so Sam couldn't see how the mention of the characters affected him. Yeah, those are all creepy, all right. Thinking about pizza gave me an idea, Noel said. What idea? Noel gazed out of the classroom again. Sam checked it too. Only one other team was left. It was infamous Darla, her fine caboose, and her friend Amber, who actually was a nice one of the 2 girls. They had their heads together and seemed to be having a whispered disagreement. They were paying any attention to Noel and Sam. My idea is to write a horror story plot around a creepy animatronic of our own, Noel whispered to Sam. Sam, edgy just thinking about Freddy Fazbear's animatronic characters, had to admit it was a great idea. I like it. Awesome! Noel held out his fist and Sam bumped it. So, what would you be a good character, Noel asked. You're asking me? You're the genius. Sam wasn't a genius, but he had good grades. Some people, like Noel, who tended to be a bit of a screw-off, got those things confused. Sam leaned back and took his feet again. A good animatronic character, a good animatronic character, a good animatronic... Sam looked at his legs. Stock, heron, crane. How about a bird? Not a chick, obviously. Something more obviously intimidating. That's not bad. What about a goose? A goose? Said repeatedly out loud. He laughed. Don't laugh. A goose attacked me when I was little. I can still bear the scars. Seriously? Noel lifted up his left leg in his faded jeans. He pointed a white score below his knee. It bit you? Well, no. It chased me while I was on my bike. I fell off my bike and cut my knee. Sam laughed again. Noel dropped his pant leg. Sorry, Sam said. I can see you're traumatized. Noel stared blankly in the middle distance. You have no idea. I probably need therapy. I don't think you want a horror film about an animatronic goose, Sam said. You're right. We need creep factor. What's a creepy bird? You guys win a rotten egg prize? Amber called from across the room. Saving the best for last, Noel said, holding his clasped hands above his head for the victory gesture. Amber said, You're an idiot. Darla said nothing, and the two girls left the room, talking their poetry, reading their English class. She likes you, Sam said. She thinks I'm an idiot, so she likes you, and she knows you. Noel kicked Sam's foot. Sam returned to the problem. Oh, I got it. He sat up and said in so ominous tone, Once upon a mere night dreary, huh? Oh, come on. You're not that much of an idiot. I might be. Quoth the Raven, Sam prompted. Huh? Oh, wait, I know this. The poem of the scary dude. Poe. Oh, the Raven. Yeah, only no, not quite. The Raven, obviously, is a cliche. A crow would be, too. I'm thinking of a blackbird. It was the same connotation, but blackbirds are a little smaller. They're songbirds, and we actually have more of them in the area than we do crows or ravens. How do you know this stuff? I'm a genius, remember? No, I'd forgotten, because I'm an idiot. They both laughed. Okay, so we got a creepy blackbird, Noel said. Now what? Never ever had one of them stare at you? Sam asked. And me really stare at you? There was one in the quad the other day. I was thinking about skipping Psych 201, and the bird kept looking at me. I felt so gifty I went to class. Sam snapped his fingers. That's dumb, but I think you're onto something. What? Guilt. Idiot here. Remember? You need to spell it out. Our animatronic, the Blackbird, Sam gave the name finger quotes. You'll get to confess your darkest secrets, and then when you do, it comes to punish you for your sins. It never lets you off the hook. Never lets you rest. We can have the Blackbird basically hound some poor dude to death. Will there be blood? Noel asked. You're a ghoul. Sam chewed on his lower lip. Actually, a little blood might not be bad. If you prick us, do we not bleed? Wow, Sam said. You're quoting Shakespeare? Maybe you're an idiot acting his own act. I'll never tell. The Blackbird will make you tell, Sam said with a wicked laugh. Sam and Noel finally finished plotting the movie just in time for the next class. Even though he was arguably too tall for the role, Sam thought it would be fun to play like a blackbird. Noel, who honestly didn't dress up like a bird, and Sam's size didn't make a blackbird even scarier. That left Noel with the part of being the poor, beloved, guilty guy. I can do pathetic, Noel said proudly. Later the day, he shared a pizza. Well, you can, Sam agreed. When Noel and Sam were only halfway through their pepperoni and jalapeno pizza, Amber came into a brick-walled restaurant and spotted them. Do you have room for one more? She pointed to the black vinyl booth seat Noel sat on. Noel scooted over. Sure, just keep your mitts off our pizza. I don't want your stinking pizza, Amber said. Sam grinned at Amber as he flagged down a server and ordered a soda. So, what's your movie about, she asked. Why would you like to know, Noel said, eyes narrow in suspicion. Amber sniffed, as if I was just making conversation. What's yours about? I was about knitting. Her smirk said she was feeling pretty good about her project. You serious? Noel said. Absolutely. Will there be blood? Noel asked. Sam laughed and shook his head. Plenty, Amber said. Noel pointed at Sam. See? Must have blood. Sam ignored him. The pizza place must have crowded and nosy. Above the smells of spicy pepperoni sauce and tomato sauce, the small place thrummed to the beat of the classic rock coming over the overhead speakers. Sam waved a few friends and then watched Amber and watched Noel. Sam wasn't sure why Noel didn't ask Amber out. He was cute, not Sam's type. A few girls he'd gone out with were taller and more serious than Amber. But Noel liked girls he could laugh with. And girls seemed to like Noel's blue eyes, athlete body, and scruffy blonde hair. Amber, also blonde, blue-eyed, and in good shape, looked good sitting next to Noel. He even dressed like she did, usually wearing fitted jeans, white shirts, and then a weathered allowed it leather jackets. Sam blinked when Amber leaped across the table, blowing a paper wrapping off the end of the straw and toward his face. He told me your movie is about a bird. I think he's lying. Sam smiled. Actually, he's not. You mean like the birds? No snorted and waved a slice of pizza around. We're not that derivative. Oh, big word, Amber said. Sam laughed. Actually, they're like being a little derivative, aren't they? They're piggybacking off of Freddy Fazbear's pizza. The hair on his back, Sam's back's neck prickled. Why did that happen every time he thought of the place? Sam pulled out his wallet and threw some cash at the table. I need to get started. On what? Amber asked. We'll never tell, Noel said. Amber smacked his arm. Ah, Sam thought. True love. Many of Sam's classmates thought it was pathetic that he lived at home, but he loved it. First, he got along great with his parents, who were supportive and fun. Second, he was more privacy and space than he had in a dorm. His parents had remodeled the basement into a sprawling apartment for him. His own kitchenette, bathroom, sleeping area, and the space for his film projects. And third, he liked getting away from the campus at the end of the day. He could only take so much of the constant chatter, scholastic and social angst, and the frantic pace. Besides, he had no use of partying. Working on his projects was more fun than drinking and acting like a moron. Sam's house was about 2 miles from the college, and an easy distance to walk, which was good, since he didn't have a car. He enjoyed the walk home, too, and it allowed to follow the railroad tracks as laying along the top of the steep. forced to drop off into a rocky trench and culvert in a separated farmland. The college's expansive acreage. Sam liked to pretend he was an old-timey vagabond, strolling along, waiting for a hop on a tree and to travel faraway adventures. In fact, Sam was working on a screenplay about a fright hoppers in the mid-20th century. He knew it was a tough lifestyle, but it held romantic appeal for him. Maybe because he never felt like he fit in with the mainstream life. And of course, his current project wasn't going to help with that. 3 days later, after Sam and Noel started on their horror movie plot, Sam sat on the special order desk chair his mom had gotten for him, and the huge craft table in the basement. Covering the pale blonde wood table were piles and piles of long black feathers. Luckily, Sam's dad was a merchandiser who had a gift for finding rare items. He would locate pretty much everything Sam had never needed for his project. Today, his dad had met Sam in the driveway with several crates of feathers, which he helped Sam transport down the basement stairs. Before leaving the basement, Sam's dad sang out, "Bye-bye, Blackbird." "Very funny, Dad," Sam called up the stairs. He smiled an answering chuckle and began pulling feathers from the crates. Sam's idea for the Blackbird costume was to weave long black feathers into a netted black fabric and then he sewn back in the black body hugging suit, like a feathered body wrap. It was going to require a lot of feather placing, affixing, and sewing. So Sam queued up a bluesy jazz and got to work. At 11:30 p.m., Sam startled when his phone rang. It was Noel. "Amber asked me out." "Good. I thought I was supposed to do the asking out. Have you ever heard of women's lib?" Vaguely, but I've come to the family of male chauvinistas. I'm still learning curve." "What did you say to her?" Sam went, stabbing his finger in the needle for the 100th time. "I said yes. I could think fast enough to say anything else. Besides, I've decided her caboose might be as fine as Darla's. That's important. How's the costume coming?" "Good, I think. I should have it done by tomorrow afternoon. We're working on it set. Such a tragedy." "Which is a tragedy," Noel complained. "The set? No, working on it tomorrow. Tomorrow's a Saturday. Saturday's for frolicking. And this is the only time we get the shooting studio signed to us," Sam reminded him. "A pity." Sam ignored him, hung up the phone, and returned to his sewing feathers. A few hours later, he was putting the finishing touches on the costume, attaching a head, two beady yellow and black eyes, and a tiny pointed orange beak. Even though he was exhausted, he donned the suit and stood in front of the full-length mirror behind the bathroom door. Sam nearly shrieked when he saw himself, because he wasn't looking at him anymore. He was not him. He was tempted to tear off the suit and find himself again. He felt like his creation assimilated him. He'd been transformed. He couldn't see any part of Sam. All he saw was a monster-sized Blackbird. His design had come out just how he envisioned it. The oversized proportions made the suit look almost kid-friendly, but the wide, dead eyes and dripping midnight feathers were ridiculously unsettling. He had no doubt that poor Floyd, the character in the movie, would seriously regret his dark secrets and came face-to-face with the Blackbird. Thanks to the massive quantity of feathers his dad got for him, Sam had not been able to approximate the full belly shape of the Blackbird. He fashioned the curve of the belly and come all the way down to below his knees so the bird's legs started at the shins, conveying realistic proportions. His mom had helped him with the feet part of the costume. His mom, who loved all things crafty, found a pair of stretch-to-fit water shoes and extra large black tights in the scales pattern. So she also left Sam how to shape the bird toes out of the black rubbers, into which he had been dark deep groves. Together, they used sculpting epoxy to create bird claws, which Sam inserted into the rubber toes. He attached the bird feet into the water shoes so it made it look like the toes extended out naturally. At first glance, Sam was a huge blackbird, and he was beyond creepy. Now they just needed a little blood. Sam laughed. Maybe then Noel would shut up about the blood. Noel and Sam met Saturday afternoon and designed the movie set. Noel would rather have been playing volleyball with his Freddy brothers, but in spite of the nonchalant posturing, film class mattered to him. Plus, he was stoked about their movie. When Noel arrived at the shooting studio, Sam immediately showed him a picture of the Blackbird suit. Noel was glad Sam wasn't looking at him when Noel first saw the picture. He was pretty sure he wasn't pale. It felt like he'd gone pale. He'd suddenly gotten cold and weak and shaky. What the heck was happening? When Sam turned to ask Noel what he thought, Noel bent over and pretended to tie his too. "That's rad. Above and beyond, dude." "Yeah, thanks. I kind of freaked myself out when I looked in the mirror," Sam said. Noel rose, pretty sure his normal coloring was back. Leave it to Sam to admit he was freaked out. Sam had no clue how to be cool. He was just too honest, too open, and to himself to get within the safe sifting distance of cool. "Okay, so we're thinking bedroom, right?" Sam stood in the middle of the set. "Nightmares, night terrors, cold sweats, paranoid self-defense, panicked phone calls. Yep, I'm thinking the ultimate in the film would be a one-room set." Noel pretended to speak into a megaphone. "Step right up, folks. Get our creep factor right here. One-stop shopping." Sam laughed. Noel grinned. Sam wasn't bad-looking when he laughed. Noel thought Sam's problem was that he's always looked up serious. So, with strong features and a wide mouth and a sharp jawline, Sam always came across as harsh and angry, even when he wasn't. His face was like one of those carvings on totem poles. In fact, when Noel had met Sam at the beginning of the semester in the previous year, he asked Sam if he was a totem pole. The dude was so tall he wore a lot of black, red, and tan. I have something on my face?" Sam played. "Just your ugly mug." Noel gave him a playful punch and let Sam know he was kidding. "Come on, man." Sam tossed Noel a screwdriver. "Let's get to work." Over the next 2 hours, they built furniture, hung pictures, made a bed, and argued about which personal and decor items they went where and why. Sam seemed to be particularly entrenched opinion about the dirty socks. This movie be airing your dirty laundry and what happens to you when you do. The dirty socks should have been a prominent place for the visual narrative, not to be tossed off to the side, Sam said. Noel held off his hands. I give another half hour. Noel got bored. So, Sam, what's the dark secrets going to Blackbird get out of you? Sam dropped the stack of magazines he was carrying. Noel laughed. Guilt much? Sam shook his head. Coincidence. Uh-huh. Noel looked at Sam. Well, I don't have any dark secrets, Sam said. He was industrially cleaning up magazines, made Noel think Sam was hiding something. Come on, dude, spill, Noel laughed. The secret's not the magazines. Sam finished the restacking the magazines, and he straightened. He looked down at Noel. Nothing to spill. What about you? Sam was really a nerd, Noel thought. He was the kind of guy Noel really hung out with. But Sam was a genius in film class. Always hitch your wagon to the best horse, Noel's grandfather used to say. Noel's grandfather was multi-millionaire. Noel figured taking his grandfather's advice was pretty wise. Okay, Noel conceded. I'll tell you mine. He threw himself in the bed and he put his hands around his head. Hey, Sam said. Shoes. I borrowed that bread thread. Fine, Mom. Noel kicked out his shoes. Sam ignored him and started hanging curtains over the fake window. So, I'm not proud of this, Noel said. But if that's true, it might be possible. If he really was telling the truth about a dark secret, then he was a little proud of it. If it's a dark secret, I don't know why you should be proud of it, Sam said. Okay, whatever. When I was in junior high, I would have been maybe 12 or so, I guess. I was a bully. Sam turned around and gave Noel a long look. What do you mean, Sam said. You know, a bully. Noel chuckled. A pretty ruthless bully, actually. Give me an example, Sam said. What was wrong with Sam's voice? It sounded stiff. Noel looked up at the ceiling and thought back. Well, you know, the usual. Basically, I caught him as I saw him. Sam leaned against the wall and stared at Noel. I still don't get it. Noel sat up in the head. Okay, there was this really awkward fat girl, and she had all these weirdo habits. Like she would look at you in the eye, and she'd always squeezing her hands together. He had trouble talking. She didn't sputter. She just didn't have trouble figuring out how to talk. She was just weird. She had funny facial expressions when she wore the stupidest clothes I've ever seen. I mean, it looked like all she did was shop in thrift stores, not the cool ones. Her clothes never matched and stuff, so I started calling her second hand, SH for short. And then she walked down the hall, I'd go, shh. It caught on, and pretty soon everyone was doing it. Noel laughed. That was a riot, stuff like that. Oh, and then the one time she came to school wearing these high water pants. I mean, she looked so stupid, so my friends and I threw water in her face. Get it? High water? Noel laughed. And when she wore these thick glasses, it always looked like he was squinting and found her way. But I put a dead mole in her locker and asked her if she was grieving her best friend. Noel guffawed. Sometimes he just cracked himself up. He looked at Sam. Sam wasn't laughing. Sam pulled the chair they placed around the desk and floated him. You think that stuff is funny? Sam asked. Well, yeah, Noel said. Don't you? You have to admit, it's clever stuff, right? Like there's that time I got like the bucket full of burrs. That took a little while to do. It's not easy gathering burrs. But see, the girl's name is Christine Wilbur. I remember her name because of the burr thing. And that when she had a long, stringy hair, she had never washed enough. So I figured I'd do burrs for Christine Wilbur. Get it? Burr for Wilbur? Actually, an experiment. I want to see if burrs would stick to greasy hair. Of course, I have to have control, so when I threw the burrs, I also threw them at her friend, Valerie. Valerie had frizzy hair, and I'm pretty sure she washed too much. And sure enough, the burrs stuck better on Valerie than they did on Christine. I'll never forget them standing there outside in the school with a couple monkeys picking lice off each other, trying to get the burrs out of their hair. Now that's funny, Noel laughed. Sam shook his head. That's not funny. Noel raised an eyebrow but didn't stop laughing. Seriously, picture it. It's like two little monkeys. He pretended to be a monkey picking lice off another monkey. Sam frowned, stood up, and started pacing around the fake room. Noel leaned back on the bed again. He pulled out a pillow from under the bedspread and plumped it up. I just made the bed, and Sam snapped. Chill, I'll fix it when I get up. Sam kept pacing. He abruptly stopped. Unless you're blind, you have no notice I'm not a normal-looking guy, right? Noel tilted his head. You're tall, but so are a lot of my frat brothers. They're all tall and athletic, Sam said. I'm just tall. Okay. So when I was in junior high, I was already too tall for my age, and my looks looked even longer than they do now because I was so skinny. So guess what happened to me? Noel figured that Sam was bullied, but he decided to wait and let Sam tell a story. Noel knew he was being an idiot, but he wasn't stupid. I was bullied basically from the time I entered first grade until I got in the freshman year in high school. Then that year it stopped. But I can tell you those jokes you think are so funny, they're not funny to people receiving the end of them. Sam crossed his arm and glared at Noel. Noel laughed. Dude, you look like a totem pole right now. Or, no, you look like one of those wooden Indian statues. Noel sat up, crossed his arms, and intoned. How? Noel fell back in his bed and laughed. And Sam shook his head and turned around. And that's offensive. Just get this done, huh? Noel got off the bed, still grinning, and you made the bed. Maybe not as steadily as Sam had done it, but it made. And who said Floyd was composed about his bed anyways? Are you okay, dude? Noel said, and Sam was keeping his back to Noel. I'm good. Sam turned around and surveyed the room, not looking at Noel. I think we're done here. How about if we call it good for now, and I'll bring my costume from home tomorrow and we can start filming. You don't want to run through the lines now? You're the one who has the lines. I thought you said you already knew them. I do. Well, then I'd say we're done. Sam stepped over the bed and fixed Noel's messy bed-making job. Okay, Kimosabe, Noel chuckled. Sam flicked Noel a look, said, see you tomorrow, and strode out of the shooting studio. I might have gotten on one of those dude's big old nerves, Noel said to himself. Then he chuckled again and cracked himself up. Returning from his date evening with Amber, Noel sauntered down the hall into his signal room of the frat house, bobbing his head in time to the music that vibrated the walls. The speakers were on the first floor, and his on the third. But his frat brothers were partying hard tonight. The whole house shook, and also smelled like beer, knockwurst, and unwashed laundry. He wrinkled his nose. Noel didn't mind the noise, but he didn't love the smell. Noel didn't admit it to anyone, but he wasn't nearly fraternity material. He pledged the frat because his dad and granddad had been members, and he had been assumed that he'd been one too. But it was a cool frat, and Noel was all about doing what it was to be cool, and he was content. Especially since he won the room lottery at the beginning of the year, which had got him the best single room in a 3-story Tudor mansion in the house of the frat. The door Noel was stolen past flew open, and the muscular, rumpled guy with spiky hair scratched the bare belly and squinted up the bright hall lights. What time is it? He asked. Almost midnight, Noel said. You okay, Ian? Ian was a football player, a dedicated one. He was always talking about treating his body as a temple and stuff like that. He liked to walk around in his boxer shorts, showing everyone just how awesome temple it was. Noel thought Ian was a little full of himself, but he did find the guy's boxer shorts amusing. He had dozens of them, all in different colors and patterns. Tonight's boxers were white, but they were covered in bright yellow rubber ducks. Maybe it was rubber ducks that made Noel notice Ian's gray, clay-like complexion and his dark smudges under his eyes. He didn't expect someone wearing rubber ducks to look internally ill. Now sleeping lady, now this? Ian waved his hand through the throbbing beat. It was massage the walls of the building. The music keeps you awake? Yeah, it doesn't keep you awake? Nah, nothing keeps me awake. Seriously? Seriously, I can't sleep through pretty much anything. I'm envious. I have trouble sleeping every night. A massive guilty conscience, Noel said. Ian's eyes widened. What? Chill, just kidding. Noel laughed and punched Ian on the cement he called an upper arm. Ian gave Noel a weak smile and stumbled across the hall into the bathroom. Noel rubbed his knuckles and headed down the hall to his room. Noel arrived back to the shooting studio the noon and next day. Even though it was Sunday, he generally spent his Sundays watching sports on TV and playing intramural ball with his frat brothers. He figured that he would get to the studio on time and mend things with Sam. Even though Sam hadn't said much, he was clearly pretty upset the day before. Noel might have pushed a little too far. He knew sometimes he did that. When Noel discovered Sam wasn't in the studio yet, he stretched out of bed to wait. 45 minutes later, he was still lying there. He closed his eyes and must have fallen asleep because an amber charge in the room. He was so startled he almost fell out of the bed. Did you hear? Huh? He sat up. Hear what? He rubbed his face. What time is it? It's 2:30. The news about Sam. What news about Sam? Amber hugged herself. They think he might have been hit by a train. He brushed at puffy eyes. What? Apparently he made the costume for your movie, one with the black feathers, and they found feathers all over the tracks, like 2 miles, all over the place. Noel shot off the bed. Is he okay? Amber shook her head. That's the thing. They don't know. He's missing. I've got to go. Noel charged past Amber and tore out the film studio's building. The railroad tracks ran along the back side of the campus, behind the cafeteria, rec center, and swimming pool complex. They were about half a mile from the field studies building, jogging past kids throwing frisbee in the quad and others studying the shade of the campus' big cedar trees. Noel ignored several greetings and concentrated on getting to the tracks. Hit by a train? Missing. Noel couldn't believe it. Then Noel reached the tracks, his stomach clenched at the sight of a half a dozen cop cars pulled alongside the tracks and a couple of numbered cops walking the area. Their gazes are on the ground, pushing into a relatively docile crowd hanging around the crime scene tape guarded by the large balding cop. Noel approached the cop and said, I'm Sam's friend. Have you found him yet? Who are you? The cop asked. Sam's friend, Noel repeated. Noel Markman. Noel saw no reason to keep his name a secret. He hadn't done anything wrong, had he? You know something about what happened here? The cop asked. I only know that my friend told me, but that's because of the feathers. You think Sam was hit by a train and you can't find him? The cop eyed him. Could the guy have been more cliche? A big gut, shiny and surrounded by a black fringe of hair, dark eyes squinted to try to intimidate Noel with thick hands resting on his gun belt. A cop had walked off a TV set, except this cop smelled like hair gel and cheap cologne. At least cops on TV were unscented. Noel eyed the cop right back. If you don't have something to tell us, Noel said, toying with his nightstick, get back there and get everyone else. Noel didn't move. He leaned right against the seat past cop. Even from there, he could see black feathers flying over the tracks. The cop shifted to the stands, and that's when Noel noticed a tall couple standing between one of the police cars and a bright red Chevy Suburban. They were talking to a guy in a baggy suit. Noel bit the inside of his cheek so he wasn't groaning out loud. It was Sam's parents, Paul and Molly O'Neill. He met them when they threw a party to celebrate the previous semester's completed film projects. Really nice couple. Both are tall and dark like Sam. Although Sam's mom wasn't as tall, she wasn't as tall as Noel, though. Hefty, too. If there was something called Mom League in the NFL, she would have played. Call me Molly, she said when Noel met her. First, O'Neill is my mother-in-law. Noel remembered Molly with a great smile and an even better laugh. Right now, she wasn't laughing. She was crying. Her head pressed against her husband's shoulder. Noel clenched his fist in frustration. How could he help? Molly looked up and he spotted Noel. Noel, is that you? The cops were standing with Sam's parents motioned for the TV cop to let Noel pass. Noel didn't stop himself from giving the cop a smirk as he went past, but his smirk died a quick death when he saw Molly pinch the white face. He rushed to Noel and he threw her arms around him. You heard. Oh, Noel, he's missing. But they say he probably couldn't have survived. Her voice broke, and he turned back to Paul. Paul held Molly with one arm and offered his other hand to Noel to shake. Holding Molly so close, Paul said, it's because of the way the feathers in the costume were scattered. They think he's probably grazed by the train and had been thrown clear, but they haven't found him. Noel frowned and watched a black feather scuttle over the ground near the rails. But that's when he noticed blood on the rail, on the opposite side of the tracks. Not a lot of blood, just one smear. That was a big smear. A lot of police officers taking a picture of it. Blood, note that. There had to be blood, he kept telling Sam. Noel lingered by the tracks with Sam's distraught parents for the rest of the afternoon. By then, the police had declared Sam missing, presumed dead. Multiple search parties had been sent out. Noel had been part of one, but he found nothing, no one found anything. When Noel left the tracks, he returned to his room. He let Molly and Paul hug him, even though he didn't want to be hugged. Being near them was like standing next to a loudspeaker for emotions. Their grief was amplified by their facial expressions and memories about Sam. The clamorous sense of loss was more than Noel could handle. He could stand about being around Molly and the cops anymore. He had to get away. Once Noel started walking away from the scene of the tracks, he couldn't stop. He couldn't process what had happened. How could Sam be dead? Was it my fault? Why do you think that? He didn't do anything. But it isn't true, is it? He kind of did do something. He was a bit of a jackass the day before, and Sam had been upset. He tried to hide it, but Noel could tell Sam was pissed when he left the studio. So it had been upset and made him careless. But it happened this morning, not last night. He told himself. Sam would have been upset this morning, right? Noel wasn't convincing himself. Why did he have to be such a jerk sometimes? Yo, Noel, get along. Noel looked up to see instrumental buddies holding a football and pointing. Noel dutifully trotted in the direction indicated and caught a somewhat wobbly spiral after juggling it a couple times. He was about to throw it back, intending to return the upstaging perfect spiral, but his gaze, he had brought his arm forward, landed in a large black shape just at the edge of the trees. Noel let go of the ball and flopped all over the place before landing 50 feet from his target. Wuss, Noel's friend called. Noel ignored him. What was he just seen? Noel continued to ignore his friend, who was now shouting endearing comments about Noel's throwing ability. Noel hadn't been seeing what he thought he'd seen, had he? When Noel reached the trees, he looked up into the sagging branches and down to the tangled underbrush. He saw nothing out of the ordinary. It must have been in his imagination. All that talk of black feathers and Sam's costume was messing with his head. A little after 6, Noel's stomach came unclenched enough to remind him that he hadn't eaten before he had gone to the shooting studio. He needed food. So, he headed to the cafeteria. Not much of what served there could be called food, but he was hungry enough to eat pretty much anything at this point. The cafeteria was only half full, as the usual on Sundays. A lot of students went their way the weekends, and even more ate out. Usually only nerds were around about now. Hey, Noel hadn't turned to identify the speaker. It was Amber. He wasn't sure what to say to her. Their last exchange felt like years ago. He must have come looking for an update about Sam. Noel turned. Hey, I never see you here on Sundays. Noel let out a sigh of relief at the sight of sarcasm, and she managed to slide in pretty much everything that came out of her mouth. Even when sarcasm was required, she wasn't sure he could talk about Sam right now. That's because I've never been here on Sundays. So, you're not here now? Obviously. Amber rolled her eyes. So is your clone going to get in line, or is it going to stand getting in the way? Noel going to help himself. He grinned. He'll get in line, just so he doesn't put you out. Nice of him. He's actually a pretty nice guy. Noel stepped back and motioned for Amber to go ahead of him. You should give you lessons. Amber winked as she passed him. Noel followed Amber through the line, putting some of his and some of that. He had no idea what he was putting on his tray. He was already distracted by what had happened to Sam. Plus, he was trying to puzzle out what he'd seen by the trees. And now Amber was befuddling him. He only recently figured out she might like her. They'd gone on their first date the night before. It had been good, but today it had been kind of wiped of the day of mine. Should I have called her by now? It would have been nice, Amber said. What? It just said, should I call her by now? I did. You did. He gave him a sideways glance. That had to be evidence of the whacked out mental state. Noel decided maybe he could stop thinking completely. Finding himself at a big round table covered in crumbs and smeared with something red, Noel sat down. He stared at the red smear. Surely not blood, but it had been ketchup. Why did he have blood on the brain? Noel glanced at Amber, who wasn't sure had said anything out loud. Apparently not. She was putting blue cheese dressing on a big salad. The cafeteria had a third full. Conversations were muted, and silverware dish face-offs were intermediate. Outside the wall-to-wall windows where the quad was emptying, the sun was dripping behind the tops of the trees where Noel thought he'd seen nothing. I saw nothing, he told himself. Noel looked at the tray. He blinked. Somehow he managed to get sauerkraut, beets, mashed potatoes, 3 dinner rolls without butter, 2 dill pickles, and 3 kinds of pie. Are you pregnant? Amber was eyeing his tray too. Apparently, Noel picked up a spoon. Realizing he'd gotten a fork, he dug into the mashed potatoes of it all right in the world. He noticed that the cafeteria smelled like beef stew. It was an entree. Was that an entree you missed? Amber chewed when he put down a fork. I'm sorry about earlier. For once, and her words were free of sarcasm. Earlier? When I told you about Sam. I shouldn't have dropped it on you the way I did. Noel grabbed the glass and took a drink of what it was and to wash down the gluey mashed potatoes. He discovered he had gotten sweet iced tea. He hated sweet iced tea. It's okay. Amber put her hand on Noel's arm. No, it's not. I'm sorry. I didn't realize you two were so close. Noel shot a look at her. Was she being sarcastic again? No, judging from her little crimp between her brows, she was concerned. We're not that, Noel began, and he realized that, yeah, he was pretty close to Sam. It started out as a complete mismatch, assigned to work on each other. Noel was rushing his fraternity. Sam lived on his parents. Noel was cool. Sam seemed to go out of his way not to be cool. So screening the most military haircut, his crisply ironed shirts, thanks to Molly, and that legal briefcase he always carried instead of a backpack. You're not? Amber asked. Noel shook his head. Yeah, I guess we've gotten sort of close. He's kind of a strange dude, but he's smart, and he's funny. He's a nice guy. Like you? Amber said. Noel frowned at her. He stood up so abruptly his knee hit the table. All the dishes were out on the trays. His tea sloshed. I've got to go. Amber looked at him. It's like deja vu, huh? She waved him away. Call me when you find your brain. Okay. Noel strode from the table and dumped his tray in the return area. The uneaten food turned him to yearn glance from one of the round women, the baronets, who had worked in the cafeteria. He didn't care. He just had to. What was that? Noel stopped just outside the doors of the cafeteria and stared down the hall. He looked the other way too, and then he turned to look behind him. He rubbed his eyes and checked the area again. Nothing was out of the ordinary. Dirty beige floor, pale yellow walls, posters waving for a space in the overcrowded bulletin board that ran along the wall. A few students strolling in and out of the cafeteria. Nothing to see here, folks. Yeah, so why was Noel sure he'd spotted something big and black flutter around the corner at the end of the hall? And that's what it was, that noise. Noel tilted his head and listened. It sounded rhythmic rustling, a sort of whispery sound like wet feathers being dragged along the floor. Noel trotted out of the cafeteria building, stopped, bent over, and took a couple big breaths of fresh air outside. You okay? No. Noel looked up. One of his frat brothers, Steve, stood by the bottom of the stairs, his arm draped around a pretty red-headed girl. Yeah, I'm fine. No, you say so, Steve said. Noel lifted his hand, and Steve and his girls wandered off. Noel headed for the frat house. Noel sat on his bed, his legs spread out and his hands loosened in his lap. He rolled his head around, listening to his neck crack. He took several deep breaths. When you're tense, adopt a relaxed posture, loosen your muscles, and breathe deeply, his mother taught him when he was little. He was really worked up with something. Tell your body how you feel, and he'll come along for the ride. Usually that works pretty well, but not this time for a good reason. The situation is a little beyond old-school relaxation techniques. Leaving the cafeteria and getting into his room, Noel had seen something. Not something, but something following him 4 times. 4 times. Something, but what? 4 times Sam had heard a weird sound, a cross between the sound of the wind and the fluttering noise combined with a regularly spaced airy thumps. No matter how many times he'd tried to tell himself that he was hearing some kind of mechanical contraption or some sort of air conditioning or fan unit attached to one of the buildings on campus, he couldn't convince himself that it was a lie. The truth was that he was hearing the sound of feathers, lots of them, brushing over the ground and grazing the edge of the trees in the building. It might have been easier to believe the lies about the sound if he had been seen a mammoth lurching well of the feathers rippling just past the edge of the peripheral vision. 4 times he'd seen the sinister forms billowing in and out of between the trees and the buildings. Well, seen was a bit of overstatement. He actually wasn't sure what his eyes had told him. The word seen implied the direct vision of something. Noel hadn't had that. He had the idea of seeing something, but the more he kicked around the idea, the more he became convinced that he had seen something. Something had toyed with his senses, something just beyond his reach, and confident visual surety. That something was been massive, black, and feathery, and there it was again. A larger shape darkened Noel's small west-facing window, blotting out the stinking sun for just an instant. Noel only caught it for a corner of his eye again, but it was there. Noel bent over and put his hand in his hand. Oh man, oh man, oh man. He straightened up. Get a grip, he ordered himself. Taking a deep breath, he looked around his room. Noel might have looked just sloppy enough to be cool, but he looked like he liked order in his surroundings. It was minimalist. His room was smoothingly white. The maple furniture had clean lines, though it was lightly stained. The small fridge he used for bottled water and the occasional leftover pizza, if you left it in the main kitchen it was sure to be stolen, was white, with sleek lines. The bed was made, a bit messily, and covered with a plain tan comforter. The rug under the bed was the sole, and the floor and all furniture surfaces were color-free, and the only thing on the walls were a few black and white still shots of the old movies. Noel's frat brothers kept trying to get him to hang the frat's Greek letters in the room. Noel said he didn't need them to know the frat he was in. The refusal was just one of the many earned him the nickname No. The black shade passed the window again. Noel ran the window and pulled the white room darkening shade. A window flitted behind the shade, and Noel turned his back to the window. This is just stupid. He crossed the bed and sat again. Was it? Noel liked to think he was a pretty reasonable guy, but he knew what was going on here, and he wasn't reasonable at all. It was very unreasonable. It was unreasonable, but it was sure to be true. Noel was seeing Sam in the Blackbird costume, and Sam was stalking Noel. Why was Sam stalking Noel? It was obvious, wasn't it? Sam was stalking Noel because he was now the Blackbird, and the Blackbird tortured those who confessed their dirty secrets. So first Sam was going to toy with Noel in the same way the bully toyed with his victim, and then Sam was going to kill Noel being a horrible person. Noel was sure of it, and the worst part was that Noel deserved it. Sunday nights at the frat house were movie nights, and normally Noel wouldn't miss that. Not just because he helped organize the events, but because he enjoyed them. But tonight's movie was a horror flick with blood, and Noel wasn't up for it. He begged off and earning himself a shower and a popcorn, of course, of booze and hisses. After a half hour trying to study and another half hour of staring at the ceiling, Noel wished he had joined the movie night, but he didn't want to be down now. He was too edgy. Noel's phone rang. He snatched it up, hoping it was news about Sam. Sam's all right. He is. He thought before he said hello. He is. It was Amber. Who is? You said he is, Amber said. He did it again. You really need to stop saying about it loud. Wasn't I supposed to call you? Noel asked. You didn't. I know, jerk. Noel's heart tried to strangle him. He swallowed and pushed it back into place. Maybe I had a reason, he said. I'm listening. My friend had turned into a big blackbird and he's going to come and kill me, Noel thought. And then he grit his teeth. Waiting for Amber to tell him, he said out loud, Are you going to the obscene phone call technique? He said, What? You're breathing heavily in my ear. It's not turning me on. Oh, are you sure? Maybe there's a delayed reaction. Amber laughed. I'll let you know. Noel grunted in spite of how shaken he was. Talking to Amber put him a little more at ease. I called because you seemed kind of freaked out of the calf. And Amber said, I was just what? It was about Sam? Noel gripped the phone and heard his fingers hurt. Yeah. Amber's voice softened. I'm sorry. Thanks. For a few seconds they were both silent. Maybe you'll find it in your sleep, Amber said. Find what? Your brain. Noel grinned again. I'll give it a go and let you know what happens. Be sure you do. When Noel hung up the phone, he tried to convince himself that his thoughts of Sam were some kind of craziness caused by shock. Maybe Amber was right. Maybe he could go to sleep and find his brain. The same person in his brain, the one who was stalked by a friend in a bird suit. It was worth a try. Noel stood and stripped out of his clothes. Like a body-proud Ian, Noel slept in his underwear, but he wore boxer briefs, white, no rubber ducks. Sliding in under unwrinkled shirt sheets that desperately needed a trip to the laundry, Noel took one last look around his room and be sure all should be. It was. He closed his eyes. At first, sleep wouldn't come. Noel's muscles wouldn't let go, and they were so taut that they could have been strung on a guitar and plucked. And if they had been plucked, Noel was sure they'd be discontent. There was no question he was out of tune. Noel tried closing his eyes. The sleep began to take him, and as soon as it did, images of impulsively huge wings scraped against his lids. When he felt gigantic feathers spreading against his entire body, he was pummeled by stiff elbow-length feathers. He could feel the drum against his skin in an eerie contrast of soft versus hard. How could something as light as a feather beat him with such power and force? Fear pushed up his sleep from consciousness. His eyes shot open. Flailing for the switch in the nightstand lamp, Noel listened to the thundering beats of his heart. Okay, that was alarming. What was that alarm? Was that a dream? Oh, it could have been a dream because Noel had never fallen asleep. He just heard her falling asleep. Noel stood up and got a bottle of water from the fridge, drowning half of it, and he sat at the edge of the bed and steadied his breathing. It took several minutes, and he tried not to notice the hand was shaking when he took another sip of water. Noel sat down in the water bottle and then said, Get a grip. He lay down once more. Let's try this again, Noel said to the room. He reached over to turn this to the light. He closed his eyes, and someone or something opened the door to his room. Noel catapulted from the bed and knocked over his lamp, trying to turn it on. The bulb hit the wood floor and broke, so Noel ran across the room and flipped the wall switch. He was alone. The door of his room was closed and it was locked. Noel stared at the door. What just happened? Noel looked around, and in spite of how ordinary it looked, his room was suddenly threatening. He needed a weapon. Keeping one eye on the door, Noel crossed the closet and picked up an aluminum softball bat. Opening it up like a club, he sidestepped the door and he got a tighter grip on the bat. Then unlocked the door and he threw it open. The hallway was empty. Ominous music wafted up to this first floor. Lots of bass and percussion. Noel looked at the watch. The movie was probably still going on. Noel backed into his room and closed the door, locking it and leaned against it and ran a hand through his hair. What was going on with him? He looked at his hand in bed, and he stared at the doorknob. No way he was going to sleep unless he secured this door better. Feeling a little like an idiot, Sam used to say he was, Noel stepped out over the desk, grabbed his chair, and wedged the top of the back under the doorknob. Good thing he opted the wooden chair instead of a plush one with wheels his mother thought he should get. Once the chair was in its place, Noel looked at the shade over the window. The window was locked, right? Still clutching his softball bat, Noel checked into the window. Yes, it was locked. Good. Now you can stop acting like a paranoid mental patient, he asked himself. He didn't answer himself because he had no idea he could stop. It didn't seem like it was in control. Noel stood in the middle room for several more minutes. Then he decided there was no way he was going to sleep. He lighted his lamp and went into the closet for a broom, a dustpan, and a new bulb. After he cleaned up the broken bulb, he put a new one in the lamp. He grabbed his laptop and got into bed with it. He might as well work on a new screenplay he was writing. He hoped it would be a script he and Sam would use for the midterm project. Now, Noel shrugged. He knew what he was going to become of it. But working on it might take his mind off of insanity or make him sleepy. Whichever came first, but it was fine with him. It only took an hour for Noel to start nodding off, encouraged by the silence not just the room, but in the frat house as a whole. Noel set aside his laptop, made sure his baseball bat was leaning handily against the side of the bed, and he switched off his lamp. He immediately switched it back on. Was that a shadow he saw right out of his light going out? He scanned the room. Nothing, of course. Noel decided he needed a flashlight. His lamp might not survive the night, and he kept lunging for it. Opening his nightstand drawer, Noel got a flashlight he kept there for the power outages. It was amazing how often his frat brothers overloaded the circuits and blew the breaker. Setting his flashlight to the nightstand, Noel looked around one more time and then gingerly laid his head on the pillow. He remained there for a few minutes without as relaxed as a wooden Indian he accused Sam of being, and that thought he made him stiffen more. His lungs seemed to have shrunk. They should have made enough air. He tried to blink and got his mind. Think of good things, his mom has always said when he was a little, and he was upset. When he sang a song, she always sung. And when he was cheering up, he never had a heart to tell her the song didn't do it for him. He was so fond of rainbows and kittens, but he did like Amber. He'd think about Amber. Amber had freckles, just a few of them. They crossed the bridge of her nose like bird tracks. Noel stiffened again. Ixnay or Erdstay, Noel told himself. He tried again. So if Amber had these freckles and she had matching trail of them, it got to the top of her chest. She noticed them peeking out of the neckline and the white tank shirts Amber liked to wear. He also liked that she stuck in jeans and white shirts. She never met a girl unconsidered with fashion as she was, but she still managed to look great. Maybe it was the wild, shoulder-length, wavy blonde hair. Noel's eyelids started to droop. Then did not hold his breath. He reached out and turned on his lamp. He lay still and listened. Nothing. Good. Noel closed his eyes. And the window swept open. Something hit the floor with a thud. Noel grabbed his flashlight and ended up knocking across the room. He heard it clatter against the far wall. Noel seized his bat in the dark and his right hand and felt, with his trembling left hand for the light. He managed to turn it on without breaking the bulb. Light flew out of the room and he revealed nothing. What the hell? Noel yelled. He was sure the window was open. He knew he heard something hit the floor. Did he dream it? He shook his head. No way, it sounded too real. Crossing the window, Noel checked the lock again. It was latched. Okay, fine. He'd sleep with the light on. He didn't tell Ian he could sleep pretty much anything, and he could, so he would. Noel retrieved his flashlight and set it on the nightstand. He repositioned his bed and lay down in the bed again. He took out his watch and it was 11:25. He could only call Amber and say what? Want to come over and listen to my invisible intruders with me? That'd be a line he'd never tried before. Noel threw his forearm over his eyes, but he kept his eyes open. Why did he push Sam so hard yesterday? Noel rolled over and punched the pillow. This is really the time for his psychoanalysis. He asked himself. He knew he shouldn't have taken that psychology class this semester. He did it because his advisor of psychology was helpful for all the writers and filmmakers. He hadn't prepared for how much it forced him to examine his own actions and motives. But since he didn't close his eyes yet, why not ask the hard questions? He'd known Sam was getting pissed off yesterday, and he kept needling him. Why? And even more important, why would he enjoy bullying Christine so much in junior high? What is it about her that brought out the level of cruelty? Because there was no doubt about it, he'd been cruel, both in junior high and the day before. What he'd get from that? What did it make him feel better about himself? He tried to remember something useful from Psych 201 lectures. Was it mirroring? No, that was when you acted like someone else. Was it projecting? No, wasn't that putting your feelings out for someone else? Displacement? Getting closer. That was getting out your frustration and impulse on someone and someone else that's threatening and what's bothering you. He might be onto something, but he was so tired. Noel's eyes closed, and he finally fell asleep. A screeching squeal somewhere between an alarm's buzz and a siren's wail. A sound that barely came in at an ear-damaging level wrenched Noel from cushy oblivion and hurled him back toward Earth. At the same time, the spine-scored lightning strike burned an image into the Blackbird into Noel's brain, marking Noel's mind like a dreadful brand. Noel fought in his way to block back to the full consciousness, but he couldn't get all the way there. He was awake now, though he'd been dragged from sleep, but as far as he could go, he was like something holding him in place, clamping him to the strain of the way station between thought and no thought. He literally pinned to the bed. He could even feel the stabbing pressure of something sharp digging in his skin like a wrist and ankles. He tried to bug off the assailant, but he couldn't move at all. He was utterly paralyzed. He could feel the pressure getting stronger and stronger, pushing him deeper into his mattress. He felt like he was being compressed into nothingness. And then he still tried to battle the force above him. He poured every ounce of his will into the muscle, and he grunted and strained to get free. His confinement got worse, not better. No, suddenly he sensed an evil presence hovering over him. No, not hovering, sitting. The presence was sitting on Noel's bed, sitting on Noel. It was pressing down on him, engulfing him, insinuating himself into every part of him. And then, with a flash of light, he was free. He busted loose into his dark captivity and awoke fully that he had opened his eyes. He was completely alert. He had his bat in his hands. It was a good thing, because Noel was not alone in his room. A demonic presence of Turner's faders was poised right above his bed. So Noel swung his bat, and in a nanosecond he swung, or it was a nanosecond before he swung, the thing above Noel's bed disappeared in an eruption of feathers and spewed through the room. Then the feathers vanished into nothingness. It happened so fast Noel couldn't be sure what happened at all. All he could be sure of was it did swing the bat. He knew this because the lamp hit the floor and another bulb hit the dust. The time span in which Noel had feathered the thing in an infinitesimal, and it wasn't even a second. Noel's room went from the sound of havoc into utter silence and stillness in a blink of an eye. And yet the image of Noel had seen in the blink of an eye was burned into his retinas. Because he wasn't even the feathers, it was also seen soul-drilling malevolent yellow eyes and pointed, threatening beak. Those eyes had locked onto Noel's eyes. The sharp beak had aimed itself right for Noel's guilty heart. Noel was sure it was the Blackbird, leaping over him with a malicious intent. This wasn't still a shot. It was a complete horror film playing out of his eyeballs, in the theater-known mind, without blood. Sam was right. You didn't need blood to have horror. The creep factor was horrific enough. Noel admitted the sound was half moan and half laugh. It sounded like a strangled sob of an unhinged man. How strange was it in just a few hours Noel had gone from a well-adjusted college guy to a paranoid mental case. Because he had to be crazy, right? To believe a horror that he and Sam had crafted to fly had to come to life. Noel stood and paced around the room. Adrenaline was still coursing through the system, and he needed to get it out. After 3 U-shaped passes back and forth around his bed, Noel decided one thing. His room was not big enough for his nervous energy, so Noel strolled into the closet and grabbed sweatshirts, a t-shirt, and a hoodie, socks, and running shoes. By the time Noel stepped into the bright hall, it was early sight in the frat house. He checked his watch again. It was almost 1 a.m. Wait a second. Where did the last hour and a half go? Had Noel been leaning in bed thinking about psychology for that long? Or had he been out in that incapacitated state longer than he thought? He had no idea. The hammering in his heart was drowning out any rational thought in the moment. Running down the hall as quietly as possible, Noel darted over the stairs and ran down without a sound. It wasn't that he cared about waking up the frat brothers. He didn't want to have to explain to anyone that he was doing. He just wanted to get away. As soon as he stepped through every double doors and onto the broad front porch of the frat house, Noel rethought his actions. But he really want to go running in the dark with some creature hounding him? What if they got tired of toying with him and decided to grab him? What if it seized him and took off the way an eagle snatched a rodent? Now, that did sound insane. Did he really think the Blackbird was going to fly over and steal him off the ground? Even if some frightful rendition of Sam in his costume was coming after Noel, he didn't mean it could fly, did it? Why not? If anything had happened today was possible, anything could be possible. Noel turned and ran back up to his room. He spent the next 2 hours trying to stay awake. He was too terrified to try to go to sleep again. He did push-ups and sit-ups. He listened to music. He played games on his computer. Finally, he started watching a movie. The movie was what did him in. It was so close to the laptop, his sleep overpowered him. As soon as Noel closed his eyes, a high-pitched catering wailing sound started again. He tried to cover his ears, but again, he was paralyzed. Every time he tried to breathe against whatever force held him down, he had to push through the horror, and he still played in his head. Brutal eyes gazing into the murk of every essence, the beak like a scythe of judgment, cutting through his heart. And being numb to consciousness, inky feathered shapes streaked toward him. They retreated over and over. He felt like a fat, hopeless worm inching through the dirt. The Blackbird was merely playing with him before plucking him out of the ground and swallowing him whole. The sound of the image was tearing him apart from the inside, and still he thought, and he held in place, until he wasn't. As before, Noel came back into the land of the living as a crack of radiant light and gaping silence. As before, he was on his feet immediately, and as before, the evil trespasser disintegrated into oblivion, as it was never there. Since it clearly wasn't, even though iota of Noel's being was arguing that it was. Noel was going to lose his mind if he's going to get out of this room. Once again, Noel opened his door and headed through the frat house. This time, when he got to the porch, he couldn't let himself think. He just took off running down the brick path leading toward the quad. He had to get away, and it meant running. The campus was dead still. Noel couldn't even hear the guard in the distance. He wouldn't have been surprised to find out the campus had been isolated under a glass dome. But no, it was the real world. It seemed to be a perfectly normal campus hanging out on Earth. The night sky was black. Clouds had been blown in. Brushes gyrated in the breeze and had been blowing a few hours before. An occasional torn poster or candy bar wrapper skittered over the bricks. The campus was lit by a series of wrought iron lampposts, which cast a mesh shadow in the light over the concrete and foliage. Noel found it mildly disoriented to look at. He seemed to be a feather in every blade of grass or errant branch. Noel kept his gaze direct on the spot found in the 15 feet or so feet in front of him. So tried to keep this focus in the center of his thoughts. He'd been running as fast as he could, as if running for his life. He might have been running for his life. Something was torturing him relentlessly. How could he escape it? For now he'd run. Noel turned to look behind him. The shoe caught a tree root. He stumbled off the path into the bushes, lying on his back, his twisted ankle and wincing in a sharp pain, but suggesting he skinned his knees and elbows. Noel threw his head back and shouted, "Enough!" He closed his eyes and the horrendous sound started again. The chilling feather entity loomed over him. Noel opened his eyes and of course he was alone. Noel fought his way out of the bushes, thrashing his feet, ignoring the throbbing pain in so many places cataloged. Noel said, Sam, I'm sorry. Turning a circle, Noel said it again, almost like a ritual. Sam, I'm sorry. Quarter turn. Sam, I'm sorry. Quarter turn. Sam, I'm sorry. Closing his eyes for a fraction of a second, Noel confirmed that he was suspected, but his apologies weren't accomplishing anything at all, because he tried one more time, threw up his arms and sky bell. Sam, I'm sorry. This got a response, and it got him a blinding flashlight beam in his face as the camp's cops. Are you drunk or high? Then Noel crossed his eyes and faced the guy. He had dark skin and closely cropped hair, and an unimpressive badge was clipped to his belt. Neither, he said. I'm having nightmares, so I went for a run. The campus cop shined his light on Noel's feet and the top of his head. Noel held his arms out of the way, his body hand to show he carried nothing. What's your name? The cop put his light back in Noel's eyes. Noel squinted and looked away, frowning at the spots that covered across his retinas. But hey, maybe he was blind. He wouldn't be able to see the Blackbird. He thinking of the name made him reassert himself. Name? The cop repeated. Noel Markman. Could you please not shine that right in my eyes? The cop lowered his flashlight beam. Noel couldn't see the cop's face very well, but he didn't look much older than Noel himself. He was much taller than Noel, though, and the way he loomed over the scene reminded Noel of, "Stop it," he commanded himself. "Why are you yelling?" the cop asked. "I was trying to get something out of my system." The cop whipped the light back into Noel's eyes. "Drugs?" "No, I'm not high. I'm not drunk." He hesitated. "I did something that pissed off a friend. He's mad at me. I was just, I don't know." Camper cop lowered his flashlight again. For a few minutes, they stood in silence. Noel noticed crickets chirping when he hadn't heard of it. He was still running. When the cop surprised him, he said, "I get that. I wanted to say you're sorry, but you're a little pissed that he's so pissed. You're yelling that you're sorry to get anger out of your system." Noel lifted an eyebrow. "Not bad for a campus cop." "That's exactly right," he said. "Okay, well, do you think you're done yelling?" Noel asked. "Yes, I can be, yes." "Okay." Noel wanted to be sure the guy was done with him. The cop gestured down the path of the flashlight. "I suggest you keep running. It's a great way to get stuff out of your system." "Yeah, thanks." Nodded at each other, and Noel headed off again. By the time he'd run a mile, the barest hint of pale pink was stopping at the top of the hills in the east edge of town. Dawn was coming, and Noel hadn't really slept at all. Was he ever going to sleep again? He had to let Sam know he was sorry. Some other way than screaming in the middle of campus, but how? Noel was running back towards his frat house when he heard footfalls approaching his left. Slowing, trying not to quake in fear, Noel glanced in the direction of the footfalls. Then he told himself it sounded like a person, not a bird, and he was right. "Noel!" For the first time in a while, Noel relaxed. He didn't relax completely, but he let go of enough anxiety to unkink his muscles and neck shoulders. "Hi, Amber." Amber jogged into place in front of him, wearing dark blue sweats and white t-shirt. He was starting work up with a sheen of sweat. "I've never seen you running in the morning before," Amber said. "I don't go running in the morning." "Ah, so this must be another one of your clones?" Noel smiled, and then he realized how good it felt to smile. He smiled wider. "Yes. How many do you have?" "As many as I need, all the things I don't do." Amber laughed. "And do you want to run with me?" Noel's clone. "Sure, why not?" Noel wasn't ready for even a little to face his day. He didn't have come to terms with the night. When they finished running, they ended up at the cafeteria again. "He have to stop meeting like this." Amber used the hem of her shirt to wipe the sweat from her face. "I never met you before," he said. "That's Noel's other clone." "Right, I forgot." The cafeteria doors were just opening. Enticing bacon aroma wafted through the double doors. Only a few bleary-eyed students were starting to straggle toward the building. Amber put her foot up on the railing alongside the stairs and bent over the stretch. Noel felt sweat trickling down his spine. He closed his eyes for a second, then immediately opened them wide to try to wake himself up. Then he wiped his eyes. They were dry and scratchy. "Are you okay?" Amber asked. "I mean, seriously, you don't look too good." "Well, thanks." Amber gave him a half smile. "You know what I mean. Your eyes are really red." "I haven't slept." "All night?" Noel shook his head. "Anything I could do?" Noel studied her. It was funny. Just now, he realized he reminded him a little of Christine, a girl he bullied in junior high. She had similar coloring and her mouth was the same shape. He wondered if that's why he never thought it was pretty until recently. Amber had been in several in the classes both previous year and this one, and he'd never seen her a second glance at a couple days before. Now he realized he liked her a lot. But why does the same came trust? So he blurted, "How would you fix it if you did something really wrong a long time ago, and then you did it again recently, and you can't apologize to the person you just did it to, but you're sorry and you want to make amends somehow?" And Amber tilted her head and pursed her lips. "Guilt is keeping you awake?" "Something like that." Amber sat on one of the concrete steps and patted the space next to her. Noel acknowledged and greeting from the friend and sat next to Amber. The concrete was cold and damp. "If it's nice that you feel guilt, it shows character. A lot of guys are so stupid to know they should feel guilty. I might have thought you were one of those. So why'd you want to go out with me?" "I might have thought I was wrong." Noel wasn't so sure he was. She did feel guilty because of he had character, or because he didn't want to be murdered by the Blackbird. I think guilt is like a weed. Amber lifted her face to the sun, which was starting to climb on the tops of the trees. It's best to pluck out at the root. So apologize to the first person. The first person I need to apologize to, Noel said. How does that make amends for the second person? Amber said, it's an energy thing. Yin and yang. Balances the scales in one place and the balance radiates outward. Noel wasn't so sure about that, but he had something. There you are. Noel turned his to the girl's voice. It was Darla and her friend group. He pointed out at Amber and said, weren't you... You weren't where we always meet. Amber jumped up. Sorry, it's his fault. He warned Noel and grinned. He stood too. I need a shower. Amber nodded and headed back toward her friends. She turned back. Good luck. Thanks. He knew he was going to need it. How in the world was he going to find Christine Wilbur? Noel contemplated his question during his much-needed shower, and that's when he got back to his room and he stood at the window watching people head to class. He already decided he was skipping all his classes for the day, and now he grabbed the laptop and prepared for finding Christine. Looking for his bed longingly, Noel took his laptop to his desk. He was afraid he even sat in bed. He started to fall asleep. A quick internet search hadn't helped. Christine Wilbur wasn't coming up any searches. He apparently didn't do social media, and she hadn't done anything significant enough to get a search at his radar. So how would you find her? A couple of Noel's frat brothers had been talking about Sam, and when Noel had returned to the frat house, Sam was still missing. So finding Christine was the only way for him to be safe again. Or was he just coming unhinged? What if the previous night had been only some simple sleep disorder caused by shock in the day's news? He no longer felt like it was in shock, so maybe he'd try to sleep now. He'd be okay. That even had any dark shadows or glimpses of big birds on the way to the frat house. Well, that was a good sign, wasn't it? Noel closed his eyes just briefly. He felt like he could fall asleep sitting up. Okay, that was it. He was going to lie down and sleep and forget all about Christine Wilbur and Sam and the Blackbird, since the only injuries he sustained in harrowing hours of the long night were the ones he caused himself. He had to conclude that he was a threat in his head, and that if it was in his head, he could darn well beat it. Resolved, he sat at the left side of the bed, fully dressed in jeans and a white shirt. He sighed, stretching out, and he put his head on his pillow, closed his eyes as he left him. Right into hell. The second Noel's brain wave slowed, the Blackbird appeared on a din of keying and buzzing. It was so intense it felt physical invasion, boring into Noel's ear canal. Diabolical wings leaned over Noel menacingly. Aiming to speak directly into Noel's right eye, the Blackbird went even closer. Noel knew his eye was closed because he wasn't asleep, but in the dream world, his eyes were open to see a beak move lower and lower. At the same time, the weight ramming down on him got heavier and heavier. Noel's chest was being crushed under the feathered mass. Even though he knew it was no good, Noel wriggled and jerked himself back and forth, trying to throw off the hideous creature. He concentrated on trying to get free of his legs and made things worse. His legs started to spasm, and he felt like something was trying to tear him off his body. The pain of his limbs was excruciating. The sound had morphed, too. The high-pitched tones abated, only replaced by a combination of crackling static, a loud hum, interrupted by regular intervals by a deafening zap sound, and it reminded Noel of electric bug zappers his father kept in the back deck. Only the zap was not designed for his mosquitoes. It was turned something the size of a pterodactyl. Noel realized he could no longer breathe. The weight on his chest was flattening his lungs and stopping his heart. He felt like he was being dragged into some other realm, the Blackbird's realm, and that's when he left this world. The world he realized he wasn't granted for life. His body began to tingle. The tingles sped up, and they became vibrations as fast and powerful. It felt like every cell in his body was palpitating like space. Faster and faster, his body vibrated and began to emit a droning sound. Brrr. Noel tried to scream, but he couldn't even use his mouth. He realized he couldn't feel his mouth or the rest of his body. He was just paralyzed. He was numb. All left of Noel was his consciousness. His mind was still functioning fine. In fact, his functioning was too well. It was giving him relentless rundown of the system-wide failure in his body. Noel's existence receded further and further into the inky feathered oblivion. The noise coincided. The pain intensified. Noel was sure he was about a verge of annihilation. Then it all stopped. Except for the vice grip on his arm, the annoying jostling of the shoulder, and the sound of someone yelling, "Dude!" And Noel opened his eyes. Ian let go of his arm and shoulder, and backed away from the bed. "Dude!" he repeated, but in a lower volume. Noel realized he was in a bath and sweat, and his skin felt clammy, and his clothes stuck to him. He ached all over. "Are you okay?" Ian asked. Noel couldn't answer the question. He just shook his head and then nodded. "I could clear things up." Ian, wearing only red boxer shorts covered in charging bullets, dropped into Noel's desk chair. Noel looked up to him. He'd never been the big guy look up so shook up. He'd never seen Ian in his room before either. They only hung out when the other frat brothers were around, usually in the main lounge downstairs. "How'd you get in here?" Noel asked. Ian blinked, then twisted his mouth guilty a little kid way. "Oh, I sort of broke your door." He looked over the door jam, splintering his door hanging on a hinge. "Sorry," Ian said. "I thought you were dying." Noel returned his gaze over to Ian and raised an eyebrow. "That heard everything made us sound like that, dude." Ian said, "It was so loud but really low, like a grunting of sort, like you were trying to get a crazy scream but someone was a hand over your mouth, and there were all these thuds and thumps. I thought someone was trying to kill you, so I broke the door to get in." Tears filled Noel's eyes. He was weirdly touched. Then fizzes of terror skirted along his skin. What if he's been dying? What would be happen to Ian if he busted in his room and wake him? Would the Blackbird have been able to take Noel to another, what, dimension, realm, level of hell? He realized that Ian was waiting for him to say something. Thanks, Ian. I was stuck in a really nasty nightmare. You got me out of it. Ian shrugged. Well, good. It seemed pretty bad. He looked at Noel. Are you sure you're okay? Noel nodded. Nothing a hot shower and some food won't solve. He sat up and tried to ignore the room-spinning sensation that triggered a wave of nausea. Ian said, okay, well, Noel wasn't sure it was about to stand yet, but he didn't. Sorry about your door, Ian said. I can fix it for you. He strode to the door and looked at it. I just need to get a couple things from the hardware store. You don't need to do that. It's my fault you broke it. Ian shook his head. Nah, I want to. I like fixing things. I'll take my mind off the makeup nurse's test later today. I need to pass it, so I need to keep playing ball. Noel nodded. Let me know if you ever need help with any classwork. No, Ian looked closer at him, probably to see if Noel was jerking his chain. He wasn't. He might have been the day before, giving a dumb jock a hard time, just not today. Ian said thanks. He went through the snail unguarded opening of Noel's domain. Ian? Oh, called, yeah? If you had to find something in your past, like from junior high or something, what would you do? I mean, they aren't online. I don't know. Do you know their parents? Noel snapped his fingers. That's brilliant. Yes, thanks. Great. Thanks again, Ian, for breaking in. Ian shrugged. Any time. I hope not, Noel muttered, and Ian went back to his own room. Noel stood. For the second time that day, he headed for the showers. In the shower, he chastised himself for being so dense. He knew Christine Wilbur's parents were still in the town when their dad owned Wilbur's Eats, a popular greasy spoon diner downtown. He could get Noel to have forgotten that. One of the things he knew also that Christine had been bullying her was, so you've eaten everything in the dad's menu 1,000 times? What would you recommend? Noel groaned in the memory and turned the water cold. He flinched at the icy bite that shocked his skin. But he both needed to deserve the jolt. It would help him to what he would know and knew he needed to do. Noel was relieved to find Wilbur's Eats mostly empty. When he arrived, only one silver vinyl bloof was taken by an elderly couple picking through scrambled eggs and hash browns, and only one red vinyl stool was occupied by a sleepy-looking guy in a janitor's uniform. He was drinking coffee and methodically plowing through a large piece of cherry pie. The dinner smelled like a diner, a good one. The aromas came from the food, a weird but unpleasant mix of onions, fried chicken, apples, and chocolate, and the coffee not from the grease. Clunking and the sizzling sound made from behind the low divider wall separating the dining room and the kitchen. There was a large pass-through for the food, and the next thing hung to one of those carousel things flip orders to. It was empty. A thin woman with a limp, dyed blonde hair turned to greet Noel when he entered. Sit wherever you want, she waved in the hand and returned to her chore. She was starting a new pot of coffee. The woman wore a pinkish uniform dress and a bright apron. Her name tag read Lois. Noel wanted to sit. She wanted to get on with it, so he approached the counter near an old-fashioned cash register. He shifted from one foot to another. Lois turned and raised an eyebrow. Do you want to take out? No, thank you. I need to see Mr. Wilbur. Is he here now? Lois chuckled. Sure he is. He practically lives here now. All he does is all the cooking. Lois rotated toward the kitchen. Earl, get out of here. Someone's asking for you. Noel clenched his fist. He wasn't looking for his conversation. He looked up and watched a very short man push through the swinging door to the right food pass-through. No wonder Noel ever got a glimpse of the man. He was barely 5 feet tall, and he was thin. That was a surprise. Oh, sir, Noel held out his hand. My name's Noel Markman. Earl Wilbur grinned and shook Noel's hand. Good to meet you. Earl was missing a front tooth. Somehow that added to his friendly smile. Unlike his fair-haired daughter, Earl had brown hair and brown eyes. But Noel could see Christina's man's face. Or would it be another way around? Both had bow-shaped mouths, wide cheekbones, and close-set eyes. And what can I do for you, Earl? Wilbur asked. His manner was deferential. Noel had been trying to think of the smooth way to bring up the subject of finding Christine, and he had to come up with a thing. So he burst out of it. Sir, I need to find your daughter, Christine. I was hoping you could tell me where she is. Earl Wilbur's friendly expression didn't change. He just said, that right. He leaned it up on the counter across the Noel, and Noel noticed Earl Wilbur's forearm was cross-hatched with the little burn scars from short order cooking. Well, why is that? Earl asked. And you sweet on her? Lois asked. Her voice was low and scratchy. Earl laughed and patted on the shoulder. Well, now, Lois, I expect that's his business. Outside, the sun disappeared so abruptly, everyone in the diner turned to look through the picture window. Black storm clouds were tumbling across the side. Beneath the clouds, right under the diner, a huge hunch of feather forms shuffled past. What? Noel did a double take. He had just seen that, or had he imagined it? He looked around to check if anyone else had seen it. The elderly woman in the booth was looking past the elderly man's shoulder, and her gaze focused on the clouds, and her face pinched in what would have been fear or worry. But maybe it was just she didn't like storms. Whether he saw it or made it up, Noel had a feeling he needed to get a move on. Looking back at Christine's dad, Noel said, I'm going to tell you the truth, even though that makes me look like really bad, but he shrugged. I was in junior high with Christine, and I was a bully. I wasn't nice to her at all, and I hated to tell her how sorry I am that I was so, mean to her. And this is one of those make amends things? Lois asked Noel. Not in any official way, I just need to know I'm sorry. And Earl Wilbur drove to jaw. You, the boy who threw burrs at her? Noel scrunched up his face in pure embarrassment. He looked down. Yeah, that was me. When Noel Wilbur didn't say anything, Noel looked at the man. He expected to see anger in the man's eyes, but he always saw was compassion. Earl Wilbur set his gaze for several seconds. Noel squirmed, but he didn't break off the connection. He had his face as what he'd done. That better away the victim's father eye. Finally, Earl Wilbur said, "Okay, I'll let you tell you where she is." "She's such a sweet girl," Lois said. Noel ignored the sob and nausea and accepted the directions Earl Wilbur gave him. Then he went outside, making sure he didn't look up, and hurried to his car. Noel's car wasn't much of a car. Truthfully, it was basically an old piece of junk on wheels. It was a piece of junk in the fact that Noel never admitted he owned a car. He kept it in his grandfather's house, and he only drove it when necessary. And the car was built many, many, many years before. And it was a cool car, but too many owners, too many miles, too many fender benders, and just plain too much time turned the car into a barely hanging together collection of rusted red metal and engine parts that barely managed most of the time to get Noel where he needed to go. Today, he was going to be pushing it. He only had to go about 35 miles, but the small campus where Christine and sophomore school was up in the mountains. The school is a music arts college, according to Christine's dad. The storm clouds was hanging around, and they made Noel very, very nervous. Whenever he accidentally glanced up at the sky, he saw feathered wings beating in the billowing clouds. He also kept seeing immense black feathered shapes scrambling along the wake of the straining vehicle. Every time that happened, he pushed the accelerator pedal harder, which didn't help at all. He barely had it pressed to the floor. Noel's car was struggling predictably in the uphill drive. And after about 50 minutes, however, Noel arrived at the fancy modern cement archway over a narrow road that led to a small collection of glass and cement sculptural structures that nearly sang out "artsy." As Earl Wilbur had instructed, Noel followed the road and held it as wove through the two inverted triangle-shaped buildings and took Noel right into the parking lot of an asymmetrical 4-story dorm. As soon as Noel turned off the car, the thunder rumbled not very far enough away distance. A big drop of water hit Noel's arm when he got out of the car. Refusing to look around, he trotted toward the dorm. Not even without seeing the oppressor, he knew it was there. He could hear the elaborate lugging of feathers across the pavement, and he could feel the air currents behind and around him shift as the hunter closed in. Noel was sweating by the time he got inside the dorm. The nausea that started at the diner had grown and been joined by a pounding headache. Now Noel was starting to feel lightheaded. He had to hurry. Practically running through the sprawling lounge, his shoulder blades tingling the sensation of being tracked, Noel glanced at a few girls sprawling in plush sectional sofas, chattering away. Oddly, he realized that he put in a lounge behind him that he had no idea which girls looked like and what they were wearing. He felt like his eyesight was getting blurry. The building smelled like cloves, and he remarkably quiet for a dorm. Only the faintest hint of sound would be heard in the distance. It was a little after 5 p.m., and Earl Wilbur had Noel and Christine for nearly always in her dorm at this time of day, because she ate early before going to practice. Earl didn't say what kind of practice. Noel easily found the room number Earl had given him. Leaning against the wall and steadying himself, Noel raised a hand and knocked. "Come in," a cheerful, musical voice called. It sounded a little like Christine, but it was too upbeat to be heard. Noel opened the door and looked around the room and froze, staring. The room only had one person in it, a girl, and the girl was obviously Christine. He might have doubted if he hadn't been, Earl Wilbur had, but this girl had her dad's features and not his coloring. Christine was still blonde and freckled as she'd been in junior high school. She was still slightly crooked teeth than she remembered, but otherwise he was very different from Christine Wilbur. "Hi, are you looking for Claire?" "Huh? My roommate." Noel shook his head and having trouble staying upright. His legs felt weak, and something pushed against his back and down his shoulders, as trying to pile drive him to the floor. "Then who are you looking for?" Christine asked. He twisted her nose in a twitchy way that made her in junior high, but she didn't seem to be anything behind Noel. He tried to tell himself for the 100th time that he was imagining things. When Noel didn't answer, Christine said, "I think you have the wrong room." She tilted her head in a sentence question. Justine sat in the school desk similar to Noel's. He had a book open in front of her, and she had a classic container of salad. It was nearly empty. When Noel didn't answer Christine, she looked down and forked up a cucumber. He bit into the cucumber, and it was a distinctive scent and filled the air. So did her crunching sounds. Noel kept staring. Christine Wilbur sat cross-legged in the desk chair, and one bare feet kept time and music just have been in her head. She wasn't wearing earbuds. He was dressed in full-length, skin-tight, light blue leotard. Christine Wilbur wasn't overweight anymore. She was obviously as fit as Noel was. But that wasn't the only way she was different. Although she still had some facial features, quirky expressions, Christine held herself in the air of confidence. That made it clear she was a very different girl from the one she'd known in junior high. The Noel's mental processor was struggling to keep up with the unexpected information. The neural pathways were announcing, "This input does not compute." "Do you talk?" Christine asked. He hesitated and worked the mouth, trying to find the right words. Then he said, "I'm not being mean or anything. It's just that you're standing there staring." She clasped her hand again and shrugged. Noel shook her head and tried to reset his circuits. "You don't remember me?" he asked. "That's the first thing you say?" Christine laughed. He remembered that laugh. He only heard it once in junior high when he watched her play with a ferret someone had brought in the show and tell. Her laugh was so pleasing, trill that made you want to laugh too. She sat down and sighed. Okay, let's see. He stared at him and looked at her. Nope, I don't remember you. Should I? I would. You would what? I'd remember me if I were you. I mean, Noel pressed his hand to his forehead. Christine shrugged again. Why don't you just tell me who you are? Noel blew out air. Okay. A couple of girls came down the hall behind Noel. They were singing at the top of their lungs. She waited until they were well past, trying to ignore the fact that they had been followed by that swishing thumping sound that told him his feathered nemesis was nearby. He opened his mouth, but he found he couldn't get the words out, and his eyes filled with tears. He had to swallow. Christine frowned. Hey, are you okay? Noel's eyes got even wetter. She was so nice. I was the guy who bullied you in junior high, he said, his words fast, like peeling off a guilt bandage. Which one? Christine asked. Noel blinked. She shrugged and twitched her nose. The hate on Christine crew was pretty big. I was the thing. I threw birds on you. Noel felt like he was about an inch tall. He could only understand why he'd ever felt it was so funny, either when he did it or when Sam told him about it. Oh, that was you? She focused on the subtle blue eyes in him. I'm sorry, I've forgotten your name. Noel Markham. She nodded. I think I remember you. You didn't have all that hair then. You were skinnier too. No muscle. No blush. He was been pretty slight in the junior high. That made him think he was so great and made fun of someone else. He wiped his still wet eyes. Christine stood and zipped across the room toward him quickly as she flew, extraordinarily elegant and precise in her movement. Noel stiffened, not sure what she was going to do. She hugged him. It wasn't at all how he thought it was going to go. At first, Noel just stood there, his arms rigid in sides, but then a combination of her sincere kindness and the honey-sweet scent of her hair realized his resistance. He hugged her back, blinking away his tears. Christine let him go and stepped away. She was so close to all her freckles and threw dark flecks in her blue eyes. That wasn't an I forgive you hug, she said. That was a thank you. What? Christine motioned for him to come into the room, and he did, sitting in her roommate's desk chair. When Christine pulled out, he returned to her desk, sat, and rotated her chair to face Noel. Clasping her hands together, she said, I'm not going to tell you what I let you off the hook for bullying, but it looks like you really are sorry. I really am, Noel said sincerely. He was surprised how truly sorry he was. He nodded and thought a few seconds and said haltingly, I'm going to tell you just because I learned something from it. And I figured maybe I could pass it on. In junior high, my mom was always on my case about everything. I felt like crap about myself. You and the others kept putting me down, which also didn't help. To be honest, I barely remember you. But I remember how bad I felt all the time. Eventually, though, I stopped feeling bad, and I got angry. I decided to treat myself well, and I liked to dance, and I started dancing and have fun. You know, just alone in my bedroom. And I started doing it in a real studio, and I found out I'm actually pretty good at it. When the music swept me up, nothing else mattered. Of course, my mom loved the dancing, helped me lose weight, but that wasn't enough to make her happy. I think part of me still always struggle on some level with that. Noel stood, opened his mouth to protest. She came over and waved him off. Don't. It's okay. See? That's the thing. All that boy forced me to step up and love myself. No matter what I can see in the mirror and what people say about me, I know my value. I'm always here to dance scholarship. So see? Sometimes when something bad happens, it leads to something good. Noel nodded. Christine looked directly at him. So I forgive you. You can let it go. I'm fine. Noel's eyes teared up again. He wiped them in the back of his hand. Christine looked over Noel's shoulder. She patted and squeezed his hand. And then he walked out into the hallway and she closed her door. Noel sagged against the wall and he realized no longer felt a presence lingering nearby. No more feathers. The hallway was silent. His headache was gone. Noel rolled his head from side to side and shrugged. Then released his shoulders. His tension was gone, too. It was all gone. He felt like he was just bound a backpack full of bricks. Noel smiled a little and picked up his way through the dorm. As in lounge, he waved at the girls. He could see them clearly now. It was dressed in leotards like Christine's. Outside, Noel wasn't surprised to find the sun plowing its way in the clouds. He had closed his eyes and breathed in the air, scented by miniature gardens growing in the planter in the edge of the parking area. He hadn't noticed those on the way in. He started toward his car and his phone rang. Reaching in his pocket, Noel pulled out the phone and answered it. Hello? The first two words spoken in his ear brought Noel to a stop. As he listened, he started grinning. Then he said, I'm on my way. He ran for his car. Sam was waiting for Noel in front of the film studies building as Noel got back. Sam! Noel shouted. He ran for his friend. Sam raised his crutch and waved it in the air, and then put it down Noel to reach him. Noel grabbed Sam and hugged him as best he could. Sam hugged him back enthusiastically. There's my favorite idiot, Sam said. Where are you? You didn't say. I went, Noel waved there. It doesn't matter what happened to you. Noel rolled his eyes. Apparently I've been hanging around you too long. Idiocy must be catching. Noel smacked Sam's shoulder. Ow, hey, wounded guy here. Sam winked. Seriously, I was being dumb and I walked into the tracks with headphones on. Dumb is one word for it. Sam laughed. Yeah, right? So I turned around just in time to see the train and I jumped off the tracks. But jumping has never been something I'm good at. So not only did something on the train gouge my arm as I leaped, he lifted his bandaged arm, I lost my balance and fell down in the embankment and broke my leg. And I had normal-sized legs, I probably would have been fine. Noel laughed. You and your legs. Get over it. Sam ignored Noel. I was trying to drag myself back up and I slipped and ended up sliding all the way down to the cultivar. And I passed out. I guess I was pretty well hidden. I never heard anyone calling for me. And so no one saw me until early this morning. When my parents came back, a couple of cops searched again. Sam punched Noel's arm. I'm happy to see you, man. And not as happy as I am to see you. Noel realizes what he meant that. Really meant it. I'm sorry. He meant any chances, but just because Sam was there didn't mean the Blackbird was gone. For what? For being such a jackass about bowling thing. You're right. It's not funny. Man was there in the crutch again. It was oversensitive about it. It's no big deal. No, Noel said. Being thoughtless is a big deal. Sam shook his head. I won't disagree with that, but I have grown stones at a glass house. Huh? I never answered you when you asked if I had secrets. Noel waited. Sam leaned in. Remember I said I was bullied? Noel nodded. Well, I got revenge on one of my bullies by bullying him right back. I played a really mean joke on him just before freshman year. Jerk. Sam laughed. Back at you. Nah, Noel said. No more jerk clones. What? Noel laughed. Oh, it's a joke between Amber and me. Amber and me, huh? I want to hear about that. Want to grab a pizza? Sure, I'm starving. I haven't eaten one since before noon. Why not? Long story. Maybe I'll tell you sometime. The Blackbird will make you tell, Sam said. Noel's heart stuttered. But then Sam laughed. The real Jake. The child in the bedroom was crowded, even though it held only 2 people. It was crowded because it held so many hopes and so many regrets. It was crowded because it held the potential for so much more than it was. Let's get you comfy, Margie cradled Jake's shoulders while he was reached behind him and repositioned his pillows. The window fan blew at the lock of the shoulder-length light brown hair across her upper lip, so it looked like she had a mustache. She pursed her full lips and puffed the hair back in its place. Jake tried to remember the last time he'd been comfy, maybe 3 years ago when he was 6. No matter what Margie did to the pillow, Jake couldn't be comfy. But he let Margie think she was doing something helpful. She really tried, and they didn't want her to know that she didn't make her like she wanted to. Over a whir of the fan, Jake could hear kids playing in the neighbor's yard. Squeals of glee alternated with the laughter and the occasional shout. He tilted his head to the elm tree outside of the window. Wasn't it in the way? And he saw the trailing off the sprinkler spraying the stream of water across the neighbor's lawn. Actually, he saw 2. But he knew the one was echo of the first. Although the fan drowned it out, the sprinkler made a piff 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 sound in his mind. He loved that sound. It was the sound of fun. He used to be one of those kids who played with the sprinkler and the squeal of glee. When it got over 90 degrees, Miss Anderson always let the kids run her front yard at the water park. Jake shifted his attention to the window to Margie. Margie had an echo too. Both Margie's frown allowed him. Jake concentrated on ignoring the second Margie, as she had to ignore the second one about everything he saw. This pine nut made him see double. He was annoying, but he had to used to it. Margie rubbed Jake's bald head. Her palm was warm and rough, so different than his mom's palms had been. He wasn't sure he was right because it was 4 years since his mom had died, but he remembered his mom's hands were soft. Still, he liked it when Margie rubbed his head, and he got a tiny bit closer to finding comfy hiding place. There's to Jake. Obviously, he'd been talking, but she hadn't heard her. He did that more and more these days. He was happier when he was not where he was, so it was hard to make himself pay attention to what he was saying. I asked if he could feel up to some vegetable soup. Margie blew her hair off her face again, and he fussed over Jake's cheeks. Her cheeks full and flushed from the heat, and her mascara was smudged. Jake thought it was funny that Margie always wore makeup, and he didn't like many people saw her. Mostly it was just Jake. I think you're pretty without makeup, he once told her. You have such big eyes, and you look like a cartoon princess. Margie had obviously liked that, but he still wore makeup. It's a girl thing, he told him, and he figured he wore makeup in case some handsome guy came in the door. When he said that, though, he laughed and said, I'm not only in the market for a handsome guy, I'm only 27, I'm still young. You're all the handsome guy I need. Jake didn't think 27 sounded young. That was 3 times older than he was now. And Margie was 3 times older now because he didn't taken care of him ever since Comfy made part of his past. Jake didn't want to be in trouble, but it was too hot for a soup, and he wasn't sure he'd keep it down. Crackers, he asked. Margie sat down on the edge of the bed. He always sat there, and even though the green and blue plaid plush chair was right next to where the other side of the bed, a smiley face on a t-shirt twisted so it looked like it was winking at Jake. Sometimes Jake winked back, but he didn't feel like it was today. He was doing a thing that Margie said he should never do. No me-wo, he always said. Otherwise, you're known as feeling sorry for yourself, having a pity party. Woe is me, and oh, the drama. That used to make Jake laugh. Today, not so much. Outside, one of the twins from across the street laughed. She had a weird laugh. It sounded like a cuckoo clock. Now Jake recognized it. She shifted his gaze to the window again. Margie leaned toward Jake and gently used her fingers to turn his face back toward her. I know it's been a long time since you've been able to play with your friends, but you'll be out there with them in no time. You'll see. Jake nodded, even though he didn't agree with her. Margie was a big fan of positive thinking. She was always saying things like, today is the day for miracles, and things are looking up, and this is too shall pass, and all is well, and it's always darkest before the dawn. It was like a gazillion smiley face t-shirts. There was various hats and outfits for expressions. Jake once asked her where she got them, and she had said a friend who did a t-shirt company made them for her. He waited for Jake. A smiley face wearing a baseball cap was his favorite team's logo. He used to wear it a lot, but he hadn't wanted to put it on for a while. When Jake didn't say anything, Margie said, "Okay, crackers it is." "Thanks," Jake said, when he patted his knee and then waved out a fly. "How did you get in here?" she asked it. Jake looked at the dim-sized hole on the screen, but he didn't give the fly secret away. He liked it when flies visited. He liked watching them flit around the room, and he liked listening to them buzz. A couple years before, his dad got him a laptop and a tablet to use doing those lessons and look up stuff. He always kept the tablet in the bed with him because he had so many questions about everything, and the tablet was like a magic portal to answers. The tablet told him the flies only lived 28 days, less than a month. He figured that it was why they were always darting around. They had to hurry up and live as much as they could before they had the chance. It made him feel stupid for lying around so much. Why wasn't he hurrying like the flies? Well, because he couldn't. Jake noticed Margie was heading toward the door of his room, and her arms full of towels she used to clean up his mess. This was day 2 of the latest round, and it was worse than most days 2's. "Margie?" Margie turned, and she flashed him a wide smile. "What, kiddo? When is Dad calling?" Margie's smile wavered. "I'm not sure, sweetie. He set the towels down at the desk and used for a while now." She came back to the bed, and she sat down. "You know he calls whenever he can, right?" Jake nodded. "And you know he thinks about you all the time." Jake frowned and shook his head. "I don't think he does." Margie raised an eyebrow. "Why not?" "Well, he's a good soldier, right?" "Of course he is. So he has to concentrate on what he's doing. I bet he doesn't think about me when he's concentrating on his job, but that's okay. I don't want him to think about me and end up shooting himself in the foot or something." Jake strained and he lifted his arms and pretending to shoot his foot. He gave Margie a weak grin. Margie laughed. "No, what would be bad?" Jake joined her when he went on. "Very, very bad." They laughed together. "I'll get those crackers." Margie stood and leaned over and kissed Jake's forehead. She noticed her eyes got teary and she looked into his eyes. He understood why, and so he didn't have to say anything. Instead, she asked, "Can you bring me extra crackers?" "Sure. Are you extra hungry?" "Not really. I'm just thinking it's wrong of me not to offer something to Simon when he visits." "You're supposed to do that, right? Offer food or drinks and stuff to a guest?" Marjorie raised an eyebrow. "I didn't know that Simon ate." Jake laughed. "That's just silly. Of course he eats. I thought he lived in the cabinet." "Yeah, so?" Margie tilted her head. "So there's food in there?" Jake shrugged. "I don't know where he gets his food, but yesterday he talked about what kind of cake we like. He likes chocolate, just like I do." "Simon likes chocolate, huh?" "Yep, and peanut butter, just like me. And he doesn't like it with banana. He says that banana nut sandwich. He takes off the banana." "Oh, he does he?" Jake nodded. Margie took her head and smiled. "Okay, extra crackers it is then." "Really? Well, we can't be rude to Simon." Margie winked. Jake shook his head. "No, I need to apologize to him too." "Why?" "Because I haven't offered him anything yet." "I'm not sure he's upset about it." Jake frowned. "I hope so." She squeezed his foot. "I know so." He headed to the door. Jake watched her cross a few feet between the bed and the desk, where she left the towels, and the towels, the poster of his favorite robot character, bubbled human air. One corner of it fluttered a fan's breeze. When Margie left the room, Jake looked all around those posters. He had a dual theme going: science fiction, movies, and baseball. The painting combined the two favorite things and hung a little white cabinet on the wall opposite the window. His dad was an artist friend to do the painting. He showed a baseball game being played on the moon. Jake wished he'd be around to see that in real life, but he wouldn't. Jake rolled his eyes at himself. "Oh, the drama," he said out loud. He surveyed the room again. His green baseball-patterned curtains gyrated the spastic rhythm of the matchless fans and their rotations. Jake looked back toward his baseball on the moon picture, and then he looked at his little cabinet. The cabinet, which was about 3.5 feet tall, maybe 2 feet, and he said in Drake's room as his parents got his house. At least, that's what his dad said. Jake didn't use his cabinet, and it was just there. Normally, he didn't give it a thought. Until recently, now the cabinet was becoming important to him, because his new friend Simon lived in it. Jake picked up his tablet. He wanted to see if he could beat yesterday's score on his math game. When the tablet came on, he looked at the time. Good, it was after 5. Bedtime was only 4 hours away. Jake loved bedtime. It was a favorite part of the day. Well, that and sleep itself. Sleep was way more fun than being awake. He could do things in sleep he couldn't do when he was awake. But bedtime was even better than sleep. It was when Simon came to visit. In the basement, Margie put the latest load of towels in the old washing machine and started up. Barty got scared and white-lit affectionately. When the machine began the cycle as usually efficiency, Margie was pretty sure the machine and his pal, the battered dryer next to it, were relics from another era. But they were giving up next yet. That was good because it was taking care of Jake involved a lot of laundry, and Margie was pretty sure Evan, Jake's dad, couldn't afford to replace the washer and the dryer. She was pretty sure Evan, at this rank, could barely afford her. He paid her the most would pay, and the truth was that at this point she could have if he would have worked for free. She loved Jake like a son. And that's what was making it all so hard. Margie sat down with a faded blue webbed lawn chair it was set up. For reasons she had never understood, in front of the shelves by the stairs, she would go up and get Jake his crackers, but she needed a minute. The basement is cool and compared to the rest of the house. For the first time, she wished they would set up Jake's bed down here. His room had western exposure and it was too hot in the afternoons, but it was so damp down here. The radiation and chemo had annihilated Jake's immune system. A simple cold could kill him. Margie blinked away tears and stared at the tools, games, and camping gear stacked on metal shelves against the wall. A couple dozen boxes labeled by year hinted at the memories his family had made before everything got turned in his head. First, Jake's mom was killed, then he got sick. It wasn't fair. Margie pulled out her cell phone, clicked on the recording app, and started talking. Day 2 of the last round of chemo. Dr. Benjamin was hopeful, but he told me today that Jake will only have 2 more rounds. He had clearly gone beyond the usual number of treatments for this protocol. Tumor is still growing. She paused and swallowed, then continued. But the darkest rain clouds would bring the brightest rainbow. I'm not giving up hope. Nobody is. All the doctors are working hard to find the right combination of treatments. All the nurses are pulling for him. Jake's a favorite of the oncology wing. How could he not be? He's such a sweetheart, so appreciative of everything that's been done. I mean, even when they're sticking him with needles and pumping him full of toxic medicine and he's barfing his guts out, he's still saying, thanks for taking care of me like a saint. A freaking saint. Margie ran her hand through her damp hair. She pulled out a baby monitor and kept it in her pocket. It was on. Of course it was. But he checked the compulsity even when she was in the basement or when she had to go outside to take out the trash and mow the grass. At least she hadn't had to mow for a couple weeks. Everything had browned out in the heat. Sometimes when he looked at the brittle grass and the withered plants around the house, she felt like she had foliage attuned to Jake. It was light dimmed, so everything else was on the property. She looked at the monitor again. She didn't want to miss if Jake called out to her. Not as she did very often. He usually wanted to wait until she was in the room to ask for what he needed. Once she went in his room and found out he'd thrown up all over himself, but he hadn't called her. I knew you were in the basement. I didn't want to make you come upstairs more than you have to already, she said. A saint. Margie turned the recorder again. I wish I started this out when I first came here to work, but I only got this phone on his app. I want to record everything I can remembering about being with Jake, and then keep up the daily stuff from now on, he sighed. I never thought I'd work here this long. It was supposed to be a traditional job because I didn't find the internship I applied for, and I kind of needed to eat. I even obviously was desperate to find someone to take care of Jake, and then, of course, I fell in love with the kiddo, and so, well, in the photography and drawing later after he gets well, Marty tapped the pause button in her app. She heard a falseness in her voice, and after he gets well, she was more worried than he'd admit. She hit the record button. Jake has what he calls a pine nut. It is really a version of the acronym for what he has, PNET, which stands for primitive neuroarterial tumor. After that fancy name for a kind of brain tumor, that specific kind of PNET is pinoblastomia. Then even explained this to Jake as best he could. Jake said, cool, I have a pine nut. He was barely 6 years old at the time. I don't think he thinks it's so cool now. He had all treatments and throw his kind of tumor, and nothing's working. His headaches and double vision are getting worse. They tried removing the tumor, but they couldn't get it all, and it grew back, and now it keeps growing. And I've given up hope, but she pressed to stop. She was going to record that Jake's head neurologist said. The odds are against him. If she recorded it, it would make it real. The washing machine thumped as it shifted, agitating the towels and draining the soapy water. Marge, he jumped up, and she'd been down there for so long. Maybe she'd get up to her recording later, after Jake was asleep. Batter up, Margie leaned over Jake and kissed his forehead. Her lips were sticky in lip gloss, but Jake always waited until she was gone to wipe the forehead clean. Jake smiled at her and snuggled his bat closer to the side. His bat was a plush baseball bat named Bodie. Margie made it for him not long after he became his nanny. And 3 years before, as soon as he announced he'd been too old for teddy bears, he regretted it. He really did love his teddy bear, but every time his dad called him my little man, he felt like a baby for wanting to hang on to something like that. Somehow, clutching a baseball bat, even though it was soft and fuzzy, a goofy, googly-eyed face, his manlier was hungry as a bear. Margie understood that. Jake loved Bodie, but Bodie was smelling a little sour these days. Jake had only thrown up on Bodie once, and Margie had cleaned it, but Bodie was absorbing a smell of all medicines in Jake's body. He could smell them in his sweat. He hated that. Good night, Margie, Jake said. Good night, sweetheart. Jake closed his eyes. He used to wait until she was out of the room to close his eyes, but now he closed them to try to get her to leave the room faster. This wasn't because he didn't like her. He loved her, but Simon would come out if she was there. Usually the eye-closing thing worked. Tonight, it didn't. She didn't leave. Jake hadn't told Margie that Simon was only visit after Jake's lights were off, but he was going to sleep. Margie seemed to believe him when he told her about Simon. However, when he thought he might not like Georgie, he knew Simon was about talking to him about Margie, said good night and left. Jake made himself breathe slowly and evenly so she'd think he was going to sleep, and still she stayed. He knew he was watching him. She did that sometimes. She'd sit on the edge of the bed and she thought he was sleeping. She knew he wasn't, but he pretended to be. Jake wondered what she saw when she looked at him. Did she see what he was been a glimpse of himself in the mirror? A bald kid with grayish skin, sunken cloudy green eyes, and the dark circles haunting his cheekbones? He didn't seem able to see Jake, the real Jake, in a long time. But he remembered that Jake, the Jake that had long freckled face, bright green eyes, and a big smile, and a thick tangle of brown curls were usually falling over his eyes. The bed shifted, letting him know Margie was standing, and he wanted to hear the wood floor creak in the spot between the grown rug and under the bed and the door. When he heard the creak, he knew it was only a few more minutes. Just a few more minutes until Simon came. Margie closed the door to Jake's room. He curled on his side and hugged Bodie. He waited. While he waited, he counted. It only took 17 counts before he heard the voice coming through a little cabinet door. Hey, Jake. The first night Simon had talked to Jake, Simon had made it clear that he would be in his cabinet until Jake got well enough to walk to his cabinet, open the door, and find him. When you can do that, I'll be here waiting for you. At first, Jake thought it was weird, but he didn't want Simon to leave, so he accepted it. Sometimes he wondered why Simon had to talk to him inside the cabinet, but he was just having so much fun talking to his friend that he forgot to care about it. So, what'd you do today? Simon asked. Jake sighed. It wasn't a great day. Usually 2 days after chemo, I do okay, but I threw up, and Simon made a plurp sound. No, that's not... What did the real Jake do today? Oh, yeah. Jake wasn't sure if he'd forgotten Simon's rules. Jake wasn't supposed to talk about things the way they were. He was supposed to talk about things the way they'd be if a normal kid were able to do normal things. He grinned. I played... Oh, wait, I almost forgot. Would you like some crackers? I would have some here for you. Jake waved his hand toward the little plate of crackers sitting on his nightstand. A small glass of juice sat next to it. Margie had said, Simon would need something to wash down the crackers. That's very nice of you, Jake, Simon said. But no, thank you. I'll be here until it's time for you to find me. Jake realized he only thought the idea of offering Simon something to eat. I could push the crackers towards the door, he said. Simon laughed. That's okay. It's enough you thought about giving me some. Makes me feel good. Thanks. Okay, now tell me what you did today. Oh, well, I played in a sprinkler today with my friends. Which friends? The Henderson kids, you know, Patty and Davy, and Vic, the twins from across the street. Ellie and Evie were there, and Kyle, Clay, and Gerard from the street behind us. And they were trying to see who would slide the farthest. You slid the grass and then got really wet? Simon's voice, a little bit higher than Jake's, went even higher. He sounded real excited. I did that today too, Simon said, and I got grass stains on my knees. They're still green. Mike laughed. Mine too. Cool, what else did you do? Well, before we ran to the sprinkler, we played softball in the park. That's why I was so good with the sprinkler later. It was not really hot in the park. I slid like crazy. That was really dry. It was really dry where I played, and so when I slid into first, I scuffed up my knee. You should see the marks. I got some scrapes too, Jake said. They're not bad though, it didn't hurt. Mine didn't hurt either, but my knees felt like sandpaper. I think it was fun. My dad once said stuff like this a badge of honor. Well, I like that. Jake smiled and reached for his perfectly smooth knee. He imagined that it felt rough. He concentrated. He could make his fingers believe he had scrape on his knees. He didn't even feel a string on his skin. So, did you make it? Make it where? The first base when you slid. Jake grinned. I sure did. Then I saw second too. Way to go. When did that happen? I got third in deep fry ball. Super cool. I started home for the next fly ball, but it wasn't far enough, and Clay caught it easily, so I could run back to third. Can of corn? What? That's what my grandpa always called easy fly balls. How come? Simon laughed. You always like to know why, right? Sure. Jake would have to look it up on his tablet, but he had to keep his eyes closed. Yeah, I like to know why too. So I asked my grandpa when he can of corn thing to start a couple ways. The first way was because when they used to sell groceries in small doors on the high shelves, the men who owned the stores, they were called grocers. Grandpa said we needed long poles to knock cans of vegetables off high shelves and can them in the aprons. Corn was the most popular vegetable, and that's why it made his way into saying. I think I saw one of the grocers in Western movie once, Jake said. Yeah, me too. It was like his grandpa said. So, what's the other way? The other? Oh, yeah. Well, Grandpa said a can of corn would have started as many years ago. Games were played in cornfields. That's cool. Yeah, but I think it'd be hard to find a ball under his big, tall corn plants. It would be like playing baseball and hide and seek at the same time. Jake laughed. That's funny. Simon laughed too. So what really finally happened in the game? Oh, well, Victor hit the double, so I ran home. Awesome. It was fun. So what did you do after the game? We went for ice cream. I love ice cream. What flavor did you get? Chocolate, duh. Simon laughed. I had chocolate ice cream today too, and I ended up spilling some on my shirt. Did you do that? Yeah, I did. Right on my shirt. Sometimes chocolate stains don't come out in the wash. Oh, well, if it doesn't, we'll remember that ice cream for a long time, right? Yeah, I bet you're right, Jake said. He yawned. It sounds like you're tired. How about I come back tomorrow night? Jake wanted to stay awake, but he really couldn't. Okay, I'd like that. Me too. Good night, Jake. Good night. Margie was awake the next morning when the phone rang. It was early, and he hoped Jake would sleep through the ring so he'd surprise him. Hi, Evan, he said. Hi, Margie. How's my little man? He's strong like his dad. Evan laughed. Flattery doesn't work on soldiers. Margie grinned. It's worth a try. Yeah, one of the worst ones so far. I still don't understand why medicine is supposed to make him better makes him much worse. Hopefully one day they'll find a better treatment. Margie heard someone shout on the phone line. Everything okay? Sure, guy's letting off some steam. You ever do that, Evan? What, let off steam? Me? No, steam is pretty much what keeps me going. Margie laughed. Is there anything you need to tell me? Evan asked. Margie tried to remember what he had to say at the point we had sure to talk to Jake. You never knew when these calls would be cut short. I already emailed you about the chemo, so no, you're up to date. And you? What about me? How are you holding up? I'm fine. Well, I'm not fine, but I'm fine enough that we throw to death if everyone else, namely you and Jake, were as fine as I am. Well, that's fine then. Evan chuckled. Margie laughed again. She loved that this man on the other side of the world was the man who had a life and death situation pretty much every day. This man with a very sick son, a widower, his soldier, always managed to make her laugh. Margie stood and headed toward Jake's room. I assume you're already ready to talk to him, she said to Evan, raring. Margie pushed Jake's door open and lifted his head. She pointed at the phone in her hand. It's your dad. Jake pushed himself up and grinned. His eyes flashed and hid her old brightness for just a second before pain dimmed them again. Here's your little man, Margie said on the phone. You take care of you, Evan said. He didn't respond. He handed the phone to Jake. Hi, Dad. Margie adjusted the pillow behind Jake so he could relax and still remain sitting more upright. She smiled at him and then him with the dad. Yeah, Margie's been mean to me as usual, really mean. His laughter rang out as he left the room. That night, Jake forgot again and tried to tell Simon about his conversation with his dad at the appointment in Mr. Betterman. And as usual, Simon said, I want to hear about what real Jake did today. Oh yeah, right. Jake wondered why he couldn't remember that, but he'd worry about that later. Today, my dad and I went to the movies, Jake said. He figured the real Jake would have a dad who was home and do things with him. Really? What did you go see? It was a sci-fi movie about robots. Oh, that sounds great. I went to the movies too and I had popcorn. Did you have popcorn? Yeah. I bet you got butter all over your face, right? And on your clothes? And did you get some popcorn stuck in your teeth? I sure did. Yeah, I did. Right between my two front teeth. Cool. What else did you do today? My friends and I built a fort out of sticks in the backyard. Same friends you played with yesterday? Uh-huh. It was hot. And we needed more shade. So we built shade. I mean, not really. We built a fort, though. I love building forts. I built one, too. I got a splinter. Did you get a splinter? James out his index finger and said, yeah, I did. I still have these little brown mark under my skin on the end of my finger where I got the splinter once. That's another badge of honor? Yeah, exactly. Margie stretched out a twin bed nestled under the eaves in the cave-like room. She always wished she was taller than 5'3", but she never... Ever since she started working for Evan, her size about served her. Evan's bungalow was small, and a living room, a tiny kitchen, 2 bedrooms, and a bath on the first floor. There was an itsy-bitsy room with slanted ceilings upstairs that he even called a half floor. He'd been using a room as an office, but he cleared it out and put a twin bed and an almost doll-sized bureau, and a nightstand for Margie when she took the job. The furnishing was sparse, but the room had built-in shelves and cabinets. Also, like the window that looked out of the upper branches of the apple trees in the backyard. One of these trees reached within a foot of the window. Previous years, she had been able to pluck an apple tree from this tree. The trees made her feel as though they lived in a woodland tower like a cartoon princess Jake that she resembled. Right now, most of the window was obscured by a pestle fan blasting out nearly enough air into the little room. Margie's hair blew over her head and struck in her skin. He hated having the fan on high speed because it was almost as loud as a droning as an engine. The sound made her nervous. She was afraid she wouldn't be able to hear Jake if he called out. Margie picked up her phone and tapped the recording jab. Jake barely ate anything this evening, just a couple of crackers. If I didn't know better, I think he hated my cooking, he laughed, and found was forced. But I do know better. When I first came here, Jake couldn't get enough of my mac and cheese and my lasagna, she sighed. But he hasn't had an appetite in a while. Margie paused and listened. She heard a baby monitor she held on her nightstand. It was toggled at a high volume. Did Jake just make a sound? No, nothing. Margie set her phone down and ordered herself to go to sleep. She wondered if she could apply for a change. The next night, Jake told Simon about the pizza he and his friends ate after they ran through the sprinkler again. I had pizza too, Simon said. Did you get pizza sauce all over your clothes and all over your face? I sure did. Jake laughed. Yep, I still have some here. There. He thought he tasted tomatoes and garlic at the corner of his mouth. Wow, he was getting good at imagining things, because all he really had for dinner was a couple bites of scrambled egg and 2 bites of toast. He still felt bad about all the food he wasted. When he had said to Margie, she said, oh, don't worry, I'll box it up and I'll send it to needy kids. That made him laugh so hard he snorted. He could just imagine a package of scrambled eggs going through the mail. It would spoil, he said through his giggles, and that would be bad. Margie said, very, very bad, they said together. I tell you what, Margie had begun. How about we send some of your allowance to a place that helps feed kids who needs food? That'll make you feel better. Jake felt a surge of excitement. Yes, good deal, Margie had said. So, what else do you do? Simon asked. Jake immediately felt bad. He was thinking about Margie while Simon was here. Oh, well, after we had pizza, we went to the twins' house. We have air conditioning and we were all really hot. What did you do in there? We finger painted. Can you believe it? I've only done that since I was really little. Oh, I love finger painting. All that cool sloppy paint. I did that today too. And I got different colored paint under every one of my fingernails. Did you do that? I bet you did. Jake smiled and found the rainbow colors under his nails. Oh yes, I did that too. Now my fingers are a rainbow. Exactly, mine too. Jake was going to say something else about the paints, but instead he yawned. You getting tired? Simon asked. A little. That's okay. I can leave so you can go to sleep. But hey, remember what I told you. When you're well enough to walk around and do stuff, then you can come and open the cabinet door. I'll be here waiting for you when it's time, okay? Okay. Margie stepped out of the front porch to clear her head. Before she went to bed, movement in the Henderson's yard startled her, and she whirled to peer through the spotty light. Sorry, Gilligan, Henderson said softly. It's just me. Gilligan stepped into the light and cast his porch lamp. And she was wearing pale blue bathing suit under a darker blue t-shirt, and she was drenched. So Margie suddenly realized they could hear a measured spitting sound of the sprinkler in Gillian's yard. Were you running through the sprinkler? Gillian grinned. small, tall, and broad-shouldered. Gillian was weather-faced and a flyaway sun-bleached hair of a farmer's wife. Even though she was married an accountant, she once told Margie she got a rugged look from the running after half of the neighborhood children. Because Gillian was a stay-at-home mom with infinite patience, most of the kids tended to congregate to her house. And despite having a house full of kids every day, Gilligan was always asking Margie if there was anything she could do to help. Margie figured Gilligan was at least 15 years older than Margie, but they've become good friends. Fun is not just kids, Gillian said. I was also hot. I was sure I was going to combust. Margie laughed. I hear you. And then the kids are up and they don't want mom and their sprinkler. It's embarrassing, she mimicked her daughter's voice. Are they really that age already? I think mine are born at that age, Gillian said. Margie laughed. Hey, you want to join me? Margie looked down at her t-shirt and shorts. Why not? When she hesitated at the baby monitor, she pulled it out of her pocket and looked at it. She didn't see it that wet. Gilligan saw Margie staring at the baby monitor. Wait, here. She trotted toward her house. Margie listened to Gillian open and close her squeaky screen door. She watched the car go by and then looked up to try to find the Big Dipper. He spotted it seconds before she heard Gillian's screen door creak again. She looked forward to Gillian's two-story craftsman. Gillian's house shared stylings of Evan's, but hers was probably 4 times bigger. Gillian's jogged over. Here, she managed to Georgie's zip paper plastic bag. You'll still be able to hear it, but it won't get wet. You're brilliant. I'm a mom. Working the problem is my specialty. Margie dropped the baby monitor in the bag. Come on, Gillian said. Margie let Gillian lead her through the adjacent yard, and the 2 women began running through the sprinkler like little girls, back and forth, in and out, twirling and skipping. They played in the water, danced over the soggy grass, dirt squishing between their toes and water spraying in their face. Margie could remember last time she felt so light and free. Nearly half an hour, they staggered to Evan's front porch and collapsed, dripping on the steps. Margie realized her muscles were more relaxed than they had been in months. For several minutes, she breathed and dripped in silence, and Margie started to cry. Gillian put her arms around Margie and pulled her close. It sucks, Gillian said. It just sucks. He's a great kid. Yes, Margie said, he is. The next day, the bus before noon, someone knocked at Jake's window. Jake heard his name be called. He craned his neck to see around the fan. The sun's rays spirited to the window and advanced nearly all the way through the room. So I trickled down to Jake. Jake, you in there? Grimacing, Jake pushed himself up. Is that you, Brandon? Yeah, that's me. I came to see if you wanted to break out. Brandon's long face appeared just about out of the window. The screen distorted his features. Oh, Brandon, I can't. I'm not supposed to get up without help. I'm not sure I'm supposed to go out. Yeah, but what if you wanted to? Brandon pressed his face into the screen and squished his nose and made a silly face at Jake. Jake laughed. He looked toward his room's half-open door. He wasn't sure that Margie was, but he knew she was there someplace. If she had to leave the house, she got Miss Henderson to stay with Jake. And Miss Henderson always gave in to give him a hello hug, and then she arrived. Margie didn't leave often, though. Mostly she had things delivered at the house. If she went out, he went with her, because most of what he had to do was take him to the doctors and treatments. Come on, Jake, I haven't seen you forever, Brandon whined. I miss you. Jake looked through the window again, even through the screen. You could see Brandon's blonde hair sticking straight up. He smiled. I miss you too. Brandon was Jake's best friend from school. They used to be inseparable. For the first year, the doctors found Jake's pine nut. He went to school as much as he could. In spite of his headaches, when he had brain surgery to try to get the tumor out, he had home for several weeks. Then he went back to school again as soon as he could. For a year before, he'd gone to school about half time. Now school was impossible at all. He was too weak and sick. But maybe he could go out with Brandon. Wouldn't that be cool? Jake was already dressed. He refused to sit around in pajamas or underwear. Even in the worst days, he wanted to be dressed. So he went in jean shorts and a tan t-shirt. He didn't have any shoes on, but he knew slip-on sandals were there, just under the bed. He could wear those. Are you coming? Brandon asked. I thought we could go to the arcade if you're tired and weak. Or we can just do the racing games if you want to sit down, or... Jake loved the racing games. Okay, he was going to go for it. All right, give me a minute, Jake said. Okay. Brandon pulled back the corner of his mouth and stuck out his tongue against the screen. Then he said, I'll be out here melting. If you take too long, I might be a puddle. But I'll be here. Just scrape me into a bowl or something and we can go. Jake laughed. Okay. He sat straight up and waited for the room to settle around him. He blinked to be sure to tell echoes from the real thing. He had double vision for so long he'd learned to adapt. But sometimes when he reached something like for a sock, he'd reach for a sock that was an echo instead of the real sock. Pretty sure he could tell what was real and what wasn't. Jake swung his legs over the side. All 4 of his pale legs were bony. Come on, he encouraged him. Hold me up. I'm not that heavy. His legs apparently disagreed because the first time he tried to stand, he fell back onto the mattress. Barely. He nearly fell to the floor, but caught himself in the side rail of his hospital bed. Then he first got into the hospital bed, he'd been upset. I won't sleep in that. I'm not dying. He yelled at Margie. Of course you're not, he said. But you're a good kid, and you know if something will make my life easier if you don't mind doing it. Then she put it away that way. How could he refuse? And now he was glad he had the bed. Using the side rails, he was able to prop himself upright until his legs remembered that what it was standing on your own. He felt like a baby horse and seen once on TV. It was wobbling all over the place. But horses stood, and so could he. Jake concentrated. He made himself stay upright, even though his head started pounding and pressure built up behind his eyes. He looked down, spotted the sandals, and fished for them with his right foot. No way was he going to be able to lean over. He could put him on the floor to be sure. Bending his knee to move his right foot around made his knees almost give out. Almost, but not quite. He was able to snag the right sandal and put it on. Then he planted his weight on the sandal. He gave him more stability, and then began poking at the other sandal with his left toe. Eventually, he snagged the one, too. From the outside the window, Brandon called a strangled cry. I'm melting. Shh, say hiss. Margie will hear you. Brandon laughed. Jake pushed away from the bed, letting go of the railing. His body swayed like a skinny tree in the big wind, but he didn't fall. He could do this. Oh, I forgot to tell you, Brandon said, appearing in his window. Hey, you got out of bed? Good job. What'd you forget to tell me? Jake asked, and he got up with the nerve, and he took one stiff, hesitant step. He almost fell again, but he was beginning to think it wasn't a great idea. Oh, I forgot to tell you about my brother's wagon, Brandon called. I thought you might need a ride at the arcade. Well, I could make it easier for sure. Jake could take it to the window, and then Brandon could help him out in the wagon. And Brandon could pull him with the idea. Jake gave it a little more confidence. Why didn't you say so? He called out as he took another step. This time, he was a little steadier. The sound has melted my brain. It's running out of ears. Ew. Yeah, exactly. Hurry. Jake couldn't take another step. He stayed up. He took another while he was standing. One more. Still up. One more. He was clutching the windowsill, looking out at Brandon, who was pretending to sword fight an imaginary opponent, using a stick. Hey, there you are, Brandon started to stick in the window. Here I am. Jake braced his hip against the windowsill and reached out an unset screen. He could push it out. His head went a little fuzzy when the double screen got a little difficult to separate out. He managed it, though, and he gave the screen what he thought was a real shove. Brandon lifted the screen out. Score. So this is so awesome, Brandon said. Yeah, Jake agreed. Okay, give me a second. Can I hold your arm or something? Yeah, that would help. Jake managed to plant his butt on the ledge. Holding on to the window jab with his left hand, he reached for the right hand open through the window. Brandon took his hand. I've got you, he said. Jake hoped that was true. Leaning back against the window jamb, he shifted his weight and he swung his right leg through the window. He got a little too much momentum and he almost threw his whole body through. But Brandon steadied him. His headache got work and his stomach started to do flips. He tried to ignore both. Concentrating, Jake was able to swing the other leg through the window. This time he was with a little more control. Okay, now just turn your a little more and slide out of the window, Brandon said. I'll be sure you don't fall. Jake paused and peered out of the world he saw a little of these days. It was so bright and hot and dry. It just had been the last time he looked. A roasting breeze stirred the elm's branches, and they made scratching sounds against the house's burnt brown siding. Jake heard the twins giggle across the street, and he suddenly felt giddy, like he was sneaking out of school. Not like he had ever done that, but it was also felt like he was going for presents before Christmas. He had done that. And he found them too. When Christmas came, he was let down because he already knew what he was getting. It was a lesson. Sometimes waiting was better. Are you coming the rest of the way? Brandon asked. Oh yeah. Jake steadied himself at an open window, took a deep breath, and then slid out. If Brandon hadn't been there, they had ended up heaping on the ground. But Brandon was true to his word. He caught Jake and held him up. You good? Brandon said. I'm okay. Brandon looked at Jake's face. He frowned. Whoa, I didn't know. Know what? Brandon shook his head. Nothing. He looked around as if he couldn't help. If I help you to the tree, can you lean on it until I get the wagon over here? Jake saw a bright red wagon parked on the sidewalk. Okay. With Brandon holding a tight grip, Jake began to walk, but the nausea got worse, and his leg got weaker. Suddenly, Jake collapsed and vomited all over the dry grass. Brandon jumped back in time to avoid getting spewed. Jake was glad for that. He didn't even look up to his friend. He was too embarrassed. He felt like he was used up, some sort of like empty toothpaste tube, all squeezed out and limp. How was he going to get back up? The answer to this question came flying around the corner of the house. It was Margie, running to Jake if she knew he needed her. What in the big wide world are you doing? Margie's voice got higher than Jake had ever heard. Brandon took a couple more reverse steps, distancing himself from both the vomit and Margie's obvious upset. Jake heard the screen door screech and slap. Miss Henderson came running around the house. I just saw what was going on. What can I do? Brandon's eyes got really wide. He looked from Miss Henderson to Margie, who was suddenly as pale as Jake felt. Margie bent over Jake. Come on, you silly boy. Let's move you just a little this way. Miss Henderson joined him. Let me help. Thanks, Margie said. Together the women lifted Jake and pulled him away from the mess, sitting him with soap his back was against the elm tree. His bark felt rough against the thin material in his t-shirt. Jake pressed his hands against the tree's root and fell onto them. Miss Henderson squatted next to him. He brushed her fingers across his forehead. Margie straightened and pointed his finger at Brandon. You. Brandon winced. Margie glanced at Jake and Miss Henderson. Then she took a deep breath and turned to Brandon. She lowered her voice. I'm sure you meant well, but you needed to go home. And don't try this again. He's not... She cleared her throat. He's not well enough to do that now. I'm sorry, Brandon said. I know. Now get. Margie softened her words with a soft smile. Brandon ran to the wagon and grabbed his handle. He ran down the sidewalk with the wagon rattling behind him. Jake watched until Brandon was out of sight. He was watching the fun and freedom run out of his life. Margie squatted next to Jake and Miss Henderson. What are you thinking? I thought I could be the real Jake. Miss Henderson looked away. Margie twisted her mouth and didn't say anything. You wait right here with Miss Henderson. I'm going to go get the wheelchair, okay? Okay. Promise? Pinky swear, Jake said. Margie smiled and curled her pinky finger around one Jake extended. You just aged me several years. So you're like, what, 100 now? Hardy har, Margie said. That would make me 200, Miss Henderson said. She and Jake laughed and Margie trotted toward the house. Simon came as soon as Jake closed his eyes later that evening. Even though he was going to sleep later than usual, his little failed adventure was drained him completely, which sucked. Hi, Jake. Hot today, huh? So what did you want to do today? Simon asked. Brandon and I were going to go to the arcade, Jake said. You did go to the arcade? Oh yeah, yes, we went. Jake smiled and curled up. What did you do there? Simon asked. We had so much fun, Jake smiled. We played all the racing games. I love the racing games. I love those too. I don't want one of those racing games today, too. And I won enough tickets to a bunch of pencils. Did you win? I bet you won. We did. We got a smiley face erasers with my tickets. Oh, yeah, those are fun. I got those, too. I like them because they cheer me up when I'm feeling down. You feel down? Sometimes, but not very often, though. I'm busy having fun. Yeah, me too. So, hey, did you get a slushie at the arcade? Simon asked. I got one. I got grape. It turned my tongue purple. Would you get one? Jake laughed. He stuck out his tongue and imagined it was purple. Yes, my tongue's purple, too. Purple power, Simon said. Purple power, Jake repeated. Jake couldn't believe how much he really felt like he'd gone to the arcade the day. He sure had. Oh, we did a game where you step in the light squares. Me and Brandon were just busting a move. I'm totally impressed, Jake. I mean, I'm pretty bad at those things. When I dance, I'm all spastic and stuff. Jake could hear the clothes rustling and feel breathing sounds coming from the inside of the cabinet, like someone was doing a dance right now. You know what's funny? Simon asked. What? I did the dance thing too. Even though I'm a total spaz at it, I was into it, and I stepped in a shoelace and ended up breaking it. Have you ever done that? I did that today. No. So you know what it is? Badge of honor, Jake and Simon said in unison. Then they laughed together. What other games did you play today? Simon asked. I was playing a shooting game, the one where you're shooting bad guys like robbers and stuff. Brandon wanted to shoot aliens, but didn't know how to shoot aliens. I like aliens. I wouldn't do the hunting one either. I like shooting animals. I really like animals. I'm with you on that. Jake smiled, thinking about the arcade games. He'd like to make them forget his needing to see Simon. Are there any other friends in the arcade? Simon asked. Yeah, Jake said. A few more. Did you play pinball? Simon asked. Margie sat on the floor cross-legged in the hallway outside of Jake's room. Her back was pressed against the wall. The house smelled like chocolate pudding and she made to Jake a couple hours before, and the lemon polish she'd rubbed on the hallway's wood trim in the morning. Evan didn't expect her to do things like polish woodwork, and Jake was better off in the house stayed Gym 3, and she was better off without keep moving. So when Jake slept, she found things to do. The whole house was spotless and shining. Slumped against the glossy hardwood baseboard, Margie let tears slide down her face. She didn't want to listen. It felt like eavesdropping. Unless she put earplugs, she couldn't avoid hearing Jake and his visitor were saying. And she could never put earplugs or earphones or that matter. She always needed to be able to hear Jake. And she listened to Jake told Simon she wasn't trying to play the best pinball in the world and he'd like to try. I do too, Simon said. Margie got to the stereo effect. She listened to Simon's voice. It was something through the door, muffled, and it was also coming through the phone she held up in her right hand, which was a position right next to the backup baby monitor she held in her left hand. Margie felt like a magician with the magic secrets hidden behind a shimmering curtain. If Jake got out of bed and came to the hall, she'd see how the magic worked. But he wouldn't get out of bed without Margie's help. The secret was safe. And when even Evan's idea, and Margie thought it was brilliant. Evan called Jake almost every day. In the first few months of the tumor he was found, Jake was receptive and put his dad's positive encouragement. When Evan said, keep your chin up, Jake always said brightly, I will. And when the surgery failed and Jake would go through the radiation chemotherapy, he started getting sullen. For months, Evan tried to encourage Jake, and for months, Jake refused to accept the cheer. Evan told Margie they needed some magic. Jake needed to believe in someone who could pull him out of the horror of the daily life and lead him to joy, a different possibility. That's how Simon was born. Jake knew about the baby monitor that sat on top of his chest of drawers. He didn't like it, but he knew it was there and he accepted what he needed for it. But he didn't, however, know about the backup monitor that was inside the little white cabinet. The monitor was linked to one of the Margie held, and now picked up played Evan's disguised voice from inside the cabinet. Even still received was Simon. Evan decided Jake was be more responsive to someone his own age, so Evan downloaded a voice distorter to turn your voice into a little kid's voice. And when Evan suggested the idea of becoming a little friend for Jake, a friend who lived in Jake's cabinet and only visited at bedtime, Margie wasn't sure Jake would listen to Simon any more than he listened to Evan. But she went along with it. She was still willing to try anything. But Jake didn't listen. He clearly loved those nightly visits. It made her smile. And he closed his eyes right after and good night. He knew he was trying to get her to leave the room faster. The more he imagined himself as a normal little boy, Evan told Margie, the greater the odds he could be someday. He'd have to give up. Margie had agreed. Jake started getting sleepy while Simon was talking about pinball machines. He wanted to hear about Simon said, you know a secret about being good at pinball? What, Jake asked. Nudge and tilt. What does that mean? Well, some people think it's cheating, but I don't know. It's like when you shove the machine, you know? When you hit or something, sometimes when the flippers won't do what you want, you can save the ball with a little bump of sort. I wish, Jake stopped himself. He was about to say he wished he could try that someday. Instead, he said, I'm going to try that next time Brandon and I go to the arcade. Yeah? Cool. Jake yawned loudly. I think you need to get some sleep, Simon said. Jake mumbled. Yeah, I think so too. And remember, Simon said, when you can walk again, come open the door of the cabinet. I'll be here waiting for you. I remember, Jake said, and he fell asleep. Margie quickly took and walked away from Jake's door. "How are you and Jake doing?" And Evan asked, and she put the phone to her ear. Margie stepped to the living room and sat down in the small olive sectional under the front picture window. "I'm okay. I think I'm draining him more, though. He's weaker than usual." Margie had already told Evan about the adored arcade trip. But Evan was proud of Jake's attempt, but relieved he had made it far. "That could have been bad," he said. "Very, very bad," Margie and Evan said together. She grinned, thinking about how Jake had started. Evan had wanted Jake to meet his uncle for the first time. Michael, even a brother and only living family, that lived in Europe for years, and he never met Jake or Jake's mom. Michael was back in the States, and Evan was taking Jake to Margie to meet him. The one drive away was several hours. Michael is a serious dude. Evan awarded Jake and Margie as they travel. He's a little different. He's intense and making money, and he's really good at it. But the way he is about it, and just the way he is, can make him seem like he's not human. "So he's like a cyborg without programming?" Jake had asked. They all laughed. Just before they arrived at the hotel where Michael was staying, Jake had eaten a candy bar. No one thought of it much until Jake tried to hug his uncle. Michael, spotting the chocolatey fingers, he had stepped out of Jake's reach. "I must exercise caution. You could get chocolate on my suit, and that'd be bad. Very, very bad." They all had an awkward, stiff dinner together, and then they headed home. Driving down the freeway in the dark, Evan had said they should stop for gas and they run off. "And that would be bad," Margie had said. Jake piped out of the back seat, saying in a very imitation of Uncle, "Very, very bad." Margie smiled at the memory. "Margie, you there?" Evan's voice nudged through the phone. "Sorry, I was thinking about the trip meet Michael." "Oh, that was bad. Very, very bad," they said again, in unison. They laughed. Margie wondered when the joke would get old. "Speaking of Michael, I'll talk to him. I hate to ask him for favors, but I can't afford the air conditioning right now. I'll ask him to get one for Jake. Sometimes the soldiers stack it up and take one for the team," Margie said. Evan laughed. "You do that every day. What I do is a privilege," Margie asked. Evan was silent. When he cleared his throat and said he had to go. Now Margie leaned against Jake's door and listened, even breathing coming through the baby monitor. Jake didn't snore, so it was challenging to know when he was deeply asleep. Once, when she was sure he'd gone to sleep, she'd open the door of the room and only had him sit up and say, "What's wrong, Margie?" He had to think fast. "I thought I heard you call out," she said. Jake had accepted it. He must have been dreaming, he thought. Tonight, though, when Margie opened the door, Jake didn't sit up. He kept breathing deeply, with inhales and exhales. He was asleep. But Margie still didn't move. He stood by the door with her eyes closed, listening to breathing. Her closed eye blocked the evidence of Jake's illness. They erased the IV stand lurking in the corner of the room. Jake didn't need it right now, but sometimes, when he couldn't keep anything down, they had to hook him up and receive fluids and nutrients. Her closed eyes removed the hospital bed and the line of perception meditation bottles marching across the top of the chest drawers. They also transformed Jake's bald head into a thick brown mess of hair that Margie could remember, detailing that his first started taking care of Jake. He liked having his hair long, and Evan let him. "There is also no law that says boys can't have short hair," Evan said. Margie thought it was funny coming from a man with a buzz cut. Margie opened her eyes and adjusted to reality. There was Jake, curled up on his side, body clenched against Jake's chest and belly, tucked under his chin. The pale yellow glow of the nightlight put a shine on Jake's bald head, and it cast deeper than usual shadows under his eyes. He was sleeping in his sleep, smiling in his sleep. That made Margie happy. He hoped he was playing an arcade, running through the sprinklers, which reminded her he needed to get to work. Margie was 3 nights behind on her ongoing project. 2 nights before, Jake's sleep was been unsettled. He kept waking up. Margie was sure it was caused by a change in dosage in one of the medications. Thankfully, Evan had arranged for her to have the authority to deal with directly the doctors about Jake's care. So she got Dr. Boderman, told him that she was returning to Jake's original dosage. That would do the trick. But then the next night when he slept, she was so tired that she fell asleep and never got to the project. When Margie first started working for Evan, he thought she was going to hate the sleeping arrangement. Being stuck in a low room in a half floor, she didn't even look for a living position. She liked her little apartment, and she was sure claustrophobia would do her in if she stayed there. But the position was full-time, with Evan being away so much, and over time the house ended up charming her. Chock full of wooden trim and built-in shelving and cabinetry of the common of craftsman's home, this house has been more character within its walls. The original owner was obviously been fond of putting things out on the site. Because the builder had put little hidey holes in every room, he also built funny little pieces of furniture, specific to certain rooms, which have stayed in the house over the years. One of these pieces was a small white cabinet in Jake's room. Because Jake had plenty of storage in the closet and other parts of the room, the cabinet was sat empty for years. Now, though, it had a purpose. Margie's project waited for her to Jake's little cabinet, which was only a few feet from Jake's bed. But behind the left the ugly green plaid chair. Although she would take her project out of the cabinet and work on it in a room, she would never seem to do it right. Her project lived in the little cabinet. Moving it felt wrong. Jake let out a deep sigh in his sleep. Margie froze with her hand to the cabinet door. She breathed in and out. Sadness, but yeah, Jake went back to the room. When Jake didn't move again, he grasped the knob and cautiously pulled the door open. Margie quietly sat down at the open door, and she waited for sure Jake was still sleeping deeply. She turned to the headlight lamp she wore and designed for crafters who wanted to sleep up close, but it suited Margie's needs perfectly. It allowed her to aim a small beam at the task without lighting up too much of the room. Jake usually slept hard. There was a low chance he'd wake him, but she didn't want to take the chances. In the glow of her headlamp, Margie's project told her the simple hand-drawn eyes, one of which blackened. "Hi, cutie," Margie whispered. Margie's project didn't respond. It was a good thing. Margie's project was a doll. If it would respond to her, she had shot up, whacked it on the head, and run for her life. This doll was Evan's brainchild, almost 3 feet high, with plain white, at least originally, and now covered in evidence of adventures Jake had been in his mind with Simon. Margie's project was an exercise in hope, or maybe even more than hope. It was an exercise in belief. If you were to fuse an object with enough love and intention, well, that's have life. Everyone apparently thought so, though maybe Margie did too now. The white doll standing in front of Margie with such an object born of simply a white cloth with no face, no clothing, and no features for details of any kind. This doll was now embodied the life of a heavy version of Jake. Weeks of real Jake experience were drawn all over the doll. A blackened eye, for example, representing the day the real Jake stood up to a school bully. Drawn on missing lower teeth represented the day Jake tried a tough trick on a skateboard. The doll's pockets were overflowing with drawings of tickets to movies and amusement parks and zoos. The doll's body was strained with trials and tribulations, a joyful child's life. This doll was a reminder that the boy in question, although fading, was not gone yet. He still had enough imagination to conjure another adventure. Margie set the zipper bag to color markers in the green carpeted floor and folded a piece of paper out of the jeans pocket. The paper held out the activities that the real Jake had done in the previous 3 days. When Jake talked to Simon, Margie took notes. Laying on the paper floor next to the zipper bag, Margie pulled a thick brown marker out of the bag. Nearly every detail of the doll started to make his markers. Sometimes, though, Margie needed to add color. Like now, putting a check mark under the butter on her list. Margie chose a pale yellow marker, too. Concentrating, she knew the butter strain around the doll's mouth. And then she traded a pale yellow marker for a thick brown one, the edge mark of popcorn kernel between 2 teeth. It would look pretty realistic if she did say so herself. She knew the art degree would go good something. Maybe she was missing her calling. She should have been a real kid doll decorator. Maybe Margie grinned and looked at her list. Ah, the splendor. Although Margie drew additions to the doll, sometimes she used props. Like today, reaching in her pocket, Margie pulled out a little plastic bag. Inside the bag were 2 splinters, one of maybe half an inch long. The other was more than a speck. She put one of the splinters on the pad of the doll's index finger, and she put the other splinter on the very tip of the doll's middle finger. Margie looked at her list again. She checked off popcorn and splinters. She moved to the pizza sauce. The doll already had a pizza sauce stain on its chin. Margie added another one in the corner of its mouth, then rubbed a little garlic powder into the white cloth. Like adding a sense to the realism as she would. Like chocolate stain from a few nights ago, she used real chocolate for that, so the doll smelled chocolatey sweet. Satisfied with the pizza stain, she moved on with the rainbow colors of the fingerprints on her nails. It was fun. She didn't put different color at the end of every one of the doll's fingers. Then, using black marker, she drew arcade tickets coming from the doll's pockets. Then once again, she used the prop and she glued a smiley face and eraser to the doll's hand. She thought the little tidbit was so important that she'd sent Gilligan's daughter, Patty, to the arcade to win an eraser for her. It only cost the RG $5 worth of quarters to get it. After she attached the eraser, she gave the doll a small tongue, and she colored purple stains on it. And then she studied the doll's feet. He'd never seen draw shoes on the doll. If she was going to draw a broken shoelace with the shoes, over several minutes, Margie bent over the doll's feet and drew green tennis shoes. Green was Drake's favorite color, and besides, green went the grass stains of the doll's knees. The doll had a lot going in the knee area. In addition to the grass stains, the knees and reddish scrapes and various hues of brown smudges of sliding into base and dirt and mud. The Margie finished her work of the night. She sat back and studied the doll. It was turning into a hot mess with details she kept adding, but she knew that when Jake got to see it, he'd love it. It was intended to be surprised when all was well again. Then she would walk, she'd go to the cabinet, open the door, find the doll, and see things Jake did while sick Jake concentrated on getting well. Margie ignored the sharp twist of her intestines when she thought she heard Jake getting well, when her inner compass telling her that Jake's recovery by no means something you would expect. In fact, it was becoming less of a possibility every day. Stop it, Margie scolded herself in a whisper. He's going to be fine. She gathered the materials and stood. She made sure she closed the cabinet door before tiptoeing out of the room. Jake tried to concentrate on totaling up the rent money he owed to Margie for landing in a hotel-heavy property. She was having trouble counting the gazillion hotels she had, mostly because she was struggling to figure out which were the real hotels and which were echo hotels. She had the same issue with the money. It was real money and which was echo money. Of course, there was no real money, but Jake wished he had at least sure she was part of the world that he was being manufactured by his pine nut. Well, no, it wasn't exactly right. His pine nut didn't make it echoes. Jake concentrated to remember that Dr. Boderman told him right. Dr. Boderman had said that because Jake's tumor was close to the nuclei, that They're in charge of eye movements. The tumor pushed in places they shouldn't. So the nuclei would made Jake see double. Jake had to look up the nuclei to understand what Dr. Motorman was saying. He found out that the nuclei was the neural platform of nucleus, and he looked up nucleus and he discovered the nucleus was a little group of neurons in the central nervous system. Of course, when he had to look that up, neurons in central nervous system, he found out that the nucleus is nerve cell and electrically excitable cell. That made him laugh. He can imagine a little cell plugging into electricity and dancing all around like crazy. The central nervous system, he learned, was a combination of the brain and spine. All the nerves had made it so that the humans could move and feel and think. So basically, this little group of excitable cells was getting too crazy, and while they were partying, they were bothering Jake's eye cells, seeming kind of rude of him, and he wished the nuclei would calm down. He was tired of seeing double. Jake returned to the tension of counting, but he realized that he didn't make a mistake. He had to start over. He didn't want to start over. Grunting, Jake leaped out and flipped the game board off his bed, sending fake money and echoes of fake money flying through the air, along with the houses, hotels, and little playing pieces, like the tiny dog almost hit Margie in the eye. She said, "Hey!" Jake immediately felt bad, and then he was angry that he felt bad, so he screamed. He screamed at the top of his lungs, and Margie didn't stop him. All she did was get up and step over close to his bedroom window. The closing window didn't stop him, though. "Why'd you close it? Are you afraid people are going to think you're murdering me?" Margie looked at him and rolled her eyes. "As if, kiddo. If I wanted to, I could end you so quickly you didn't ever make a sound." Jake's eyes got big. Margie interrupted in a clumsy ninja pose and shouted, "Ayah!" and pretended to kick towards Jake's bed. That made him laugh. Then Margie dropped her foot, stepped on another game piece, and started hopping around the food. Jake laughed even harder. "Sure, mock my pain," she said. Jake kept laughing. Margie stopped and hopping when she went back to the window. "It's hot in here. You closed the window." Jake giggled. "You did." "Oh, did I?" "Yeah, I'll take your word for it." Margie began cleaning up the game. "I assume you're done with this for now." You asked. It's normal to throw a tantrum over a stupid board game. "I'm sorry," Jake said. "I got frustrated." "No," Margie said to pretend relief. "You don't say. I just figured your wires got crossed and these circuits were frying." Jake laughed again. Margie grinned at him in terms of picking up fake money and game pieces of tiny hotels in the house. "I love you, Margie," Jake said. Margie stopped moving. She was bent over, her face turned away from Jake. It took a couple seconds, but she finally straightened and looked at him. Her eyes were moist. "I love you too, Jake." Margie sat on the front porch, swinging in the dark. She was finished with her daily project. Jake was sleeping restlessly, and she baby monitored the pocket as usual. It was too hot for the little room to sleep. He tried relieving on the sofa, but her thoughts would return off, and there she was, using her foot to rock herself back and forth in the hopes and the soothing motion that would relax her. The sky was filled with stars, muted with some of the city in the distance. A couple fireflies darted in and out of the drooping boxer in the corner of the house. Crickets chirped, and the sound of oldies music in the TV show was a lot of shooting wafted across the streets and the open windows. The air smelled dusty and stale. Summer was getting old. Everyone was counting the days until fall brought cooling breezes and the relief of the steady rain. Would Jake make it to fall? Margie groaned and rocked the porch, swinging faster. Her days were getting harder. Not only was Jake's double vision becoming more intense, and the headaches were worsening too, increases in painkiller doses had made him weaker. His last 2 rounds of chemotherapy hit him hard. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that Dr. Benjamin announced that his oncology team was stopping treatment. "We don't have anything else," she told Margie after Jake's last round of chemo. "All we can do is manage his symptoms. If he does get to be too much for you, we can move him to the hospice." "He's not too much," Margie said. Dr. Benjamin nodded and patted her head. "I understand." "Did he?" Margie wondered. "Is this just his nanny?" He heard one of the nurses say the previous week someone had said the nurse if she was Jake's mom. The nurse said, "No, the mom's dead. She's just a nanny." Sometimes Margie wished she was one of the robots Jake liked so much. She wouldn't be just a nanny. She'd be no bothersome feelings to deal with. She hadn't been just a nanny. She started off to say yes, but she lived with the Jake for 3 years. She'd spent enough time with him that she knew him like a son, even back when he was well, before he became an invalid refused to be. She even come to love Evan too, not in any romantic way, but more like a brother. When he was home on leave, gave Margie an option to go on vacation, which had no place she wanted to go be for more than 2 days. A couple times she'd gone home to visit her parents and some old friends while Evan was home. Gilligan would help Evan out when Margie was away, but Margie wasn't long gone. No. So the 3 of them became like a little family, and she was included in outings and movie nights and game nights and a storytelling time, and then of course when Evan was overseas she became Jake's whole world, and now he was her whole world, and she even couldn't muster enough positivity to convince herself that her world was going to continue to spin in its axis. Margie's parents wanted her to come back home. "You're going to be crushed when the door dies. You should get to know her while you can," her dad said to her. "Leave it to the entire Marine to access the emotion of an equation, like when she chopped Jake's falling body in a hospice center. Pack up her things and leave, and forget I ever had a boy named Jake." Just thought made her so angry she wanted to climb through the phone line and strangle her dad. "What happened to you leave no man behind, Dad? Why do you think I want to get you out?" he said. "I'm trying to bring you home whole. It's too late for that." Margie had to deal with it, like she always had. But then the call came. Margie and Gilligan were making chocolate chip cookies. It wasn't a good day for chocolate chip cookies because it was so hot that you probably fried the cookies in the street. But Jake hadn't asked for homemade chocolate chip cookies, and Margie wasn't going to say no. So Margie and Gilligan were sweating together in their little kitchen. Margie had told Gilligan she didn't have to help, but Gilligan insisted. She said she might sweat off a pound or two, but Margie knew Gilligan would no offer moral support. It was a good thing she was there. For as long as Margie had worked for Evan, she knew the call was a possibility. Even so, she never expected it, and she was so caught up in Jake and she tended to forget about Evan's precarious world. So, when it came, she wasn't prepared, especially since it came from Michael. "Margie," Michael said when they answered the phone. His flat, gruff voice was unmistakable. "Hi, Michael. I have notified that Evan's dead." Margie's legs failed her. If Gilligan hadn't been in the kitchen with her, they would have whacked her head on the counter and she went down. Instead, she fell into Gilligan, who was sturdy. It was a lot softer than the counter. Gilligan immediately wrapped her arms around Margie and propped her up. "Apparently an IED hit a vehicle he was in," Michael said. Margie gripped the phone and he tried to breathe. She only met Michael at one time, and she knew the way he processed the world was very different from what was normal, but hearing the news this way was, "You there?" Michael said. She tried to speak, couldn't, and she cleared her throat. "Here. I've got Evan's will here. He named you Jake's guardian and left you the house and some savings. I'm an executor. I'll follow the proper procedures and file what must be filed. I'll bring you papers to sign when they're ready." Margie couldn't find the word in her brain that made sense. Gilligan took the phone from her hand. Margie's voice didn't work again for an hour. Gilligan filled in the gap. While Margie sat in the hard bladder back chair with an oak pedestal table near the kitchen, Gilligan coaxed more details out of Michael, checked on Jake, and Margie with a glass of water, finished the cookies, and brought a load of laundry up to the basement to fold. Gilligan didn't start to cry until she'd begun folding Jake's t-shirts into neat little squares. Margie had been crying off and on the whole time. After the laundry was stacked, the women sat together, holding hands and staring at the table. Margie's mind was blank. Well, not completely blank. It was trying to figure out how to use her tongue to work in concert with the throat and her gums again. Eventually she found her voice. "I'm not crying about Evan," Margie said. Gilligan looked up and nodded. "I know." Margie wiped her eyes. "That sounds awful, though. I mean, I'm devastated that he's gone, of course," she sniffled. Gilligan pushed the box of tissues closer to Margie, who ignored it and wiped her nose in the back of her hand. "It's Jake I'm upset about." Margie dropped her face into her hands. "How am I going to tell him?" Her words muffled in her palms. They were mushy in her thoughts. Gilligan put her hand on Margie's shoulders. Margie looked up. "His oncology team doesn't think he has much longer," she whispered, as if saying the words in a noble tone and hastened the truth into being. Gilligan pressed her lips together and her eyes filled. "I've known Jake since he was a tyke." Her voice was broken. She cleared her throat. "Even when Roxanne moved in here when Jake was 2. Even then, he was creative and kind," he smiled. "I love my kids, and but their oaths of comparison. It breaks my heart." She took her hand and back the table. "But it doesn't go any good to try to figure out the lemon of what is. All we can do is go forward from here." Margie nodded, wanted to do pretty much anything but to go forward from here. "I'm going to go fix some lemonade," Gilligan said. "We're going to drink it, and you'll figure out what's the best time to tell Jake." Margie nodded again. She felt like she was outside of herself. Watching her body do things like nod and sit and fold laundry, she felt separate from the ordinary herself. Getting the news about Evan and unearthed unethered her from the day-to-day concerns. "It's good Michael will handle Evan's estate," Gilligan cut into a lemon. The tart scent filled the room, and it lured Margie part way back into her body. "I never met Michael. He seemed little, well, cool on the phone. He numbers genius, manages money for wealthy people, and makes a killing doing it." You wiped your face. "He's not a bad guy. He just doesn't know how to connect. He doesn't feel the way we do." "I might envy him," Gilligan said. "Me too." The shy robot knew he had to speak up about the glitch. If he didn't, the ship would crash. But he couldn't find his voice. All he could do was make little beeping sounds. Margie cleared her throat and then used a very sweet voice to say bleep, bibbly, bleep, bleep, bloopity, blip, blip, bloop. But Jake tried to smile because he knew it was supposed to be funny, but smiling took more energy than he had. Jake was only half listening to Margie's story. In spite of her attempts at getting comfy again, he was still feeling not comfy, but listening was hard. And the story wasn't great either. Usually Margie told some awesome stories, exciting stories, filled with interesting characters, cool things, but tonight Margie's characters were boring. The shy robot was kind of stupid. But not that he'd tell her that, of course. But he couldn't tell her what he was tired, so he did. Margie frowned and leaned toward Jake. He tilted her head to study his face. Then she picked up his wrist and checked his pulse. Her skin was sweaty, and her hair clung to her neck and the sides of her cheeks, even though she was fanned to blow it around. Jake fought the fan as a knight, battling a dragon, spewing hot fire breath over everything in the room. Tonight, the knight was losing, big time. Margie let go of Jake's wrist and fussed over his IV line. A nurse had come that morning to put it in because he couldn't keep food down. The needle in the back of his hand pinched his tongue. He hated it, but he didn't complain. He also didn't complain about the catheter. He hated it even more than the IV, but he was too weak to take care of things himself, and he was way too old to sweat the bed. "What can I do for you?" Margie asked. "Nothing. I just want to go to sleep." Margie chewed on her lower lip for a second, then nodded and handed him Bodhi. Even though Jake knew Bodhi couldn't make him feel hotter, he gathered his plush back close. It wasn't true that he wanted to go to sleep. That he wanted it was Simon. But he was really excited about talking to Simon tonight because he thought of some cool things he did today. He had been all so hot all day, it felt like the air wasn't even air anymore. It was like lava flowing around the room, choking whatever it touched. Jake was having trouble breathing. But even though he was lying in his bed too weak to do more than lift a thing, he decided he wanted to be on the beach. If he was on the beach in a heat like this, he could jump in the ocean and cool off. Maybe he could body surf or learn how to surf for real. He couldn't wait to tell Simon he did that. Margie bent over Jake and kissed his forehead. Her breath smelled funny. On the surface, it smelled like lemonade, but under the good smell was something bad, something like vomit. Or maybe it was his own breath he was smelling. He'd thrown up the icky yellow stuff a couple times this afternoon. Jake closed his eyes, and as usual, Margie didn't leave the room. He stood by the bed and watched him. He kept his eyes closed and waited. Once he heard a faint shuffle. He opened his eyes slightly to see if Margie had moved. He hadn't. She just shifted position. What seemed as several minutes went by. He thought he heard a sob, and then he attempted to open his eyes and look at Margie, but he remained still. Jake? He opened his eyes. Margie would have ever spoken to him after he closed his eyes. What? I don't think Simon's going to visit tonight. Jake blinked at her. How do you know Simon visits at bedtime? Margie winked at him. I was sure the wink was supposed to be cheerful, but it looks wrong, kind of twisted and out of place. I'm that good, kiddo. Her voice didn't sound right either. Her usual lit in her voice was been flat by something Jake couldn't understand. No, seriously, Jake wasn't in the mood to be teased, especially when the teasing had been done right. Margie sat on the edge of the bed. I heard you talking to him through the door, she admitted. You were listening? It's my job to be sure you're okay. I want to hear something going on in your room. I have to check it out. Jake thought about that. It was fine, he decided. It's not like he was telling Simon secrets. He didn't mind Margie knowing all the stuff the real Jake had been doing. He frowned. But why isn't he coming tonight? Margie blinked several times and swallowed. Well, he just can't tonight. You know sometimes when you're not up to doing things you want to do? Jake nodded. It's like that. Jake rubbed his eyes so he can give away how upset he was. For some reason, he didn't want Margie to know he was disappointed. It's okay, he told Margie. He nodded. Are you sure you don't want me to finish the story? She shook his head and closed her eyes again. I'll just go to sleep. She leaned over and kissed him again. Her cheek touched his. Hers was wet. Margie made it to Jake's door before her legs gave out. He barely pulled the door shut behind her, and she slid down the wall of the floor, landing like a rag doll. Her legs splayed out on the hardwood. Her sweaty skin squeaked against the wood polish. The tears she tried to hold back in Jake's room, the ones that started to slip down her cheeks in spite of her determination wouldn't fall, now wanted to burst like a reservoir of water free to stem. But she didn't let them. If she cried, she wanted to cry. Jake would hear her. She was not going to let Jake hear her cry. She gave in to some silent sobs, her shoulders heaving. Then, grasping her hair in both hands, she just sat and rocked herself. Margie had no idea how long it took, but eventually she felt settled enough and strong enough to get off the floor. Pressing back against the wall, she levered herself in the standing position, pausing in an instant to listen to the baby monitor. She started down the hall toward the bathroom. Then she ended up stopping outside of Evan's door. She looked at the doorknob when she put her hand on it. She never went to Evan's room while he was gone. While he was home, she'd go in the room to vacuum or put laundry away or whatever. When he was done, though, coming in there felt like an invasion of privacy. Now he was gone, and the house was hers. She still couldn't believe that. Evan's room would be her room. She wanted her to take it from the beginning. It makes sense, he said. You'd be right here next to Jake, and the bed's bigger, and it's cooler in the summer. Yeah, and I feel like I was sleeping in your bed, she thought. No thanks, I need my own space, she told him. And he didn't even realize until Michael gave her the news that the real issue was she wanted Evan to be more than just a boss. But being in his room, she was gone mad. Made her feel like a lovelorn stalker. Love him like a brother, she snorted. Boy, has she been lying to herself. Margie opened the door and stepped into Evan's room. It was just as she remembered it, filled with cherry mission-style furniture and dark green light tan curtains and a comforter. The room felt discreetly masculine. Neat, but not too neat. The room revealed its occupant. The walls were covered in family photos. Jake's happy and the not as happy face dominated those. The shelves were stuffed into fiction ranging from backpack mysteries to hardcover classics, non-fiction in dozens of genres, and how-to books revealing the ins and outs, doing everything from rebuilding a car engine to planting the garden. Obviously, Jake had gotten his insatiable desire to knowledge from his dad. Crossing his queen-size bed, Margie inhaled the lightly musty scent of the room. He was going to need an air out. She sat down on the edge of the bed. She immediately shot up. It was too soon. She couldn't be in there. Margie fled the room, shut the door, and strode into the bathroom. Inside, she shut the door, then blew her nose several times. She turned to the tap, ran cold water, and splashed her face. When she wiped her face, she braved to look in the mirror. Bad move. Her makeup was smeared. That meant it was on the towel. He looked down. Yep, brown black smudges streamed the tan cherry cloth. Reaching into the medicine cabinet, Margie got a makeup remover and wiped her face clean. When she gathered up the towel, she might as well do a load. She was going to sleep anytime soon. Margie sat up in bed. What was that? In a testament to how little she knew herself, Margie had fallen asleep in the basement lawn chair while the towels were washing. So, once she put on the towels in the dryer, she went up to bed, wearing just an exercise bra and shorts. She lay on top of the covers over her bed. Her fan was aimed directly at her, but it was all warm air and could tackle tiny hairs on her arms. Margie closed her eyes and surrendered oppressive open was her room. She'd fallen asleep almost instantly, but now she was awake again. She heard something. Yes, voices. She could hear voices. Light from the outdoor lamp, the three-quarter moon spilled into the room through the open window above her bed. It was enough to illuminate the surface of her nightstand. What was that, the baby monitor? Baby took her breath. She left it in the basement. Leaping out of the bed, Margie left her room and padded down the steps of the first floor. Once there, she stopped. She could still hear the voices, but they were barely more than murmurs. She couldn't make out words. She couldn't identify the voices either. Were they male, female? Was it Jake? If so, who was talking to him? Instead of going down the basement like the baby monitor, Margie went towards Jake's room. The hallway was dark, but she could feel her way. Running the hand along the top of the dark Wisconsin trim of the hall, she listened and approached Jake's room. She thought the voices were getting louder, but she reached Jake's door. The voices were silent. Margie stood perfectly still, listening. Inside Jake's room, his fan humming and engulfing shifts from low pitch to high pitch. In the kitchen, the fridge added to the voice and throbbing more chorus. Then, even far away, Margie's fan contributed a deeper drone. Outside, the dark bark. But inside the house made a creaking sound, like it was popping its knuckles, as if houses had knuckles to pop. It had taken Margie a long time to get used to the bungalow's constant rasping groans. On darker winter nights, she sometimes wondered if the house was alive. It sounded like it was uncomfortable and it was trying to constantly shove it into a better position. In the summer, it seemed more constant, but occasionally made a more inexpressible sound that froze Margie in her tracks. But sounds are sounds, voices are voices, and Margie had no longer hearing voices. She put her hand on Jake's door, attempting to open it and go in. She knew, though, that the right night checks often disturbed him. If she was sleeping, she didn't want to wake him, so Margie got the baby monitor and went back to bed. When Margie checked on Jake early in the morning, she knew it would no longer put off what she had been avoiding. "Hi, Margie," Jake whispered when he saw her. His eyes were barely open. His skin was almost translucent gray, and she stretched to the top of his face, and Margie could see the perfect contours of the facial bones in his skull. He looked more like a corpse than Margie wanted to admit. "Hey, kiddo," she checked on him over. It was bustling around the kid like a normal day, and she was going to do normal things. "So you'll never guess the forecast," Margie said. Hot." "Oh, you guessed. You're so smart." Jake did his best to smile. He watched him touch his tongue to a couple of small cracks on his lips. It honestly hurt him to move his mouth. Margie picked up a tube of lip moisturizer from his nightstand and gently applied it on Jake's lips. "What shall we do first today? Fly to the moon or build a spaceship?" "You're silly," Jake said. "I've been called worse." Margie snapped her fingers. "I know. We'll build a robot first. Then he can build the spaceship and fly us to the moon." "Margie?" Margie stopped moving. He looked at him, frowned, and then sat in bed. "What, Jake?" "I don't want to pretend today." Margie took a deep breath. She picked up Jake's bony, limp hand. "Okay, I won't make you. I don't want you to get mad." "Okay, that would be bad," Margie said. "Very, very bad," they said together. Then Jake drifted back to sleep. Wearing an old gray blouse she hadn't put on in years, Margie sat on the dining room table and methodically up and down every one of the smiley face t-shirts. Chirr, snip, chirr, snip. The sound of the scissors sliding through the fabric of the snapping clothes was surprisingly satisfying. Margie lost herself in her task. She sewed steadily. Even when Margie's hand muscles started aching, she kept cutting, and she slashed her last happy yellow constants. She dropped the remains of the pile, carefully placed scissors next to it. That's when Gilligan showed up at the door, and as if she knew Margie was going to need support with what she had to do. Stepping into the living room, Margie mentioned for Gilligan to come in. As soon as she did, Margie's tears returned, and Gilligan strode to her. She took Margie's hand and squeezed it. Her chin moved against the top of Margie's head as she chewed gum. Margie was still winter green. "You do whatever you have to do," Gilligan said. "Would she?" Margie wasn't so sure. "The kids have gone on the day trip with friends," Gilligan said. "Dave's at work. I'm here. What do you need to do?" "It's time to call a hospital and arrange for Jake to be taken to the hospice center." Gilligan's eyes moistened, but she brushed her hands together and said, "Then let's go sit down and do that." Gilligan thought the process was going to be complicated, but Dr. Benjamin paved the way to Jake's transfer. All the paperwork was done. All they needed was to send an ambulance and a couple EMTs to the hospice nurse. "We can have an ambulance there by noon," the administrator told Margie. "Thank you," she said, not feeling thankful at all. She felt resentful, angry, and rage. How could all the love and caring and positive expectations she brought Jake here? Margie would have been sure she could get him through this. Outside, an ice cream truck went by. The tinkling music sounded strangely ominous. The ambulance arrived at 11:32, and Margie's stomach rolled as she saw it pull up. She couldn't remember the last time she dreaded something as much as she dreaded this. Margie was checking the baby monitor regularly since she made the call. She hadn't heard anything. She looked at him once to find Jake curled on his side and Bodie was on his shoulders, making steadily up and down his irregular breathing. She thought it had been going in to tell him it was going to happen, but she didn't bring herself to do it. There was so much she needed to tell Jake first. Of course, she needed to tell him that her father had died. Second, given that his father was dead, she thought he would reveal to Jake the identity of his nightly visitor. Wouldn't it be more comforting to know that it was his dad loved him as much as orchestrated house those visits can to believe the nameless, faceless friend who lived in the cabinet? Third, she had to tell him where he was going. She planned on doing all this before the ambulance arrived, but now it was too late. Okay, she'd get him settled at the hospice before she told him everything else. Margie was pacing in the living room when the ambulance turned into the driveway. Gilligan sat in an easy chair near the front door, her hands forced into her lap, her eyes closed. For the first 10 minutes after Margie made her call, Gilligan started a conversation. She attempted to get Margie to talk about how she felt, but Margie wasn't ready to do that, and Gilligan was correctly interpreted the monosyllabic answers as plea for silence. Still, she said Margie was grateful for that. She didn't want to talk, but that didn't mean she was strong enough to know what she was doing by herself. I'll get the door, Gilligan said as two young blonde EMTs and one dark-haired, middle-aged hospice nurse got out of the ambulance. The EMTs lifted the stretcher from the back of the ambulance while the hospice nurse approached the front door. She carried the clipboard in a medicine bag. Gilligan opened the door to the nurse. I'm Gilligan, friend and neighbor. This is Margie. She's Jake's guardian. The short woman was kind, round-faced, and held her hand. Margie managed to shake it, but was like anything. What was she supposed to say? Thank you for coming? I'm Nancy, the woman said. She smiled at both Gilligan and Margie. She was clearly an experienced hospice nurse. Her smile was just big enough to be really friendly, reserved enough to difference the situation. I have a couple of things for you to sign, Nancy said to Margie. The EMTs threw open a screen door and rolled the stretcher through. Its wheels clattered across the threshold, and Margie felt like a house was being invaded by armed intruders. She wanted to fight them off and force them to go away, which was ridiculous when she called them. Just a sec, boys, Nancy held out her clipboard to Margie. Sign here and here, for admission to acknowledge that you will be providing privileged care only. Then we can get Triggs transferred and settled in. Margie signed the papers, keeping in mind the blank possible. But it was blank enough. She felt like she was signing a piece of paper, confessing her complete and total failure as a caregiver, maybe even as a human being. All right then, Nancy put her form back on the clipboard. That was easy enough. Let's go to see Jake, shall we? Margie's muscles tightened. Gilligan obviously sensed it, because she reached down and took Margie's hand, helping her out of the chair. You're doing the right thing, she whispered to Margie's ear when Margie stood. This way, Gilligan told the EMTs. She led Margie through the living room and down the hall, stopping in front of Jake's door. She glanced at Margie and waited. Margie opened Jake's door. Second, Margie stepped into the room. She knew. She felt it. The room was too still, too empty. Even though Jake's poor, depleted body lay in the bed, Jake was gone. Because Margie turned into a statue in the doorway, Gilligan was practically lift Margie to move to her side to all the EMTs, and Nancy entered the room. Gilligan didn't say anything. Margie was pretty sure Gilligan knew Jake was gone too. Nancy must have sensed it as well, because she frowned, and then strode to the bed and felt Jake's pulse. She looked up at the EMTs and gave him a slight head shake. They stopped wheeling the stretcher, and they both stared at the floor. Nancy looked at Margie. I'm so sorry. He's passed on. Margie nodded. For once, her eyes were dry. What she was feeling was too much ordinary tears. What she was feeling called for a seeming fit and a total mental breakdown. Since now it wasn't the time for either of those, she had no response to offer. She was human void. She wanted to fold herself and to fall into the void. She wanted to let it suck from her form, from this reality. But she knew she couldn't escape it so easily. So Margie forced her legs to work, and she crossed Jake's bed. His body looked so fragile, small and fragile. She leaned over him and pressed her lips to his forehead. I love you, Jake. I love you so much. Body tickled her chin. Gilligan came up to Margie and whispered, Goodbye, Jake. The three medical professionals wouldn't have to take reason to say anything amiss. For all they knew, this was normal. Even Gilligan knew how to comment on it. She might have seen it, but she wouldn't attach any meaning to it. Margie would have. She didn't see anybody saw. 5 people, 5 sets of eyes, and none of them noticed the little cabinet door was wide open. Toby, Toby, Toby. Kids chanted as Toby Billings hunched over the Ultimate Battle Warrior arcade game at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza and Games. His left hand clenched the joystick tightly, shifting left and right, up and down. His right hand punched the action buttons of his warrior character to bust every graveyard ghoul opponent in the face and kick him in the gut. Repeatedly, black blood and green sweat splattered on the ghoul. It was so freaking awesome. Damping Toby's upper lip, he shifted the peppermint-flavored toothpick high to his mouth from the one cheek to another. His arm muscles clenched tightly. He was about to achieve the highest game score of the Ultimate Battle Warrior. All he wanted to be was the high scorer. He'd been focused on the game all week, and he was almost there. Almost. He pounded on his opponent. Bam! Took that sucker down. Winner flashed across the screen. Toby pushed off the game, raised his arm in victory. Heck yeah! Someone patted on his back. All right, Toby. Take that, sucker! Toby punched in the air, grinning. You had to take the first place this time, Toby. Toby expelled his breath, cracked his knuckles, and took a moment to enter his tab initials, tapping his foot while he waited for the top scores to flash on the screen. His smile fell away as he blinked in disbelief. No freaking way. He had held his second place. His defeat sunk in like a rock in his gut. Oh, no, your bro is still the highest score. What a drag. Toby's hands clenched the controllers. Sure enough, his oldest brother, Connor's initial, C.O.B., were still listed as number 1. Always number 1. Jaw tightened, he slammed his palms on the hard on the game. Dang it. Kids started to walk away except for the annoying guy named Reggie. Don't worry about it, Reggie said, slurping his milkshake. His hair was messed in red curls, flaring about like a halo around his head. You'll get the game over him eventually. You're just 1,000 points behind. That's practically nothing. Toby curled his lip. Every game in Freddy Fazbear's Pizza and Games had his brother listed as a top player. He thought he would have this one for sure. He cracked his knuckles and turned away to the stupid game. He grabbed his soda cup from the small table next to him and flipped some root beer through a straw. There's still hide and seek, Reggie went on. It's just opened a week ago, and your brother hasn't played that one yet. I mean, I haven't seen him anyway, and you still have to play it. And when you do, you'll have an advantage, no problem. No, he hadn't told his brother about the new game attraction that opened up in Freddy's just the exact reason. Toby wanted to play it first and snag the top spot. His brother used to have a part-time job at Freddy's when he was in high school. He spent his breaks and after work hours playing all the arcade games in the place until he became top scorer in every single game. Now that he graduated last year and moved on to, in his words, a real job, Toby had taken over his old job helping out and cleaning around his family restaurant. Man, he wanted to beat his brother at his game just once. Was that too much to ask? Toby adjusted the beanie on his head. Yeah, I guess. He'd been watching the long lines die down on the new game, waiting for all the dumb little kids to finish playing a half hour before his shift started, and he still had some time to play around and get the feel for the game. Later, he muttered to Reggie, "Go get him, Toby," the kid yelled, then followed with some annoying howling noise. That dude was such a weirdo. Toby heard the bowling balls crash into pins in the small bowling alleys. He walked through the crowd in the small arcade area. Our voices and game sounds melded together, echoing in his ears. They all sounded like he'd grown accustomed to the 6 months he worked at the restaurant. He smelled the buttery popcorn, cotton candy, and of course pizza, the occasional stink bomb that came with the clothes of a bunch of sweaty kids. He walked past the laser tag in the prize store, and he finally stopped on the floor of the new game attraction, hide and seek. A black shadowed Bonnie and a rabbit stood beside the logo. "Come find me if you can" was printed under the title of the game. Toby slipped on his tokens and game door unlocked. He walked through the doorway, examining the details of the game. The instrumental beat played through the speakers. Inside the room was sectioned off in parts of town. With a railing that glided up and down the wall, he entered the board cutouts. There was a park that led to the store, a school, a police station, and of course a pizza place. Each section was about 3 board cutouts that were posted around the wall so kids wouldn't mess with the game. The rules flashed above on a large screen hanging from the ceiling. Rules are simple. Find where Bonnie's hiding 3 tries in under 3 minutes or lose the game. Welcome to Hide and Seek. Enter your name and find Bonnie, and let's begin. A deep, bellowed voice came out of the wall speaker. Toby crackled his knuckles. "No problem," he murmured. He typed his name per character. "You're mine, Rabbit. Here we go, Toby." A black 2-dimensional cutout of Bonnie glided along the railing wall. A room darkened to pitch black. Toby heard the quiet sound of Bonnie moving along the railing of the room. 3, 2, 1. The lights flashed back on. Toby blinked and Bonnie was nowhere to be seen. He pulled a toothpick from his mouth and rolled it between his fingers. He bit the bottom of his lip as he assessed the hiding places. He could go anywhere in the game by hitting a button to see where Bonnie might be hiding. He put a toothpick back on his mouth, and he moved the police station to hit the button at his desk. Sorry, no Bonnie there. Toby scanned around the room, rubbing his chin. Had to be the pizza place. He walked over and hit the button on the kitchen doors. Sorry, no Bonnie there. One more try. He moved to hit the button. The principal's office school. You lose. Bonnie glided out of the jail cell of the police station. Better luck next time, Toby. Toby curled his lip. He's not much to the game, but he was still wanting to win. He looked at the screen hanging from the ceiling. Someone already snagged the top score for the fastest time. Tom at 2:58. That's nothing. Toby turned and heard the door unlocked behind him. Welcome to Hide and Seek. Enter your name and try to find Bonnie, and let's begin. A little kid walked in, sporting a Freddy Fazbear party hat. Hey, it's my turn now, he said, his bottom lip sticking out. Toby dug out more tokens and slapped them in the kid's hand. He grabbed the kid's shoulder, shoving him back out the door. I still have one more turn, he told him. Hey, no fair, it's my turn. Stop your whining, I'll be out in a minute. Toby slammed the door into the kid and went to type the game again. Here we go. Toby. Bonnie glided out of the room, blackened. The countdown began. He heard Bonnie move quietly. As soon as the new lights flashed on, Toby ran to the store and pushed the bakery counter. Sorry, no Bonnie here. He ran to the park and chose a tree. Sorry, no Bonnie here. But Toby gritted his teeth and ran to the pizza place, pounding on the palm of the arcade. You lose. Bonnie glided out of the bushes of the park. Better luck next time, Toby. Toby put the toothpick on the floor as annoyance burned his gut. He visited his hands and stormed out of the exit door at the start of his shift. Stupid game. Toby walked out of the house after work. He heard a television playing. He rolled his eyes. That meant Connor was home. Great. Dad worked the graveyard shift at the warehouse and wasn't home most nights, so usually it was just him and his brother. Toby bobbed to the box of leftover pizza on the kitchen table and dug out a piece of pepperoni. He was already irritated because he had played hide and seek a few more times before he came home, and he found out that he still couldn't find the rabbit. This game wasn't complicated. How hard could it be to find a hidden rabbit? What's that, you, Tobes? Connor called out. Who else would it be? Toby walked out of the front room and he leaned against the wall. Yeah, Connor was kicked back at his dad's recliner watching baseball. He wore a dirty button-up shirt, stained with the black grease. Grease was smeared on his cheek and arms. Only his hands were somewhat cleaner, with black oil under his nails. Connor turned to look at Toby and grinned. Beat in any of the games? Beat me at any games yet, little brother? Connor wanted to know. Gee, how did he know he'd ask? Toby bit into his pizza and chewed. Nope. Connor laughed. Didn't think so. Not gonna happen. Never. But it's flattering that you keep trying. Toby narrowed his eyes. Oh, it'll happen. Connor lifted his eyebrows. Maybe when pigs fly, sucker. Toby crossed his arms against his chest. He wanted to tell Connor someone else already had the first score in the new game of the pizza place, but he bit his lip. Nah, he wanted to get the lead score first, and he wanted to get his brother anywhere near Freddy's until Toby held first place. Toby pointed at him with a pizza slice. Pigs will be flying, you'll see, and you'll be the sucker, and I'll be the winner. Oh, please. Then you won't even know what to do with yourself except go cry in your room. Connor wasn't deterred. He leaned forward in his recliner. Oh, you mean like the time you beat my overall home runs during Little League? Or how all those times you smashed me at bowling? Toby scowled. Just shut up, Connor. Oh, I know, it must be an overall time for a mile run in PE class. You're such a little speedster, aren't you, Tobes? Toby pushed off the wall. I said shut up. Connor's eyes widened. Oh, wait, you never beaten me in anything. And you never will because you're a pitiful loser who can't win at anything. Toby saw red. He threw pizza at his brother. Connor smiled in glee and dodged a slice. And Toby launched himself at Connor in the recliner. He had a moment of satisfaction when his fist hit his brother's gut. Connor grunted. Oh, you're going to pay for that, Connor hissed out. Fist flew. Toby was lifted across the floor. He hit a carpet. Brushed out of his mouth. His brother clocked him in the chin, then maneuvered him to a strong arm around his neck. Toby's face heated. He was losing air. He tapped out his brother's arm. His brother released him and shoved him to the side while Toby coughed. Shoulders heaving, Connor pointed a finger down at him. I always beat you at everything, idiot. When are you going to learn through your thick head? I always win, and you always lose, like a loser you were born to be. Connor left the room, leaving Toby to the floor. Toby just lay sprawled on the floor, breathing hard, starting at the ceiling. The next day, Toby studied a block of wood in woodshop class, rubbing his chin on the forefinger. Buzzsaws and drills sounded around him. He said it was freshly cut wood filled his nostrils. He was supposed to be working on a small cutting board project, but he had other ideas in the moment, like making rail blocks for hide and seek. Go that the game rabbit wouldn't hide in the same of the areas of the game. Yeah, that was just cheating. But he just didn't care. For once, he wanted to shove a winning score right in his brother's face. He felt tension grip his body inch by inch, just thinking about Connor. How he always had to be number one in everything he did. He always had to rub it in Toby's face. Well, he wasn't going to be the loser this time. It was the last thing he did. Everything had been a big competition with Connor as far as back as Toby could remember. Connor always had to have the best score and the best grades, the biggest piece of cake. He had to be stronger than Toby in arm wrestling, beat him in boxing, one-on-one in basketball. He had to get the attention from his dad and mom when she'd be around. He'd been a star quarterback in junior varsity season until he banged up his knee and couldn't play well afterward. It was really messed with his brother's head. Toby remembered him mopping around the house for months. Toby had even felt bad for him for a little while until Connor had gotten a job at Freddy's and then went to the arcade game mission, defeating every high score in the place. He'd been obnoxious and unbearable. Ever since then, now that Toby worked there, Connor held his ultimate arcade victory over Toby nearly every day. It drove Toby freaking crazy. That was why Connor's reign was finally coming to an end. Determined, Toby got to work at the block of wood, cutting out squares the soon-to-be perfect rail blocks for hide and seek. Mr. Pendick walked over to Toby's workstation. He adjusted his glasses to look at Toby cutting out blocks. Those are too small to be a cutting board, Toby. Yeah, I know. I'm getting the cutting board next. Mr. Pendick crossed his arm. The cutting board is our assignment now. It's due at the end of the period. How are you going to get done in 30 minutes? You're a good kid, Toby. I know you can do better than this if you just try and put some effort into your projects. I'm trying to put starting on my project right now. Irritated, Toby walked to a wood table and placed another piece of wood at the cutting board. Then Mr. Pendick walked away and he set a new piece of wood aside and continued his rail blocks. Some things were more important than took priority over schoolwork, like beating an annoying, arrogant, loudmouth brother. After Freddy Fazbear's pizza and games closed that night, Toby inserted the coins for a new round of hide and seek. There were only a couple of employees left cleaning up in the kitchen. He snuck inside the game room and near the end of his shift. The game voice welcomed him to the game. Before Toby entered his name, he walked over to a small barricaded fence that blocked the wall from players getting too close to the game and hopped over from a sweatshirt. He dug out small wooden blocks and he shaped into fit a railing. He gave the blocks a good pound with his hand, wedging each wood piece into the rails to cut off access to the school, police station, and pizza area. Now the only places the rabbit could hide were the park and store, which were right next to each other. Toby smiled and nodded. Now he would definitely win. He'd get his name listed in the first place. Oh yeah, let's do this. He couldn't wait to rub Connor's face in his win. He could see his brother now. His face would get all red, like it did whenever something didn't go his way, and he'd storm off, hit a wall in the house like a big baby. Dad would yell at him to go cool off, and then Dad would look at Toby and roll his eyes. Toby snickered. It would be priceless. Toby hopped back over the small fence and ran to enter his name in the game. Here we go, Toby. Yeah, here we go, Rabbit. Bonnie glided out and the room blackened. 3, Toby tapped his foot and he's waiting for the lights to turn on. 2, 1. As soon as the room brightened, he sprinted to the park and slapped on the slide. Sorry, no Bonnie here. He hit a tree. Sorry, no Bonnie here. Rattle, he hit the deli at the store. Uh-oh, you lose. Toby's jaw dropped in disbelief. His peppermint-flavored toothpick fell to the floor. No freaking way. Body behind the cash register at the store. Better luck next time, Toby. Toby's hand fisted. He growled loudly in frustration. You think you're funny, don't you, Rabbit? You think I'm the loser? Well, I'm not, you idiot. You're the loser. You'll see. He paced back and forth, the door beating from his head. His entire body vibrated with tension. I'm not going to lose another game to you. He rubbed his hands over his head. Think. He wanted to win. He needed to win. Suddenly, he whirled to the quick solution crossing his mind. Yes, he rushed out of the game room. A minute later, he inserted his tokens and came back in, and carrying 2 metal chairs. He already had the store, the school, and the pizza place covered. He wedged the back of the chairs onto the railing of the park and the store. The bottom of the chairs leaned forward to the small fence. Welcome to hide and seek. Enter your name and try to find Bonnie. Let's begin. Yeah, he muttered. Toby stood back, hands on his hips, looking at the handiwork. Everywhere was blocked. There's no way the rabbit would even hide at all. Ha, that's you now, sucker. Who's the winner now? The rubbed his damp palms together and rushed the input of his name. He felt the sheen of sweat on his forehead and wiped the back of his hand. He felt jittery, off, like he had been keep still. He rolled his neck in circular motion and cracked his knuckles. Here we go, Toby, a voice sang out. Bonnie glided out of the room blackened. 3. Toby's stomach looked a sudden dive. His head went light. He almost felt like puking. 2. For one moment, a rush of quiet seemed to fill the room, as if all air was sucked out of the air and ears were about to pop. He felt a strange tickle in his back and shifted his shoulder to make it go away. Then all at once, sound rushed back into his ears. 1. The lights flashed on. Toby blinked. He felt disoriented. He rubbed his eyes and scanned the walls before him. Wait, Bonnie was gone. Toby's head swiveled left and right. Even the ceiling, there was no way the rabbit could hide anywhere. What the heck? Where'd he go? He rushed to the small fence barricade and hoped over the billboard cutouts that were trying to peer inside a slight gap between the cutouts of the wall. The slots were empty. No, this wasn't right. His stomach was turning and his chest felt tight. He continued to run to each cutout, peering behind the wooden displays. There's nowhere the rabbit could have gone. This didn't make any sense. Toby's heart beat like a drum. His bed of sweat dripped down the side of his head. No. This wasn't fair. The stupid rabbit couldn't win. He flashed across his face. A burst of helplessness energy flared throughout his body. His breath increased. He wasn't a loser. He wasn't a freaking loser. He ran a chair and he propped it against the railing, picked it up and heaved it across the room. It smashed it against the wall, indenting a hole into the game's pizza place. He pulled at one part of the small fence and tore it down. He stomped it through a broken barrier and stalked over to another chair and threw it against another wall. He pulled down another section of fencing and reached a tree cut out of the park. Gritting his teeth, he pulled it all his strength and ripped off the wall. He crashed to the floor. Only a few pegs stuck out of place. He threw 3 and got back to his feet. He ran to the police station, tearing the desk cutout. I was always beat you at everything, idiot. When you're gonna get them through thick head, I'll always win and you'll always lose, like a loser you weren't born to be. He tugged and tore at anything he could get his hands on. He wasn't sure how long he went at it, tearing down and destroying. All he knew was he had to get rid of this helpless feeling within him. The feeling of being weak and powerless. His pain was always seemed to be inside him. He hated it. He needed it out. Gone. Finally, his body grew tired and he tripped a piece of cutout and he fell on his ass. His chest was heaving up and down. Sweat covered his face. His hands were red and throbbing. He looked around as he'd done. The satisfaction filled him. Yeah, take that, he thought. He pretty much destroyed hide and seek. As he stared at the destruction, reality crashed down on him. He swallowed his past the dryness of his throat. He scrubbed his face and his hands and continued to stare at the mess he created. He ruined the game. That wasn't his. He was going to get in so much trouble. Frantic, he stood and grabbed the tree he'd torn from the wall. He quickly tried to reattach the pegs, but it was no use. He just crashed back to the floor. What did I do? He whispered. Then the only thing he could think to do. He ran out of the room. Toby opened his eyes, blinked. He was in the dark. He was lying face down on a cold metal table. Where was he? Bright lights flashed above him and he squinted. He tried to sit up, but his hands were tied above his head. His legs were bound to his ankles, and he couldn't move them. What the heck? Toby tried to lift his head a while. Hey, what's going on? Connor, are you messing with me? His voice seemed to echo inside the room. He looked around to see a brick surrounding him. You're gonna get busted for doing this. Someone shifted behind him. When there was no one answered, panic set in. Connor would have been babbling his mouth by now. Yeah, whoever you are, you better let me go. He jerked his hands, but his rope was just bit through his wrists, rubbed his skin raw. His heartbeat seemed to pound against his cold table beneath him when he spotted something darker than peripheral vision. What do you want? He felt his shirt tug from his back, and he heard scissors cutting at it. Stop it. Leave me alone. Cold air hit his skin. Then he heard more movement. Then something small bit into his back, like a needle. Ouch. Don't touch me. The needle was pulled out, and then he felt his skin being tugged. What the heck are you doing to me? He jerked his hand to the right, trying to see what happened. Sweat poured from his forehead. Again, he felt the needle push into his skin and then pull. Blood dripped down his back and drained through intensity. Stop, you're hurting me, please. I said stop. Whatever the dark figure was, he didn't speak, and he didn't stop. And every prick and pull of the needle, his realization dawned. Someone was sewing something back to his back. Someone help me, he screamed, please. Toby jerked awake. He sat up in his bed, alert, heart pounding, breathing fast. He was disoriented. It was just a bad dream. Sunlight slanted through the windowed blinds. He was okay. He was home. It was day, was it? What time was it to go to school? Did he oversleep? He glanced at his alarm clock. 7:55 a.m. He didn't set his alarm because it was a Saturday, right? He rubbed his face, then glanced at the mirror mounted on his dresser across the room bed. His face was pale and there was dark circles under his eyes. His brown hair stuck up like crazy directions. He spotted a shadow on the wall behind him. He felt a ticklish feeling on his back. A shadow? Frowning, He tilted his head and he looked at it from the reflection of the mirror. It hadn't seemed right. There wasn't enough light in the window blinds for him to see his own shadow in the room. He shifted and leaned to the right. A second later, the shadow followed. Toby's eyes widened. Did his own shadow just delay follow him? He leaned quickly to the left, but this time the shadow moved quickly. He shook his head. Weird. He probably wasn't fully awake yet. Toby yawned, scratched his chest, and stretched out his arms over his head. The shadow followed along. Then he winced. His body was sore. Guilt from last night came crashing back. Dang, why was he having to mess up the game like that? What was Dan, his boss, going to say? Was he going to get caught? Was he put his arms down? The shadow arms were still up. Toby sucked in a breath and jumped into his bed. Looking at the wall behind his bed, he saw nothing. No shadow. He whipped his head toward the mirror and saw a shadow behind him. A chill radiated down his spine. He stepped closer to the large mirror on the dresser, watching the shadow follow closely behind. The closer he got, the dark shadow followed. He steered into the mouth, and his mouth went dry. The shadow had rabbit ears. Toby spun around as if he could somehow catch the shadow, but every time he turned, there was nothing behind him, as if it would suddenly duck and hide somewhere. In this room, Toby went to his bed and peered underneath, just a bunch of dust and junk. He went to the closet and saw more junk, but even that didn't make sense. He glanced back in the mirror, and the shadow was still behind him. The only rabbit that I could think of was the Bonnie the rabbit from the game Hide and Seek. Toby froze for a moment, trying to comprehend what was actually happening. A rabbit shadow from a game attached to his back? He frowned. Wait, this couldn't be real. Suddenly, relief scraped through him. He slapped his hand on his forehead and barked out loud. I'm still dreaming, duh. There's no way this could have to be a shadow of the shape of a rabbit. This was some nightmare he was having because he was afraid he got caught playing the done game. Everything was fine, he assured himself. He yawned again and he decided to go back to bed. When he could really wake up again, to only a shadow would be his own. He climbed back into bed and got underneath the covers. He looked once more into the mirror, seeing the shadow hovering behind him. Toby waved, and the shadow waved with him. He lay down and closed his eyes, drifting off to sleep. Toby blinked away. His eyes were blurry. He rubbed his eyes and yawned, stretching out his sore body. Even though he slept in, he felt exhausted. He sat up in bed, glancing into the dresser mirror. The shadow was still there. Fear punched his chest, and he pushed back against the wall, kicking the covers off of him. He sprang out of bed, hunched down, and staring in the mirror. The shadow lurked just at his back. Toby reached behind him as if he could feel the shadow, but he only grabbed air. He swallowed hard and he stood straight, and the shadow did the same. He turned aside to see if he could see the shadow closely, but for some reason the shadow stayed just behind him. Who are you? He asked the shadow. What do you want? Shadow didn't speak. Get away from me. Nothing happened. I said go away. Nothing. Toby gritted his teeth, and he paced back and forth, rubbing his hand through the air. Okay, there was a shadow following him with his own shadow. How could this be happening? It was so freaking weird. He stopped again, leaning into the dresser with his hands, and peered into the mirror. Every time he saw the darkness behind him, a chill ran down his entire body, making him shiver. Did his back feel heavier than usual? Toby was pretty sure it was because it was the thing that was attached to him. What should he do? Well, he knew what he should do. He needed to get it off him. But how could he make it go away? I can do this, he murmured. I can get it off of me. There has to be a way. Think. He bit his bottom lip, glanced at the wall in the moment reflection in the mirror. Staring at the moment, he pushed away the dresser and rubbed his chin and studied the wall. Abruptly, he turned his back to the wall and sucked in a breath, then blew it out. Then he sucked in another breath and exhaled again. Squeezed his eyes shut, he ran backward and slammed against the bare wall. He knocked off the wind into his mouth. His entire body vibrated. He lunged forward and then slammed back hard against the wall again and again. Pain radiated down his spine and fell to the floor, wincing. A sheen of sweat sprang across his forehead and crawled into the dresser, his back throbbing. He reached up and pulled himself to his feet, staring into the mirror. His shadow still lurked behind him. He threw himself helplessly onto the bed and screamed into his pillow. Nervous and bruised, Toby dressed, avoiding the mirror. He left his room and went to the kitchen. The feeling that someone was on his back wouldn't go away. It was like he was being watched. He felt stalked, trapped. There was a pile of dishes in the sink and the scent of burnt bacon and eggs. Whose turn was it to do dishes? Probably his, but he didn't care. Toby turned and stepped into the front room. His dad was in shorts and a t-shirt, kicked back in the recliner, blurry-eyed and drinking coffee. Toby swallowed hard and cracked his knuckles. Hey, Dad. Dad grunted and looked over Toby. Morning, Tobes. Morning, Toby's hands were shaking. His fists were in tight grip. Dad, do you see anything different about me? His dad squinted at him, looking at him up and down. You look the same to me. Did you do something different? He scratched his scruff and his chin and studied him. You finally growing some hair above your lip? Toby shook his head right away. No, just asking if you could see anything out of the ordinary, something that was not supposed to be there. Just then Connor strolled in. Don't worry, Tobes, you still get the same little loser, nothing's changed. Shut up, Connor, he said. But without the usual heat, Connor reached out and rubbed Toby's head. So Toby shoved him away. Neither of you. See my shadow? Toby asked him. Really? Connor made a face. What are you talking about, idiot? He stretched out his arm. A shadow, idiot. You see it or what? Can you answer a simple question? Connor looked around Toby, shaking his head, and walked through the kitchen. You got problems, Tobes. Toby rounded to his dad, who just ignored him and continued to watch sports. How could they not see there was weird darkness following him around? Was he still dreaming? No, he was definitely wide awake. His back was still hurting from slamming against the wall. He was the only one that could see it, but that make him crazy? Had Connor finally driven him nuts? He went to his dad, leaned forward to him. Dad, feel my head. Dad felt a coffee and cigarettes. He His eyes were a little bloodshot. Dad sighed. Toes, what's the matter with you? He put his hand on his forehead. No, you're good, son. You don't get any ideas about skipping school, alright? When I started to get a bunch of calls and texts from school while I'm trying to sleep before my shift. Toby straightened. I'm not. The phone rang. Connor answered. Yeah? Yep. Hold on. Hey, idiot. It's for you. Work. Toby's gut flipped. Oh, no, no, no. He walked over to Connor, snickered at him. And Toby knocked the phone away from him. Yeah, hello? Toby, it's Dan. Can you come to work? I need to talk to you about something. Very important. Toby scratched his head. Yeah, sure. Alright, see you soon. Okay. Toby hung up. So Connor winced his eyes. Ooh, Toby's in trouble. What'd you do now? Toby's school his expression of instance, which was kind of hard. Nothing. Connor shook his head. Dan never calls employees unless they mess up royally. What'd you do? Forget to lock up something? Or you broke something? Or didn't tell him? Toby narrowed his eyes at his brother. Did he know something? I didn't mess it up. He probably called me in because he told me that was a fantastic job I've been doing. So much better than you ever did. Yeah, right. I do everything better than you. Even that stupid job. Holy cow, Dad would yell from the other room. Bases loaded, babies. Boys, get in there. This babe's getting good. Connor lost interest in Toby and strode in the front room, joining Dad. What'd I tell you? They got the game easy. I always pick the winning team, right, Dad? Dad laughed. You do, son, you do. Toby rolled his eyes and walked back to the room. He realized he wasn't hungry at all. He really couldn't argue with his brother doing him a better job at Freddy's at the moment. He messed up royally by breaking hide and seek. He didn't know what had been happening when he walked to Dan. He looked into the mirror and the shadow lurked behind him with a dark ghost that wouldn't leave him alone. He shuddered. He looked at his hands, still shaking, and this whole thing was freaking him out. Toby slapped the beanie in his head and took a breath in an attempt to calm his nerves. He had to face Dan about hide and seek. Then he figured out what to do about the shadow. Dad lifted his beefy arm and encompassed the entire disaster area of hide and seek. Can you believe it? It just opened this game and now it's destroyed. Dan was built like a bull, of all big-chested and meaty arms, but with short, skinny legs. He was an okay boss. It was always cool to Toby. It was like Toby felt pretty bad for messing up his game. Toby stared at the chaos of the room in wide eyes. The game looked even worse than he remembered. The screen was dead now. Dan must have shut it down. Nearly all the cutouts were torn from the wall. Only pegs were still sticking out of the placeholders. Most of the cutouts were broken. Some split totally in half. There were a few dents in the walls. I can't believe it, Toby said, cracking his knuckles. He couldn't believe he'd done all this damage by himself. Dan turned to Toby, eyeing him with intensity. Do you have any idea who did this? Toby shook his head, and guilt weighed heavy on his conscience. No, Dan, I don't know who could have done this. You didn't see anyone suspicious messing around last night? You checked the bathroom stalls, right? The play area? None of them were hiding there after closing? Yeah, I did a routine check like you always tell me. No, I didn't see anyone suspicious. Dan ran his hand down the thick beards. Really ticks me off, you know? I put good money into the place for people to enjoy, and this is how I'm repaid? Ticks me off. Yeah, I bet. When I was a kid, they didn't have places like these. Kids played outdoors and just went and had pizza. But I like the idea of families coming together to eat and play together. Have a party. This place wasn't much, but it's the dream of mine. So it really upsets me when something like this happens, Dan sighed. Well, I gotta get a technician in here and we'll see what we can do. Thanks for coming in, Toby. Toby nodded. Let me help you clean up. Dan placed his hands on his hips. Sure, but I gotta keep all the parts for insurance. The police already took pictures. Well, we found Clinton's got the police. Yeah, I had a report to break-in vandalism. They may need to ask you some questions. They're still talking to everyone who worked last night. Toby swallowed hard and nodded. Sure, no problem. If you could pick up some big pieces and set them in a pile, sweep up all the small stuff, it would be helpful. Sure. Thanks, Toby. You're a good kid. Dan stomped out of the game room, muttering something under his breath. Toby's shoulders slumped when he started to clean up the floor. He piled big cutouts against one wall. When he looked at the cutout of the bushes, he saw the beanie from last night. His heart skipped a beat as he looked behind him to see if anyone had come into the room. He suddenly swiped it up, picked it in his back pocket. Suddenly, his head jerked to the railing. Wooden blocks he made were all jammed inside. He picked up a long piece of broken wood and started to pry them out of the rail. One by one, heart pounding, he hurriedly picked up the 3 pieces of the floor and stashed them in the sweatshirt. Then, taking a breath, he continued to clean up his mess. Toby felt awful the rest of the weekend. He mostly stayed in his room, but he had an old sheet over his mirror. Even though he knew Shadow was still there, he didn't want to have a look at it. Every time he did, his pulse fluttered. And then he started to shake because it was supposed to be there. It was like this scary, dark, hidden secret. He ate almost nothing on Sunday and barely slept. He didn't talk to his dad or brother. Dad knocked on his door to check on him, and he told him he was just tired. He heard them yelling in some game on the television. Dad, Connor, and Toby were pretty close, but Dad and Connor had an obsession with sports that he'd always shared. Dad wasn't either working a lot or sleeping, but when he wasn't, he was hanging out with Connor, watching sports and having a good old time. Since Toby wasn't too into sports, that was what left for Dad and Toby time. Toby guessed they'd in closer to Mom, but he wasn't sure since he left one day and Toby was about 5 and Connor 7, and had a vague memory of Dad bringing him home in Connor's Little League practice, and Mom had just been gone. Dad had called for her, and then Connor ran around the house looking for her. Dad had found a letter on the kitchen table, which Connor asked what it said, and wanted to know where Mom was, but Dad would read the letter, then crumpled it in his hand and walked away. That night was first of hundreds of frozen dinners not together. No explanation to Toby or Connor was given about Mom, Mom, so they just continue on with life as if Mom had never been around. Maybe that was when Connor really started attempting to be the best at everything. Toby wasn't sure. His brother could have been born with a screw loose. Toby skipped school on Monday, but he did decide to go to a shift on Freddy's that afternoon. He didn't know if he could pull the shift off. His energy was spent. His back felt tight and heavy. All he wanted to do was lie down and go to sleep. He walked into Freddy's, and Reggie met him with the arcade. Since he had a slice of pizza in hand. Dude, you look gnarly. He chomped on his pizza. Toby was shrugged and walked past him. Whoa, what's with the shadow? Looks intense. Toby's eyes widened as he whirled. He rushed to Reggie and grabbed the front of his shirt in both hands. You can see it? Take it easy. Yeah, your shadow's way dark, dude. He bit into a slice and chewed it in front of Toby's face. I can't get rid of it. It's freaking me out. Reggie left his eyebrows. I bet. How'd you get into it anyway? Toby let him and jerked the shoulder. I don't know. It just happened. A freak thing. I get it, man. It's personal. Reggie smoothed his shirt in the other hand. Really sucks. You gotta deal with it. Yeah, but you're the only one that said they could see it. Reggie nodded, and his red curls moved with motion. I totally see it. And do you see the ears? Reggie frowned. Huh? Toby shook his head. Never mind. How can you even see it? Reggie shrugged. People say I see things differently. Toby stared at him, even didn't elaborate. Whatever. I think it's... Reggie shook over another bite of pizza. What? I think it's from the game. I cheated. Oh yeah? Which game? Toby wasn't sure he truly trusted him. It was the regular Freddy's, and he could tell Dan whatever he told him. Doesn't matter. I need to get rid of it. I can't keep walking around with this thing on my back. It's weird. Well, if I were you, I'd try anything to get rid of that thing off me like yesterday, Reggie shuddered. Looks totally creepy, dude. Just seeing Reggie's reaction made him shudder in return. Like, try what? I don't know what to make it go away. What do you think I could do? Dude, you're a gamer. Use your imagination. I've watched you for weeks attempt to beat your brother's score in nearly every game in this arcade. Takes fire, you know? That's what fire now. Toby stiffened, cracked his knuckles. I got fire. Reggie nodded. Then go to it, bro. That night, Toby thought about what Reggie said, and he felt inspired. He wasn't defeated yet. How could he beat the shadow and get it off him? He could freaking win this game. He made a list. Ideas to remove shadow. Slam it off. Didn't work. Scrub it off. Drown it off. Burn it off. Forget that. Cut it off. Maybe. Toby went into the garage. He searched around the clutter for the car wash scrubber on a stick. No one had washed their cars in forever, but Toby knew the scrubber was still around here somewhere. It was a thick Brussels that might scrub the shadow off his back. It could totally work. Maybe. He was pretty much willing to try anything to get this thing off him. He kicked the boxes, making a path around the garage, shoved the lawnmower, and kicked the deflated football. Holy heck, he jumped to the little mouse skidder across the floor. He needed to remember to tell his dad to buy some mouse traps. When he finally found a scrubber stuck in the corner of the old wash bucket, he grabbed the scrubber and tried to reach it over his back. Then the stick was too long. He looked around and found a rusted saw in his dad's toolbox. He leaned the stick off the washer in his left hand and started sawing away at the stick. It might be the blade as dull and took away a few minutes, but it was part and the stick finally broke off, dropping to the floor. Toby lifted the scrubber in his hand and felt the bristles with his fingers. Yeah, nice and thick. You'll do. He tipped the brush into his back and gave it a rub. It would definitely work. Determined, he took off his shirt and laid it to the dryer. He took a breath, grabbed the stick in both hands, and started scrubbing his back. Hard. Ow, ow, ow. He scrubbed, wincing. His bristles bit into his skin, scraping, scratching. You see how you like that, he muttered. He scrubbed and scrubbed at his back, feeling the skin peel away with the rawness. Jeez, this hurts. He scrubbed all till he felt like his back was burning, and he couldn't take it anymore. Trembling, he dropped to the scrubber and fell to his knees, sucking air through his teeth. His vision dimmed. He blinked. Please let this work, please, he whispered. Exhausted in the pain, he grabbed his shirt and carefully slid it over his hand. Then, he got to his feet and stumbled back into the house and his room. Toby leaned against the dresser and slowly pulled the sheet cover into the mirror. He looked awful. His eyes were wild. His brown hair was stuck in his forehead in sweat. His face was pale, and his skin looked dry. He lifted his gaze to look behind him. The shadow gloomed in his back, and now seemed to be bigger and even darker. It moved as Toby's shoulders heaved. No, he said. It hadn't worked. He may have not gotten the shadow off his back, but he apparently ticked it off. He could feel its anger, its darkness, its more intensely. Feeling his emotions was like being squeezed into a small box, and the sides were closing in, suffocating him. Toby found his fist in the dresser. I hate you, he said. I hate you. Then he felt himself falling, and everything went black. Toby jerked himself awake and hit his knee on something loud. Ow! Olivia's saliva drooled from his mouth, and he wiped it away from the back of his hand. He heard knocking. He lifted his head and looked around. Clothes were littered around him. He was on the floor of his bedroom, at his foot of his bed. He hit his knee on the dresser. He slept on the floor all night? More knocking on the door. Toby, get up. Dad said you had to go to school today. Connor bellowed through the door. All right, I'm up, he yelled. Settled his back against the carpet. He heard his brother walk away. Toby slowly sat up, wincing. His head felt like it had been falling to fall off. His back burned as if it was on fire. He pushed himself to his feet, and the room spun. Oh, dang. He grabbed his dresser and kept from falling again. He waited for the room to stop spinning. Even though he wasn't hungry, he had to eat something to keep up his energy. He didn't care to look in the mirror. He knew the shadow was still there. He could feel its weight. He could sense its darkness looming over him like a threat. Toby managed to shower first, but without falling over. But the spray hurt too badly, so he didn't want to let the water run down his back. He brushed his teeth, ignoring the shadow as it followed along the bathroom mirror. He dressed and walked into the kitchen. His brother sat on the table eating cereal, waffles, and 2 bananas. Connor stopped in mid-chew and he spotted Toby. "You're really sick?" Toby didn't care to answer. "You look bad. What's the matter with you?" Toby just took a bowl and got a cereal and milk and got the bowl of food. "Why aren't you talking, Tobes?" He shrugged. "Maybe you should stay home another day." Toby looked at his brother in surprise. Where was all the stupid remarks, all the put-downs? "I'm going." When Toby finally answered, Connor seemed satisfied. "All right, but if you got the flu, keep your distance." He wolfed down his cereal, waffles, and both bananas. He threw his dishes to the sink and gave a gnarly burp and said, "Later." Then he walked out of the kitchen. A moment later, the front door slammed shut. Toby ate a few spoonfuls of cereal, but after a few minutes, he felt something come right back up. He ran to the garbage and puked. His body shuddered in spasms. He managed to straighten with his hands to his stomach, but he didn't know better. The shadow seemed to be sticking out the life out of him. The idea of something overpowering him annoyed the heck out of him. He clenched his fist. "You're not gonna win." Toby felt like a zombie at school. He walked the hall slow and tired. Kids stared at him as he passed, and he looked away. Toby stared back, not caring about anything. Teachers didn't care what he did anyway. He'd never been a star student. In fact, he just went through the motions of school. His dad had never cared about his grades. He just wanted him to pass and graduate. So that's what Toby set out to do. He went to school and did homework he could. Skipped the assignments he didn't make any sense. And he got passing grades. Sometimes barely passing, but credits were credits. And when Toby came in and freshmen and teachers started to discover that Connor was Billings' little brother, they smiled big and asked him questions. Connor was so confident and so conversational. Great at sports. He did his best at schoolwork and his extracurriculars. A real go-getter. Little brother Toby did the same. He ran in the family, right? Wrong. They found out quickly Toby wasn't very outgoing. He never really made friends and joined any clubs. He didn't care to try his best like Connor had. Toby did what he had to do to walk the line up to the senior year. Soon the teachers had stopped being friendly and started being annoyed. See, get looks of disapproval, and just as well as all, he get looks of disinterest and dismissal, like he didn't matter to him. Well, newsflash, the feeling was mutual. Toby detoured from the restroom when he ambled to his locker. There was a kid in the headphones on, messing with his hair in the mirror. He was moving up and down, and Toby used the restroom, and then when he turned around to wash his hands, the kid froze, staring into the mirror, his mouth hung open in shock. Kid pointing to Toby, more likely the shadow behind him. Dang it, must be able to see the shadow in the mirror too. Toby cracked his knuckles. Hey, look. Kid spun around, looked at Toby, frowned, and then looked back in the mirror. So, before Toby could say more, the kid booked it out of the bathroom. He was sure he was running from fire, or more like a monster in the horror movie. Okay, later, Toby muttered, as he washed his hands. Toby had gym class for first period. Then he realized it was perfect to step in the plan. Then his class was scheduled to play basketball. Mr. Dillenhall, a tall, bald man with a bright tracksuit, blew the whistle. He cocked his hip and leaned his clipboard against his stomach. All right, line up for roll call. Toby, dressed in his shorts and a t-shirt, lined up with the other kids. He'd been careful to stay away from any mirrors in the locker room. He just hoped he didn't see that scared kid again. But that's all he needed, a weird rumor to start going around school. A girl walked up and handed Mr. Dillenhall a note. What now? Mr. Dillenhall muttered and skimmed the note. Fine, go have a seat. He rolled up his eyes dramatically before getting roll call. Billings! Toby raised his hand for the Dillenhall to look up his chart. For goodness sake, let's put some effort in today, Billings. Come on, kid. Toby just crossed his arms. Mr. Dillenhall continued taking attendance, occasionally making snide remarks to the other kids. Dillenhall is just a jerk, murmured Tabitha Bing. Kids called her Tab for short. Toby glanced at her when turned away. She was short for an outcast and liked to be a rebel against the system. She had a nose piercing and wore a lot of black. Occasionally she started petitions to get things changed around the school. She had attempted to run for student body president a couple times, but she lost to popular kids. She was always blowing little things out of proportion. In Toby's opinion, since she seemed to be a total opposite of Toby, he usually steered clear of her. You don't talk much, do you, Billings? She asked him. Toby turned to her and this time shrugged. Don't get much to say at school. She lifted her eyebrows and smiled. Unlike me, you mean. You said it, not me. All right, Dillenhall barked. Let's break into your groups and play some basketball. I want to see some serious effort in the court. None of those, oh, my chest hurts, or I twisted my ankle excuses, people. I want real athletes in the court. Let's go. As the groups gathered and started their games, Toby checked out his group in the restroom. He left the gym, glancing over his shoulder. No one was around in the hallway. He detoured to the high school pool, which luckily was free of the period. A strong scent of chlorine filled his nostrils as he scanned the clear water. He couldn't pound the shadow off of him, nor could he scrub it off. Now it's time to see if tense matters. Hope you could swim, he said out loud to the shadow. Or not. He looked around at something heavy, but couldn't find anything in the pool area to weigh him down. He jogged to the weight room. There were some kids in there lifting weights, but Toby managed to sneak in and grab a heavy weight vest. Smacked it at the pool, he slipped into his shoulders and buckled at his chest. He bounced at the balls of his feet and felt the vest as good as weight sink into him in the bottom. Keep him there. He walked back to the pool and stared at the still water. He bit his bottom lip. Not that he had to admit to anyone, but he was a little scared. He could swim, but he wasn't used to holding his breath for a long time. He paced back and forth along the deep end of the pool. Come on, you can do this. What could go wrong? Nothing really. And hey, this could work. You'd be free of the shadow and get on with your life. He finally stopped placing and stood in front of the pool. After a big breath, he pinched his nose and jumped into the deep end. Toby slowly sank to the bottom of the pool. Even though his school claimed it was heated, the water still felt ice cold. With the vest holding him down, he sat at the bottom and waited. He blinked, looking around the pool area. He could feel the chlorine sting his eyes. He wondered how long it would be to hold his breath, and he wondered how the shadow could breathe at all. Did the shadows even breathe? He guessed he'd find out. It has to work, he thought. He could live forever with the darkness at his back. Not only would it drive him crazy, but it would be a constant reminder that he was a failure, a loser. I'd always win, and you always lose like a loser you were born to be. No, he couldn't live like this forever. Too fast. He felt his lungs were squeezing closed. So he pulled up the buckle to release the vest. But this is all the time he could have managed holding his breath. Hopefully it was enough to drown the shadow off him. Then Toby pinched the release. The buckle wouldn't unlatch. He tried to press the buckle and attach again, but it wouldn't let go. A surge of anxiety shot through him. Toby jerked the buckle, trying to pull it apart, and he urged to open his mouth to breathe. Panic clouded him as adrenaline flooded his system. He pulled himself to the floor on his feet, and he waited for the vest to pull him back down. He pushed again, paddling his arms, kicking his legs, trying to swim to the top, but he was too weak from not eating his last couple days. He sank back to the bottom, chewing his vest. No, someone help me, help! There was a splash in the pool above him. Someone swam toward him. Toby couldn't fight it anymore. He opened his mouth and swallowed water, and a person pulled into his vest at the top. Toby kicked his legs and hoped to get the two of them to the top. He broke through the surface, gagging up water. Water and snot dripped from his nostrils. The person helped to hook his arm into the edge of the pool. He coughed and sucked in his much-needed air. His legs burned. His entire body shuddered as each breath. Toby opened his eyes and drenched Tabitha Bing in a pool beside him. He was hanging into the side of the pool in one arm. His eyes stung, and he pressed his fingers into him. What the heck were you doing? She snapped at him. Toby pushed the hair out of his eyes, breathing hard. You wouldn't believe me if I told you. Well, it better be good enough to reason not to report you to the principal, jerkwad. He pulled himself over the top of the ledge. Water streamed from her soaked PE clothes. Toby tried to climb out of Tabitha, pulled his vest, struggling to get him into the platform. His body felt like a dead weight behind his drenched clothes and vest. With both of them helping, they managed to extract Toby from the pool. Toby rolled to his back, and Tabitha fell to the platform beside him. You're for a skinny guy, you weigh a ton. He got to her feet and looked down at him. Water drops streamed down his arms and legs. Meet me at the soccer field at lunch, or I'm going straight to the office to report you. Toby coughed. It's not really your business. I just saved your life. I'm making it my business. So which is it? You meeting me, or am I going straight to the office? Toby lifted a hand and let it drop. Yeah, fine, I'll be there. It wasn't trying to hurt myself, Toby said grudgingly to Tabitha. They sat together at the soccer field bleachers during lunch break. It was a nice day, but the breeze kept pushing clouds over the sun every so often, making it a little cold. Toby was a little chilled at the pool experience, so he huddled inside of his sweatshirt. Tabitha's hair was black and pulled away from his freckled face. Normally she wore makeup, but the pool water must have washed it all off. He was just eating a sandwich that smelled like peanut butter. Why the weighted vest? It was trying to stay down long enough as I could, but the buckle got stuck, and I couldn't release it and swim out fast enough. Toby cracked his knuckles. So, thanks for helping me out. Oh, you mean you're saving your life thing? She grabbed the hand. All in a day's work. You're a pretty strong swimmer. My parents always said I was born to swim, and I've been in junior lifeguard camp forever, she shrugged. Why did you want to stay down at the bottom pool for so long anyway? Toby shook his head. You couldn't tell her why he was trying to drown a shadow attached to his back, and that didn't work. When he went to the locker room to change, she saw in the mirror that he was still there behind him, more intense and scarier than before. Here, have some of my lunch. You look like you need it, she said, handing himself a sandwich. You put his hand to his guts. Now, my stomach is upset. It's just some bread and peanut butter. Try it. Toby accepted a half sandwich and took a small bite. It was gooey in his mouth. He was able to get it down. It seemed like he could keep it down as well. He realized the relief. Why did you follow me? Toby asked her. He shook her head and shrugged. You looked, I don't know, like you could use a friend. Toby didn't have anything to say to that. What does meeting a friend look like? You couldn't believe me if I told you, she said to him. What? That was about you said at the pool. You wouldn't believe me if I told you. What do you mean by that? Toby wasn't sure why, but he had a surge to throw caution into the wind and tell her everything. He wanted to tell someone because it would keep all the stuff stressed him out. Yeah, Reggie could actually see the shadow, but Toby wouldn't tell Reggie everything. Maybe it was time to get it off his chest. Staring down at her half sandwich, he started to tell Tabitha about hide and seek, how he cheated the game and broke it, how the shadow was now attached to him and he could seem to get rid of it. Or for some reason, he felt that couldn't handle bizarre truth. That he wouldn't run off and tell someone he was crazy. It was somewhat liberating to finally unload the entirety of the crazy secret to someone else. He found himself exhaling in relief Who knew keeping such a secret was so exhausting? That sounds completely and utterly terrifying, she said, and looked at him. I can see it. Toby nodded. I can only see it in the mirror. For real? She nodded. Yeah, you believe me? It actually sounds too crazy to be made up, so I know to believe it, and that's all it makes it matters to me. People deal with their own darkness in different shapes and forms. Okay, so she didn't completely believe him, but Toby understood. He can't even believe it, and she looked every day in the mirror, and it could relief to get it all over, and for her not to tell him he was crazy. And you thought you could drown it? And how'd that work out for you? I'm just trying everything I can. It didn't work anyway. Have you told your mom or dad? Just my dad. Tried to tell him and my brother, but they didn't understand what I was talking about. They couldn't see it either. But you told me. Toby sighed. I don't know why. She nodded. Sometimes it's easier to tell a stranger. I get it. So why did you cheat the game? Toby picked up the sandwich. Have you ever felt like you're never good at anything? Well, yeah, you can't be good at everything. No, he stared at her. Good at anything at all, like a total loser. She looked at her head. No, and you're not a loser. His lips curved in a sarcastic smile. Right. Have you not seen the way the teachers look at me? Like Dylan Hall? I'm not worth their time. Look, life is what you make it. You can't think like that. I don't think like that. I feel it. Doesn't matter anyway. I wanted to win, and I thought the only way I could was by cheating. It was stupid. She didn't say anything to that, and instead pulled a small circular mirror from her bag. Okay, let's see it. Slowly shook her head, scooted away from her. No way. She waved the mirror. Come on, why not? It's bad. Really bad. You don't even understand how bad. She stared at him. I can handle it. He stared at her with wide eyes. I can't even handle it. Okay, fine, but you don't have to show me. She slipped the mirror back. So, what are you going to do about it? Take her to the soccer field. He wasn't really seeing it. I'm going to beat it. What else trust do I have? They sat a few minutes in silence before Tabitha said, let me see your phone. He glanced at her. Why? Just let me see it, she said, annoyed. Tabitha began her phone. She called a number, and her phone rang. And then she typed something in his phone and handed it back. I added myself as a contact. You know, if you ever need me to save you again. Toby actually cracked a smile. Okay, thanks. Toby went home after school. Usually he's starving by the time he strolled in the kitchen, but today he felt different. Nervous, agitated. He definitely wanted a serious loss of appetite. He grabbed a banana, and then his phone alerted him with a text from Tabitha. Hey, I know an excellent counselor you can talk to. No way. Okay, fine. Toby shook his head and clicked off the phone, but he couldn't help smiling a little. Tabitha was kind of cool. She took everything he told her and didn't look at him weird. It was cool to have a new friend. Not that he'd tell her that. Toby walked and a few kids at school, and he didn't tell them friends. He used to have a best friend named Manny, but he moved away with his family, and Toby was in middle school. Since then, Toby was kind of shut himself off from the other kids. Maybe it was time to open up again. Just to keep his energy, he attempted to eat a banana. He got about half of it down before he felt gagging. He was head jerked up, and he knocked around the side of the door. Who could that be? He answered the door, a clean-cut police officer with brown skin, short, buzzed hair, and a mustache. Toby swallowed hard. He could still see the half-eaten banana in his hand. I'm looking for Toby Billings, he said. That's me. Toby adjusted the beanie in his head. I'm Officer Jimmins, Toby. I'm here to break in and vandalism at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza and Games. Dan Harbour stated that you worked there and that you were on shift that evening. He gave me your address. Uh-huh. Officer Jimmins had a small notebook and a pen in his hand. Can you talk me through the shift that evening? Toby looked at his banana. Well, I vacuumed the carpet of the main party room and arcade, swept up the bathrooms, wiped down the tables, put up chairs, picked up trash on the floor, my regular stuff. What time did you end your shift? Mr. Harper said. You must have forgotten to write that in your timesheet that time you left. Toby scratched his neck with a free hand. Yeah, I was off at 11 p.m. I must have forgotten to sign out. Yeah, because I ran out. Officer Jimenez wrote something down in the notebook. What time did you see the game before it was vandalized? Well, after closing. Wait. Would you not have said that? So around 10 p.m.? He nodded. Yep, I think so. There were no signs of a break-in, Toby. Did you notice anyone hanging around who wasn't supposed to be there after closing? Blew out of breath, shook his head slowly. Nope, no one. Same thing I told Dan. I checked the stalls in the play area where the kids tend to hide. Officer Jimenez looked directly into Toby's eyes. Toby, I want you to be completely honest with me. Yeah, okay. Did you vandalize the game hide and seek? What? I have to ask. You were the last one to see the game. You were working in the restaurant near the time of the crime. Everyone else was in the kitchen. You didn't sign out at the end of your shift. Maybe you were in a hurry because you vandalized the game. Maybe you were upset with your boss or something. You have seen it happen before, and I didn't want to get in trouble, so you ran. Is that how it happens? That we come back. No, it wasn't me. Yes, it was. Okay, he said sternly. That's all for now. Let Mr. Harper know if you remember anything else, if you want to tell him anything. Yeah, okay. Officer nodded his head. Have a good day. And Toby nodded in return. He closed the door, still tense. He wondered if the officer believed him. It sounded like that. It sounded like he thought Toby did it. He wondered if he was going to get caught. Toby scrubbed the hand down his face. There was too many things to focus on. He was trying to do his best to figure out how to free the shadow. Oh, he also had to worry if he was ever going to get caught for breaking hide and seek. One thing at a time, please. He walked through the kitchen and threw a half-eaten banana in the garbage, then detoured to the front room. Besides his dad's recliner and a small tray table with a lighter and an ashtray, he grabbed the lighter and flicked it, but it was dim light. He shook the lighter and flicked it again. This time it flamed lit. The bottom of his lip staring at the small flame. Maybe. He released the igniter, then shook his head, muttering, "No freaking way." He tossed the lighter back in the tray. What was the cop at the door? Toby jumped to the whirlwind toward his dad. "Dad, you scared me. I didn't know how you're home. Where's your car?" "Getting a tune-up. I took the day off." "Why the cop?" "What do you want with you?" Toby cracked his knuckles. There was a break-in at Freddy's. Just routine. Questioning the employees who were there that night." "Are you sure that's all it was?" Toby blinked. "Yeah, why wouldn't it be? You're kind of trouble with breaking the law." "No, Dad, but he was in trouble." Dad nodded. He sat in his recliner and turned to his television. Toby walked away. And then he turned around and stared at his dad. He wanted to tell him the truth. He wanted to tell him that he cheated the game, destroyed it in anger. That the game had somehow attached to him and followed him home. He wanted to tell him that his dad could help him, so he could do what parents are supposed to do and help their kids in any way they're in trouble. It was just so the emotions of life and everything was okay when nothing was okay. Not to pretend like he never had a wife, and Toby O'Connor never had a mom. He was pretending he had two happy sons who never called each other's name and fought with their fists. As if life was all about working for a paycheck and watching sports. "Dad?" "Yeah, Tobes?" Dad said, not taking his eye off the television. "Why did Mom leave us?" Dad didn't move his head from the screen. He didn't even flinch at the unexpected question. Toby wondered, when was the last time he ever saw his dad expression any emotion, other than excitement or disgust from watching sports? His dad was pretty much mellow type. Toby had never seen him seriously angry other than to yell at the refs on television. Then he told Connor and Toby something. He was very calm and rational. Maybe it was a bonus for having a parent who didn't yell or ever scold you. A minute passed when he waited for an answer from Dad. Then 2 minutes. After 5 minutes, he realized he wasn't going to get an answer. He didn't know if it was because Dad didn't have one. He didn't feel Toby could handle the truth. Toby left the room and got ready for work. Toby kept up his regular routine and went an hour before the shift and played games at the arcade. When he arrived, he noticed the hide-and-seek door propped open and with a sign stated out of order. Curious about hide-and-seek, he slid his hands inside his pockets and walked inside the game room. Then there was a tall, skinny guy standing in the control box. He had a laptop in his arm and seemed to be rebooting the game. His hair was blonde and spiky. He wore thick framed glasses. "Hey," Toby said to the guy, "how's it going?" "All right," he said, eyeing him. "You know the game's out of order. You're supposed to be in here." Toby cleared his throat. "Yeah, well, I work here. I gotta start my shift soon." The tech guy seemed relaxed a little. "Well, truthfully, then, I'm doing so good. Hide and seek here won't reboot. And it says it's rebooting, but once it starts again, it goes back to previous game every time. It must be some kind of wiring issue." "It's stuck?" "Yeah, stuck in some game mode with the last player. Some kid named Toby." All the blood stream rushed out of Toby's head. He felt faint. "Really? Can't you just shut it down and restart it?" "Normally, yeah, but something's off. I'm telling you, it won't stop the game. Never seen anything like it. Must be a defunct. Dan ain't gonna like to hear that, not after he found out whoever tore up the game also took the rabbit." "What?" "Bonnie the rabbit. The character, the black cutout rabbit, the game is gone. Whoever messed up the game took the rabbit right off the wall as some kind of souvenir. Can't believe it. Probably stuck it in the room and threw darts at it or something. Kids these days, no offense." "Yeah, none taken." Then the tech guy shut his laptop. "Well, gonna give Dan more bad news. I've asked him to put a camera from the beginning, but he's always dishing out a boatload for this game. Anyway, I'd stay clear of him today if I were you, kid. Maybe he shouldn't have ever stalled this game. Yeah. Anyways, Dan's a good guy. I just want the best for the business. Give the family some entertainment. A place for to have fun. This is how he repaid. Sucks, you know." When the tech guy left, Toby quickly strode through the kitchen. Smells pepperoni and melted cheese. He walked to the single-employee bathroom and closed and locked the door behind him. He leaned his hands on the other side of the pedestrian sink, staring at a small mirror in the wall. He stared into the darkness of his back, and all anger and frustration he had inside him. He hadn't taken the rabbit cut out of the game. No, he decided on his own to leave with Toby. And Toby stared hard at the shadow, two eyes open and blinked at him. Toby lurched back and yelped. His heart pounded like a drum. He grabbed the door, trying to open it, but because he was staring at the horror in the mirror, he forgot he locked it. His eyes took his eyes off the shadow for a second and locked the handle and whipped open the door. He rushed out and ran into Dan. Toby stopped short, breathing hard. Dan?" Dan gave him a weird look. "You alright, kid?" Toby cracked his knuckles, trying to stake it from his boss. "Yeah, why?" "You look nervous about something." Toby adjusted his meaning. No, I'm fine, really." His face heated because he knew it was far from fine. Dan eyed him some more. "Okay, kid, whatever you say." Then he walked to his office. Toby staggered against the bathroom door. His dog signaled a new text. It was from Tabitha again. "What about an herbalist? They can give you stuff to calm your nerves." "No way." "Well, just an idea. I'm here at Freddy's. Come meet me in the arcade." Surprised, Toby clicked off the phone and he turned to the arcade to find Tabitha, who was peering over a kid's shoulder. He played a game. Reggie was right beside her, eating pink cotton candy on a stick. Toby stopped at her side, rubbing his damp palms on his shirt. "What are you doing here?" He was already nervous, but it made him kind of even more nervous to have her at the scene of the crime when he had confessed to her. And he told her the secrets. He'd been in some separate game every day. He didn't know how much were Freddy's, but now the separate worlds were colliding. It felt weird and uncomfortable. Tabitha smiled and she looked around the arcade. This is a cool place. I've never actually been here. My parents aren't into places like these. It's a family pizza restaurant. She shrugged. We're vegans. He looked back to Toby, her smile dropping away. Hey, are you okay? Yeah, fine. Who's your friend, Toby? Reggie butted in. Hey, I'm Reggie. I recognize Reggie. Tabitha. Reggie looked at Toby and lifted his eyebrow a couple of times in an annoying way. You come here often? He asked her. No, first time. Toby frowned at Reggie. He knew Tabitha wasn't regular. He was up to hit with him. He took Tabitha by the elbow and guided her away. Over his shoulder, he watched Reggie keep pointing to Toby, then down his back. Then he made a gesture like he was a huge, and then a scary face, and then he mouthed very slowly, shadow bigger. Toby rolled his eyes, and then asked Tabitha, what are you doing here? I want to see the game. Toby shook his head. No way, can't. It's out of order. No one's supposed to be in there. Can I at least see the outside of it? Please, I'm curious. Toby sighed. He didn't think it was much of the bad idea, but he felt it was, didn't let her see it. She'd just keep on it until she got her way. Fine, then you better go. Okay, and look, I trust you with this. Don't make me regret it. I won't, I promise. She crossed her heart with her finger. Toby led her to the arcade at the door, hide and seek. She crossed his arms, and then she studied the shadow rabbit and the logo. Seems so innocent, but you know something's dark and scary for a friend. She looked at Toby. How do you feel? Like it's always there, and I'm never going to get rid of it. Toby shifted uncomfortably. That's why he always liking her stuff like that. You'll beat this, Toby. I'm making a list of ideas. You like the ones I've been texting you about. I'm going to help you figure out how to solve this. We're going to get you out of that other place. Toby just stared at her, not knowing what to say, other than why. Why did she want to help him? Why did she even care? He wasn't sure he wanted to help anyway. She wasn't sure if he totally trusted anyone the way. It must have been a long time since he trusted anyone. He learned getting let down pretty much sucked. He adjusted his beanie inside. Whatever you want to do. Toby was running from someone, or something. It was dark night. The pale light of the full moon washed across the scene. Stars sprinkled above. Trees and bushes loomed over an area surrounding a small playground as his heartbeats were running a mile a minute. His breaths were coming out of his mouth at a pace he was certain he couldn't maintain. He hid behind a tree, trying to catch his breath. Something dark and fast torpedoed past him, so fast, Toby's hair moved as his brushes wind. Holy cow, Toby whispered. It was a shadow. It was something moved faster than his eyes could follow. How was he going to escape something so quick? He launched himself into off the tree and running by a grocery store or the school. The streets were empty of cars and people. He spotted the police station up ahead. He had to get there and get help. He shoved through the door. Someone please help me. There's something after me, please. But then he looked around. There's no officers. Hello? Where is everyone? Come on, I need help here. But the place was deserted, as if everyone had just walked away at the same time. Toby jerked his head toward the doorway. He felt the darkness coming. He wasn't sure how, but he knew it was getting closer. He whipped his head left and right, and his nerves scrambled throughout his body. He spotted an empty desk and a dove behind it, and squatting underneath it, pulling his knees to his chin. He heard the doors to the police station burst open. Toby started to sound and squeezed his eyes shut. Please don't find me, please don't find me. The shadow raced past the desk. Toby heard a clank of the jail cell doors, finding it empty. The darkness roared with him and timber and 1,000 angry beasts. Monstrous, terrifying. Toby bit his bottom lip in order to scream himself. His entire body started to shake. The shadow rushed to the desk again. And Toby sat for a moment, and then wanted to get some distance between him and the shadow. He licked his dry lips. I think it's gone. He slowly crawled out of his hiding space, and then he stood. He froze in horror. The shadow reared itself before him, with darkness crackling out of energy. The shadow's narrow eyes peered down at Toby. Toby stepped back and the shadow moved closer. Stay away from me, Toby shouted. But the shadow continued to lurch closer, and nearer to the guy, the bigger it became, until it loomed over. Toby was like a mountain of unforgiving darkness. The shadow's power was creating a vortex of energy that blew through the room. Toby's hair flew back, and his clothes flattened against his body. Toby threw his hands over his head, and darkness crashed down, swallowing and surrounding him. Anger, despair, fear seemed to fill him up. He swung his fists in terror and rage, trying to find it, but his arms just swung through air. The shadow devoured him. It leached through his eyes, through his nostrils. Toby shrieked, swallowing the darkness in his throat. Toby woke up screaming, "No!" He jumped out of bed, fell to the floor. Darkness was all around him. He launched himself backward, the entire body shaking. He hit the cold wall, and he realized he wasn't just home. It wasn't real. It was just a nightmare, but it seemed so real. It was one of the worst nightmares of his life. His eyes stung. He started to cry, his shoulders shaking because he had learned one thing from a nightmare. The shadow was so much stronger than him, and it would want to win at all costs. He wiped his leaky nose, and he followed with frustration. He hated this. He hated the shadow. He wanted to get it gone. He reached his back and clawed it. "Get it off me." He scratched, he scraped. "Leave me alone." He tore his shirt and dug into his skin, and you could tear his shadow away. He clawed and slashed with his own hand, digging into his skin. "I want you gone." He felt the burn of scratches, his drips of blood. "Just leave me alone," he screamed, and cried some more, hurling to the ball of the floor. But he knew the shadow was still there, that it wouldn't leave. He would sense it as if it were a part of him now. "Dude, Tobes, what's up with you lately?" Connor asked when Toby walked into the kitchen. Connor stood at the kitchen counter, ready, eating 2 breakfast sandwiches. He looked at Toby with wide eyes as seeing him all the way he'd never seen him before. Are you still sick? Maybe we should get Dad to take you to a doctor or something. Just leave me alone, Connor. There's no way Connor could handle what is really wrong with him. Tobes, I'm serious. You need help. I can call someone if there's something wrong with you. You walk around all freaking zombie. You're barely eating, and what you're not whining self is weird. You're really weird, so it makes you weirder than usual. Shut up. Toby made a face and shook his head. Don't act like you care. Connor beat his chest with a sandwich. What? What do you mean? I care. Whatever. You only care for yourself and how you think you're the best at everything. That's not true. And just because I'm good at stuff, a lot of stuff, it's not you have to get bent about. Toby made a small laugh. Every day of your life, you tell me, well, you're the best, and I'm nothing, that I'm a loser. Connor didn't have much to say to that. He just said, okay, well, I'm pretty close to being the best. Toby's eyes widened. No, you're not, Connor. You're not the best, and I'm not the best. And you only think you're the best because for some reason you and Dad think you're so great, so pathetic. It's more like it. Connor rolled his eyes. Is this about Dad, isn't it? You're jealous? Toby jerked back. What? You're jealous because Dad and I spend a lot of time watching sports. Dad always invites you to watch with us. You know that? You don't want to hang out with us. Instead, barricading yourself in your room. Toby swallowed hard. You don't even know what you're talking about, so stop. Whatever, Toby. You know it's true. But I'm not going to argue with you when you're practically ready to kneel over at any time. Do you even know how stupid you always sound without being the best at everything? There has to be someone around here better than you. You know that, right? Someone on his shoulder. Whatever, Tobes. Listen, I told you, I'm not going to. You listen. Toby pointed a finger at Connor, ticked off and tired of all the dumb things you came out of his mouth. You just so you know, there's a new game of Freddy's. I was playing it right now, and I'm winning. Yeah, it was half truth. Toby was still playing his hide and seek game with a shadow. He was just taking the game home with him. He was pretty sure the rabbit was definitely winning, though. But Connor didn't have to know that. Connor tossed a sandwich on the plate and crossed his arms. Oh, the truth finally comes out. There's a new game of Freddy's, and you didn't want to tell me so that you could try to beat me at something. Newsflash, little brother. Doesn't count until I've played it. And once I do, I'll beat it and take my rightful spot at the top. Toby smiled as his idea dawned on him. Sure. Connor smiled on his frown. Sure what? Sure you'll beat me. Toby walked out of the kitchen and down the hallway. Of course I will, little brother. Connor followed him. He always had to get a last word. That's the reality. Toby walked to the bathroom, and he turned toward his brother, crossed his arms. Connor stood outside the door. So what's the game called? Hide and seek. Perfect. Sounds like a kid's game, so it'll be easy. I'll go there after work tonight and snag the top spot. Not a problem. No, you won't, Toby told him. Connor stared at Toby. Why not? Toby nodded toward the mirrors, finally wanting his brother to see the truth. He wanted to see the awful shadow that couldn't leave him alone. Toby had been the ultimate player being hunted by the shadow, and he wanted Connor to finally know. He looked at Connor, because I'm still playing, and I'm going to win if that's the last thing I do. He pointed his finger at Connor. I'm going to beat you, Connor. And that's the way you see it. I'll be the winner. You'll be a freaking loser. I'm going to be the best day of my life. You hear me? The best day of my life. Connor didn't look at the mirror. He just stared at Toby with wide eyes. I see. Then he simply shook his head and raised his hands as if surrendering. You know what, Tobes? Fine. Go ahead. Beat me. I want you to. Toby mouth up, dropped open. What? I gave up being the best. It's getting old. Fighting with you all the time. I mean, dude, have you looked at yourself lately? I really looked at yourself in the mirror. You look sick and exhausted. If you're still fighting with me, like it's all that matters in the world instead of your health, this whole competition thing has gotten way out of hand, and it's time to stop. So if it takes you winning and me losing, then I'm done. Toby wanted to know what to say. Anyways, I gotta get to work. If you need to stay home, do it. Tell Dad that you're just really sick. I need some rest, little brother. Connor looked away. Toby watched Connor walk down the hallway and disappeared, then heard the front door shut. Connor didn't care to be the best anymore. After all his games, all the competitions, all the fighting for years, and he had practically conceded to Toby in a daze, Toby turned toward the bathroom mirror. Toby stared at the mirror, himself in the mirror. Really started to see himself. The skin was paler than he ever seen it. His cheeks were sunken in. His eyes looked like dark pits in his face. He finally moved his gaze to the shadow. Clawing and scratching his skin must have really ticked it off. It was now grown in size, but his eyes stared at him with chilling glare. Then something moved within his face as when he noticed the shadow had formed a mouth. A row of spiking teeth flashed into a smile. Toby's eyes widened in shock, and he heard the pant in a short breath. The shadow radiated fear and anger, and just like a dream, shadow loomed behind him, a predator waiting to strike. Toby felt the surge to cower in a ball on the floor. His shadow was too powerful, too strong, and Toby knew it was too tired and too weak to fight it anymore. Why are you doing this to me? He yelled in the mirror. I just want this done. Over. Exhausted, Toby leaned his elbows to the bathroom counter, placing his face in his hands. Silent tears streamed down his cheeks. He finally accepted he was never going to be rid of the shadow. It was going to stay attached to him forever. He tried everything he could think of to get it off. Nothing seemed to hurt the darkness. The more he tried, the bigger and stronger, the more horrifying it became. The worse made him feel. Maybe the shadow had attached him so easily because he'd been in a bad place emotionally. He'd been wrapped up in some crazy competition with his brother all these years. Nothing anyone did made him a loser. It had been his own sense of competition and messed up beliefs. True, jealousy in Connor and Dad's relationship made him think about himself like an outcast. Like He didn't belong, even in his own home. But if he was being honest, he was the one who had to slowly separate himself further and further from his dad and brother because he wanted to win. All these years, he wanted to be the winner, just like Connor. But not none of that seemed to matter compared to the torture he endured in the shadow of the past few days. He raised his gaze to the shadow and took cue of his brother. Okay, he said, you win. You beat me. I give up. Whatever, I don't care anymore. At this moment, Toby blinked as he felt the heaviness in his back lighten. Surprised, he slowly stood up straight in the mirror. The shadow was still there, but it had gone back to the size he had first seen it in his bedroom. His eyes and mouth had disappeared into darkness, and all he felt was a little trickle in the middle of his back once again. With that realization, something clicked inside him. A veil had lifted. He saw everything, sudden clarity. Just like Toby, the shadow only wanted to win. Toby walked out of the bathroom to change. His son felt rain. He heard the screen and read tap of his name before answering. Hello? Hey, how are you? Do you need any more saving yet? He asked. Nope. Meet me before school behind the bleachers. I have some more ideas to run about the shadow. No, I'm not going to school today. Why? What's happened? Toby rubbed his face. Look, I'm really ready to end this once and for all. It's time. What do you mean, Toby? Just don't worry about it. I know what I have to do. What? What do you have to do? Does it involve Reiki healing? Because that's the top of my list. What? Toby shook his head. No, gotta go. Tab, if I forget to tell you, you're a good friend. I'll see you tomorrow. Wait. Toby clicked the call. Then he turned off his phone. It was time to go back to Freddy Fazbear's Pizza and games. It was to finish hide and seek. Toby walked into Freddy Fazbear's Pizza and games with a cool determination. A deadly calm had come over him. He finally knew what he had to do to finish this. It had come to him suddenly. Then he cheated hide and seek, and the shadow rabbit followed him home. How the technician said the game was still in play. It couldn't reboot because Toby had to finish the game. The darkness wanted to concede because Toby was cheated. It was all clear to him now. He had been so fixated on the fact that the shadow was on him that he didn't focus on the end game. It wasn't like the Ultimate Battle Warrior where you beat each other senseless. This is a strategy game. The toughest one he had ever played in his life. He walked to the restaurant. There were only a few little kids playing in the arcade since it was a school day. He walked through the arcade, and of course Reggie was there. Toby realized Reggie was always there, and he wondered if the kid had a home. This time Reggie just stared at Toby as if he couldn't take his eyes off the shadow. Guess you never got rid of the shadow, Reggie said. At least it's small again. Dude, last time I saw you was massive. I have a complete the hide and seek game. Reggie blinked. I thought it was broken. It's in play, and I'm gonna finish it. That's the game that started all this, but you're gonna do it when it's all busted up. I'll figure it out. Reggie nodded and held out his fist. Respect, dude. The fire's back within you. You do what you gotta do. Toby tapped his fist to Reggie's, then walked past him. Hey, Reggie said, and Toby turned it back around. Can I have that girl's Tabitha's digits? Toby just shook his head and made his way to the game, stopping at the door of hide and seek. The out of order sign stood tapped at the door. It was locked, so Toby put a coin and opened it and entered the room. There were fresh white patches on the wall where Toby had busted through the holes. All the broken pieces were gone on the floor. A small barricade was completely torn down. There was no new cutouts on the wall. The pigs were still bare. Taking a breath, Toby went to the control box and turned on the power. Instrumental music blared through the speakers. After he completely booted up, Toby saw his name still play. Toby dug out the peppermint toothpick from his pocket and slipped it in his mouth. He adjusted the beanie on his head. A voice bellowed in the speakers. Are you ready to continue, or do you forfeit the game? Toby's finger hovered over the forfeit button. Once he pushed the bottom, he knew everything would go back to normal. The shadow would be gone, and the rabbit would have turned to hide and seek. He would go back to his life and being controlled his own body, and he'd be free. Toby hit the bottom of the lip, and familiar feeling spread over him. You see, he couldn't really get over the fact that the shadow attached to him. The shadow played himself the ultimate cheat on Toby and making himself hurt himself, but making him believe he was going crazy just to do a freaking game. The shadow had wanted to win, and Toby had let it. Toby shut his eyes, trembling with anger. You thought you could beat me, he said. You thought you could turn on cheating back on me? Well, surprise for you, I'm not a loser. You're the loser. He opened his eyes, punched on the continue button. In heated determination, he turned his back and parked wall. He felt his shadow's anger slam over him. The jaw tight, Toby rushed backward toward the pigs where the trees were supposed to hang. He rammed himself onto the sticks. The pig stabbed through his back. Toby's body stiffened as he gasped. His toothpick dropped from his mouth. He felt a shadow release. Dark energy faded away from him. It ever existed. I won, he whispered as blood dripped from his mouth. He smiled right before his eyes gently closed. Instrumental music restarted through the speakers. Welcome to Hide and Speak. Enter your name and try to find Bonnie. And let's begin.